And in the beginning of everything they ask for a voice of the world, calling him a hero. But the boy seems quite dejected by the situation, and in that those hands keep trying to reach the boy in every way, asking him to save them. But the boy starts to get angry and tremble, calling his mother, saying that people are saying he is a hero, wondering why he has to be one. And his mother just smiles at the boy as he says he doesn't want to be a hero anymore, because it is very difficult. But his mother puts her hand on the boy's shoulders, speaking to her son, saying that he is the hope of that world. And then she tells him to stop looking like a weakling and die like a hero, throwing him back into those hands that cry out for salvation. And in that, the now older boy wakes up in another corner, badly injured and thrown to the ground, and the system presents him as awakened like a dream. And he gets up in a horrible and unpretentious place where he was going to be able to rest a little. But then, when he looks down, he sees several monsters, and notices that they will not let him rest, and says that they even managed to get together, cursing those things. And then his current magic power is 97, and his magic power rank is 9, and the monsters are gathering to attack him, and Proto watches each of them jumping from above and passing through everyone, killing several with a single attack, and ending up completely injured at the end of the battle. But then the boss arrives praising the hero of the humans, and that thing appears near the protagonist, full of sea, and says that it is a tempting power, and says that he, Fafnir, recognizes him to become part of himself, and says that he will defeat him and make his power his own, hitting the protagonist. And then he receives a kick and is thrown away, becoming even worse than he already was. And so the boy's exhaustion reaches 98% while he becomes desperate, wondering if this is the end, and questions being the hero, because it is Rizito, and he remembers his mother telling him to protect humanity. And seeing now how things are, he could only smile ironically, because he couldn't protect anyone. Besides that, he continues to hate the title of hero, and that Fafnir goes after him to deliver the final blow, while the protagonist thinks he doesn't understand anything in the end. But then he wakes up in another corner at another time with some people looking at him. Then those people call him smiling, saying that they swore he had died because out of nowhere he fainted. And the protagonist doesn't understand anything when he opens his eyes, not knowing where he is, and gets up with everyone, and everyone is scared because he looks like a ghost. And in that, the boy continues without understanding, looking at himself and also looking at the sky, very different from that post-apocalyptic sky where he was. And in that, another boy next to him also keeps looking, and the protagonist wonders if he is dreaming, because he swore that Fafnir was there, and everyone wonders what he's talking about, saying that he's already woken up, it's time to get back to work. And the protagonist is happy that they're alive, but the boys tell him to shut up please, preparing to punch in the direction of the protagonist. But he sees that hand, quickly takes it out of his way, and hits the blonde's face with everything, throwing the Maluho walks away disoriented. And everyone gets scared, and the protagonist apologizes, saying he did it out of reflex. But everyone wonders if he is on drugs, and says he really is dead, calling him Surian. But then another one says that the police are coming, and he gets pissed that they are coming now, that he was punched, and tells Surian that he better show up at school tomorrow. And the protagonist doesn't understand anything, wondering why they are calling him Kim Surian, because his name is Kim Soong. But when he gets up, he continues to wonder what is happening, but notices that there is a phone there, and until there, realizing that that phone belongs to one of them, then he says that they should get a better one, because it is that very archaic thing. But he notices something that draws even more attention, wondering who is that on the phone. So the protagonist says that in 2042 the world was destroyed, and after dungeons began to appear all over the world, the monsters that came out of the dungeons, which had not been completed, began to invade reality, and thanks to the phenomenon known as outbreak, peace on Earth was mercilessly destroyed. In return, the people who received power to counterattack that humidity also appeared, and they called these people awakened, and he was one of them. And even after all humans died, he was left alone to face the monsters until the end, and as the last survivor of humanity, and also the strongest awakened. So he is in an interview now with his mother asking what his name is. And the protagonist almost gets his name wrong by saying the old name Songgim, but remembers that now he is Kim So-hyun, and the interviewer asks him his date of birth, and the boy already brings it up. So he asks how old he is, because the boy takes too long to answer, but he also doesn't know how to speak. Looking at the calendar and noticing that it is 2022, and he thinks that if he is not mistaken, it should be 2042 now, and it is 20 years before. And so the interviewer tells him to answer quickly, and the boy almost makes a mistake saying that he is 20, but says that he is 19 years old. And the interviewer thinks that he will just end this soon, since he seems to be just a student. So he asks where the boy lives. But upon learning that the boy does not know this information, he asks if he does not find it strange that he only knows his name and age. And the boy does not even have much to say. And the protagonist says that he swore that he had been killed by Fafnir. But in this, the interviewer asks if he thinks it is right to be wandering around, since his final exams are coming up. So the protagonist thinks that he is dreaming, or this is some magic from Fafnir, remembering the suit he received from that thing, thinking that it cannot be a dream, but still thinks that those feelings are false, and he returned to the past, but questions himself where is your real body. Kim Sung-in, wondering what he needs to do to get his body back, because there's a lot he doesn't know. But then the interviewer loses his patience with the boy, wondering what complaining will change, saying that his mother said she'll be home soon, so he should just go home with her, telling him to stop wandering around and stay home, and even more so, that construction site was in the news recently because of that. Then he should stay away, and the protagonist finds what he said strange. But then his mother appears there screaming, smiling, asking why he is at the police station and what happened to the boy's face, asking if he is okay. And the protagonist wonders who this is, wondering if she is the mother of that body. So she takes him out of jail and takes him home, wondering if he forgot his home address, thinking that they recently moved, but asks if he is very stressed these days, and he says it is because he still doesn't know this neighborhood very well, but she finds it strange, because he is speaking formally differently than usual, and he questions if he is serious, wondering what he is talking about with that woman he has never seen, wondering if he should first apologize for causing problems for her, but then she takes a tissue to be able to wash her son's face first, because he was beaten. Then notices that apparently the kids are bullying him at school, asking if they did it again, questioning when they will stop it, saying that the boy can tell her if they do it again, saying that next time she won't let it pass. And the protagonist finds this interaction she's having with her very strange. But the mother stops there, saying that there's no one in the park that day, wondering if something happened, and the protagonist notices that, now that he's stopped to think, it's very quiet around there anyway. Then a wolf appears there, behind him, and this morning, asks if he's not going to come ahead, and the boy says he is going, until he hears something, and that wolf charges at him, almost hitting them both, but the protagonist steps in front, and the wolf only takes the material he's carrying, so he thinks that the wolf there isn't a wolf, and he's sure that animal is a werewolf. So what the police officer was talking about a moment ago was about an outbreak, and he thinks that 2020 was the time when outbreaks started to become more common, so it's quite possible a monster appears in the middle of the city, and the two wolves appear there to go after it, and he thinks that the problem is to fight that beast. So first he thinks about finding something he can use as a weapon, grabbing the umbrella that was there, but his mother is surprised that there is a monster there, saying that the news said they dealt with the monsters, but the protagonist tells her not to move, and he thinks that he is not used to that body, but just one of those should be easy, so that wolf goes after him, and the boy manages to injure him using the umbrella, making the wolf miss in his attack, but the wolf gets more and more pissed off, going after him again, and ends up biting the protagonist's umbrella, fighting hard with him, and he notices that the attack was very superficial, thinking that he cannot use his power against a low-level monster like that, and says that he should have been destroyed in one blow, and if his body was the original body, or if at least that body was of an awakened one. But in that moment another wolf arrives to be able to join him, and he is surprised. But it turns out that his mother comes in front, giving a shoulder to the wolf, and not letting him reach her son, and with her giving that shoulder to that thing, the protagonist is surprised, while he is fighting against the other wolf, complaining about what his mother is doing, because she falls to the ground and breaks all over. And he notices that she saved him, wondering why, then takes away the power from the light. There is none. He punches the dog and goes after his mother, yelling at her, then asks why she did that, because it is dangerous, and she talks to Saryon, saying that his mother is fine, and he should run ahead to save himself. And the protagonist, noticing how determined she is to save her son, is very angry, and the intention to kill seeps from his body, and he turns around talking to the dogs, asking if they want to die, and they, noticing how dangerous the boy is, simply disappear from there. Then he says he will not let them escape, getting up and falling soon after from exhaustion, after seeing that they disappeared, and he becomes much calmer, because that shitty body would not be able to do anything, and he says he is so weak that he can't even run after them, and he thinks that he should go home first. But then his back, which was already not good, gets even worse. However, before taking his mother home, he thinks of something, wondering where the house, until he manages to get there, and he thinks he almost didn't make it, and it was by luck that the wallet had his address, and if it weren't for that, they would have gotten lost for good. And his mother continues talking to herself in her sleep, talking to Saryon, telling him not to worry, because his mother is there, asking the boy to run away quickly. And the protagonist, seeing this, becomes even more moved, because she pushed her body to the limit just to protect him, and seeing that, the system reacts with him, and the protagonist realizes that that body is too weak. It is a fragile body that couldn't even withstand those few monsters, and he becomes totally frustrated that he was reborn in that useless state, remembering what he was, and thinks he will repeat his past mistakes. But in that, the Tower of Trials appears behind him, and he thinks he has to calm down. Since it is like this, he needs to be cold and calculating, but he looks back with the tower talking to him, and he is surprised because his ordeal was complete, and the relevant user, Kim Saryon, has the portal open in front of him, and he notices that it is the Abyss, and thinks that the opening of the Abyss portal means that that body has the talent to become an awakened, and if that is the case, maybe he can start using Kim Saryon's body again. And he thinks that if it is 2022, even the Kim Sung-in version of him would still be a normal person, and considering the facts, he is entering the Abyss earlier than in his past life. So he just agrees that since it is like this, there is no reason to hesitate, and enters the Tower of Trials, and he explains a little about it, as it is also known for the Abyss. So if you can get past the first floor of that tower, you are recognized as an awakened, and after that, as you climb the other floors, you can become much stronger, and that is why many people want to reach the top of the tower. But in fact, the Tower of Trials, there was a more important system than just your current floor, and the tower speaks to Saryon, saying that your trial will begin, and the first floor is the challenge floor, and he thinks that that can change, choosing the floor level, level 10, and the level of each floor, and he says that in addition to the floor number, there was a level system that existed in the Abyss, and even on the first floor as you level up, stronger enemies appear, and the stronger the enemy you defeat, the greater the reward you receive. Of course, it's natural that he'll need to face much more danger and effort, so the two things are linked: high risk, high return. The first floor forms in front of the boy, and he goes to a coliseum, and that trial will be configured for the level he chose. He thinks that's why he got level 10, but he wonders if everything will be okay, because even in the past, his highest level was only 8. But he stops thinking like a defeated person, saying that he must still do it, because if everything is like in his past life, he will eventually end up the same. Then they ask him to select his weapon, and he notices the monsters arriving as he selects, and is told that the trial is about to begin, and he immediately thinks he has to change his destiny. And so, a few hours later, a guy in the middle of the city is scared to death by those same wolves that attacked the protagonist, screaming, asking for help, saying that there are monsters wanting someone to help him, and the monsters go after him. But the protagonist appears there, saying that he finally found the two, and he simply goes after the monsters, kicking the first one in the face, and using his umbrella to chop up the second one, and the one who got kicked was thrown back. He is scared to death of the boy, and Saryon asks if he didn't say he wouldn't let him get out alive, and the wolf doesn't understand anything, and the protagonist tells him not to worry, promising that he will be next. And the awakened Kim and Saryon beautifully complete the first floor level 10, and in the newspapers it is said that the frequency of dungeon spawning has increased recently, and compared to 2019, which was the year the first dungeon appeared, it is expected that the spawning of dungeons has tripled. And while the dungeons appeared in that world, they caused great chaos in the population, so they started talking about trying to figure out the difference with the information they had so far, mainly about the level of the dungeons. And the protagonist talks about the dungeons, the Tower of Approval, and the system, and the focus in that world was all concentrated on these unidentifiable things that appeared almost all at once, and the interest and desire to master those things increased as the days went by. And it is said that meanwhile, the energy sources that came from the dungeons, the other stones, continued to diversify and began to experience a gigantic increase in prices, and the rewards received in the dungeons not only helped in daily life, but also directly affected the global economy, and the awakened gradually began to be attracted by the physical rewards upon completing the dungeons, and consequently, the glory along with the desire to gain everything from the dungeons increased, and in this, greed took over the humans. However, people didn't know anything, because the appearance of beings from another world on their planet was called outbreak, which would be the phenomenon where monsters from dungeons appear in their world. But until now, dungeons were considered positive things for their society, and they didn't know that the outbreaks, the phenomena where several monsters went to the real world, would increase a lot close to the year 2028, and that soon less than that would become the calamity that would destroy the world. And some awakened people wonder if you saw the update in the ranking, and one of them wonders if he's saying the new name in the ranking, and everyone wonders if it's possible to finish the first floor with that score, and they say they got 2,230 on the first floor, and they're surprised that the second place player only got 9,540, and a new star begins to appear, wondering who the hell smiled. And the protagonist re-enters the tower in very ordinary clothes, going unnoticed, and he says it's been a long time since he's been there, and says that the Tower of Trials, known as the Abyss, is a giant place composed of several floors, where the awakened scattered around the world gather, and each floor has its own world, with a completely different atmosphere, and even a different culture. But to go up a floor you need to go through a kind of ordeal, and the second floor is where the newly awakened reside, and it's also an easier floor to get items, and in exchange for having so much luxury, you need to come with a lot of points earned on the first floor. And the protagonist remembers how he passed that stage, killing several dinosaur-like monsters, and when he completed it, he says that really that was expected of level 10, because if he didn't have the memories of his past life, he wouldn't be able to do it so fast. so he thinks he's happy that the more he fights, the more his senses return to active, and if he continues like this, he will certainly be able to win, until they say he finished the first floor masterfully. And here it is the reward list of the first floor level 10, gain many points, and he achieves rank 1, and thinks that even for a level 10 it is a lot of reward, and he thinks that his attributes will increase faster than in his past life, so he looks at that amount of points, and realizes that all of that is really good for him to advance to the next floor, and thinks it's perfect, because it's really good to see all those points, making him happier and happier every time he looks at it. So he decides to go shopping, and thinks that the first thing what he needs to do is go to a clothing store, and when he enters, an elf talks to him, welcoming the boy, and says that he looks like a child who has just arrived, saying that he can say whatever he wants, and she is the skill merchant, an old dark elf, and she says that if he is not interested in anything specific, the hottie there can recommend something if he wants. I don't know, but she has a Shizuku reviewer vibe. You know, I don't know, but she does, and he remembers the old general merchant. And he says that this was her way of seducing the customer to manipulate them into buying the same things as always, but he apologizes because he already has something in mind, and he says that he needs the jump skill and the transformation skill, and she finds this strange, asking if he came there with someone's tip, but asks if he can pass, asking if he will want to buy, even knowing that the jump cost 150 points and the transformation cost 1,000. And the boy smiles at her, saying that there are the necessary points, and she is scared to death, wondering how the boy asks all of that, questioning whether he cheated the system. But the boy, he says he's sure he gave her the right amount of points, but she says that's not what she means, saying that no one has gotten more than 1,000 points on the first floor, asking if he really just got into the second, and he says yes, he just arrived, and he's just another customer. As he leaves, both the attendant and the other guy inside find this very strange, and the protagonist wonders if he can see what's inside, looking at his dimensional bag, seeing that it has a sword and a short spear. He's already taken enough bandages, medicine, and provisions, and thinks he hasn't forgotten anything, so he dared to evaluate only the skills he bought, and the skills used by the awakened have a ranking of magical power required for use, and to increase proficiency in the skills he needs to use them multiple times, and some skills have a level beyond proficiency and normally called evolutionary skills. These skills tend to become more difficult to obtain, and the evolutionary skill that you get inside the Tower of Trials is transformation. And another important thing, like evolutionary skills, is the use of the magic power catalyst. He bought a low-cost catalyst for 70 OP, a magic catalyst diluted in distilled water, and it will permanently increase the user's position in the magic power rankings, and the user's magic power according to their level. The magic power catalyst is an item that increases your power to a certain extent, and even if you don't advance to a higher floor or complete some dungeons, it will still increase. It can be purchased at the achievement point shop once the trial ends. He says that most people get distracted by the items in the shops on the upper floors and don't end up seeing the items on the lower floors, but if you look closely, there are incredible items there. He says that among them, that magic power catalyst is one, and it can be considered a very useful item, since it increases your magic power from the initial stages. He notes that this makes him think that having memories of your past life is something that helps you a lot. Who would have thought, right? Who would have thought that experiencing the same thing twice would give you some kind of improvement, advantage? And I think you should know the Mega Senna number, because you would gain a little point there. And he says that either because he knows about the transformation or the catalyst, he thinks he is the only person who knows all of this so far, and after using those things, he wonders what he will do. But then that redhead who was there looking inside the store comes close to the protagonist, asking if he could give him some of his time, and the boy gets scared because for a moment he couldn't feel the presence of that guy, wondering who he is. Then that swordsman asks if he scared him, saying that it wasn't his intention, and the protagonist thinks he finds it strange, looking at the boy remembering the future, remembering that same boy on top of a pile of dead people. Then he is horrified, because that is Choi Hook-jun, and he talks a little about Choi, who is a genius among the awakened, who used to be praised in the abyss, but he in a not so distant future ended up changing a little, and became the man behind the annihilation of a great guild. And the protagonist sees that kid who doesn't look much like that reference he has from the future, and he asks if his face is dirty, because the protagonist is looking at him with a strange face. And he apologizes, saying that he got scared, and says that at that time, he had a murderous expression on his face, asking what Choi needs. And he says that, to be honest, he's been following him since that store, and he bought a lot of things, and seems to know a lot about the items. And the protagonist notices that he was stalking him, getting scared. And Choi says that what he wants to tell him is the following, leaving the protagonist all defensive. And Choi then asks what he thinks of them forming a group, all friendly like a golden in front of the protagonist, leaving him quite surprised by that personality. And so the approval of the second floor of level 10 begins for the protagonist, but he finishes it very easily, now obtaining the treasure of the Char tribe, and it is said that the Char tribe is angry with him, and they will chase him until they get their treasure back. So he must take the treasure and run away and try to survive in the forest. And in that, the tribe, one of the lizardmen starts going after the protagonist, and he watches them all from the top of the tree, hiding from those things. He already knows that tribe, saying that they are hunters specialized in tracking, and asking him to run away from those guys is kind of idiotic. So he thinks it's a very difficult mission, and there's no logic to something like that, wondering why he has to do this. And their treasure has no effect, and says that apart from the fact that he needs to protect it, there's nothing special about that thing. So he wonders how he's going to complete this mission, but in this, it's just trying to survive in the forest, and he has an idea. While the monsters continue searching for him, he himself goes in front of one of them, appearing and attacking the monster, cutting it in half, and finally interprets what the system is telling him, because surviving means he can kill any enemy that's in the forest, appearing in the middle of those things and calling everyone to fight. But one of the big lizards jumps on him, but he cuts the lizard in two and leaves, cutting down all the lizards he sees in front of him with absurdities. Then he thinks that the Shard tribe likes to move in large groups, and that means that the possibility of this taking longer than expected is high, and if he had formed a group, it would be amazing. But he thinks that from level 5 onwards the difficulty increases, so the chance of finding people for a group is lower, and he wanted to pass level 8, but it is very difficult to. But the protagonist questions himself if he really needs to pass level 8, so Choi stayed watching, and the protagonist thinks he has his reasons to be able to link the group with him, and asks for forgiveness, but to achieve the objectives. Level 8 is something very low, but while he thinks and runs, he ends up clashing with one of the bosses of that tribe, walking on top of a Komodo dragon, and that huge monster goes after the protagonist, and he thinks that the boss has finally appeared using the jumping higher than that thing, and preparing to attack from above, so he says that he will break the food chain from there, cutting them both in half with a single attack, and then chopping it up, making the chef's mincemeat in his mouth. Then he gets the reward from the second floor, the treasure that has these effects revealed, and the treasure allows him to recover all the damage taken and heal from diseases, and its use is 5 out of 5, and the protagonist says he didn't expect any of this, and just thinking that he was going to receive such an incredible reward makes him think that all the work was worth it. He says he was happy and just stayed hunting in the forest and didn't run away. So he opens his states and thinks that thanks to this, his attributes are increasing much faster, and using the transformation he can have his characteristic, and the skill says he can copy the form of his target, and the more he uses that skill, the higher the level will be. So he copies the characteristic of the Sharo tribe boss, the Berserker, a skill that makes physical damage increase in relation to your exhaustion, decreasing health when you are bleeding, and this will help him a little later, and thinks it was a difficult fight, at least in his head, right? Because he chopped the guy up as calmly as possible. But he says he's achieved a lot, and thinks that if he grows up like this, it will be good. But he hears the rumbling of his stomach, with an exhaustion of 81, and in that, he thinks he'll consider some things after leaving there to be able to eat and returning home. He sees that his mother made a feast for him, and he asks her what all this is, and she apologizes, saying that this is the best she can do, even though she saved him, wishing her son good luck in his studies, and he doesn't know what to say, but says that she's tired, because yesterday she even went to work hurt, but she says that everything is fine, even though she has huge dark circles under her eyes, and she says that it's not that difficult, making food for your own son, and the boy is touched by her, looking at it, seeing how much love she put into that food, and so he sits down to eat, and after taking the first bite, he thanks her, lowering his head, thinking to himself that he may not become his real son, but still he promises to himself even that will protect him from everything and everyone. But after he goes to his room and goes online, he goes to see the Awaken website, and starts to notice that the gossip of the abyss is swirling between who got first place in the first and second weight, and people are commenting that Saryon got 2,220 points, and seeing that everyone is talking about him, he thinks that it's really going to be a pain to deal with this, and he ends up sweating reading all the news, and he sees each of those articles, with a guy saying that the guilds are going to come down killing him, and he gets angry because this is going to be horrible. And in Gangnam Seoul, in the Ars Guild office, a guy talks to Choi, and he is surprised that Kim Saryon, the guy he saw recently, became number 1, asking what's in him, and the guy who seems to be the leader says that he seems to have become an Awakened more or less at the same time as the boy, asking if there is anything he knows about him, and he thinks for a bit, saying that actually no, he doesn't think he has ever met him, and the leader thinks that the tower is a pretty big place. And apart from that, he goes to the boy, asking how the 3rd floor is going, and says that even though he is challenging level 8, which is higher than the others can do, You can't keep delaying this forever, especially now that Kim Saryeon, the voracious competitor, has appeared. And in this choice says that he is trying to find someone to do the 3rd floor with him, but he can't find anyone because he is on level 8. And well, if he can't find anyone, he will go alone. But that guy says that if he doesn't find anyone, he will try to find someone for him, so he shouldn't worry about anything and just focus on climbing the tower. And after that, he tells the boy that he should already know what he was doing, so he tells him to come back and report to him in a week, also telling him to try to beat that Kim Saryeon if he can. And when the boy leaves, he thinks he is screwed because in any case, he also thinks about Kim Saryeon, wondering if it could be that boy he found sitting in the square. But he refuses to believe it, because even if it was him, what could he do? He only needs to worry about himself now. And a while later, the protagonist finishes, floor by floor, reaching the 9th. Then he tells his mother that he's going on a trip and doesn't know how long it will be for. He presents her with a very good report card. He says he wants to try going deep into rural areas, and she ends up agreeing, saying that he studied a lot, so he should have some fun now. He finishes the 9th floor too, and she tells him to remember to call often. He says yes, saying he'll be back later. And so a year later, on December 7th, 2022, he goes to the train station and says he expected time to pass quickly, but to think that a year has already passed is a lot. He says he was worried because he was in the middle of RTHRA, but he's happy he managed to finish the 9th floor. He says that the 10th floor will take a little longer. He says that when it's not certain how long it might take, there's no better excuse than traveling to disappear. And for the awakened ones who climb the Tower of the Trials, the 10th floor is an important milestone, and they need to overcome it. Every 10 floors, the difficulty of the trials increases significantly to the point that they say that the 11th and 12th floors are easier than the 10th. He says that because of this, everyone challenges a difficulty that is 1 or 2 times lower than they would normally face. But the moment the difficulty is decreased, the subsequent floors start to get harder and harder. So he thinks that to prevent this from happening, he needs to get stronger. He thinks that in a year, the Green Dungeon will appear in Anying City, and the massive outbreak will happen. And it will be the first time that humanity will truly feel in danger. And along with the January 1st incident in Gyeong province, there are many terrible events coming. He looks to the horizon thinking that he will change the future, and thinks that this time he will definitely protect the world. He goes to the Tower of Trials. At the entrance of the 10th floor, he walks alone to the place. Then an old man asks him if he is going to the 10th floor in the middle of the way, and says that he will not stop him, but asks if he can give him some change before he goes. And he is the guardian of the gate of the 10th floor, and the protagonist thinks that most people ignore him, thinking that he is just a beggar, but in his real function he is very important, and the protagonist donates 5,000 points to him. And the old man is surprised, because most of the people just ignore him and move on. But he is quite generous with a beggar like him. And the protagonist says it is because he is an important person. An old man thanks him for his words, asking what information he needs. And he says it is the level 10 information. And the old man is even more surprised, saying that that information is very valuable. But since he gave all of that, he has no way not to tell him, asking him to be careful with the boss. And the protagonist asks if that is all, and he says yes, and that is all. And he thinks it is a vague tip, but the information from a gate guardian is never wrong, and the protagonist ends up being satisfied with just those few words, while the guardian tells him to be careful, and the boy enters the gate, and inside, he finds himself in a very dark place, and the approval begins. And in that he chooses level 10 of the approval, and begins to enter a place in a village, and is told that he must find and complete the objective of the approval, and not die. It's a good thing you warned me not to die. I was even thinking about it. It was in my plans, but you warned me. I'm going to abstain. And inside the 10th floor of the tower, a boy is picking some berries, thinking he was lucky, because he didn't think he would be able to fill a whole basket, and it seems he really is lucky today. He thinks he can eat one first, since there are so many wanting to throw that one in his mouth. But he hears thunder and a noise, and a huge monster appears above the boy, making him scream for his mother, asking for help. He runs away screaming, fleeing from that thing, until the monster gets close enough to almost catch him. But the protagonist appears to save the boy, asking him to hold on tight, using the transformation, and with that he manages to get the boy out of the way of that monster, not letting him be killed, and consequently attacks, splitting the monster apart, killing the huge salamander. Then he talks to the boy, asking if he is okay, and the boy remains quite scared of that guy who appeared out of nowhere. And in this he takes the boy back home, but the treatment he receives is horrible, and he tells the people there that he is not a kidnapper, and says he's just a stranger who saved a boy while passing by. But the people close the door in his face, and says that even if he says that, they know he has other intentions, and it won't do any good even if he keeps her hostage, and there's nothing for him to take in that village, telling the boy to get out of there right away. But at that point the protagonist questions what's going on, saying he thinks there's a misunderstanding there. but the woman inside doesn't even answer him. And he's surprised, thinking he would be treated like a kidnapper as soon as he arrived. And that's very shameful for him, because he didn't even do anything. So why does he deserve to go through something like that? But in that, one of the people inside the houses observes him and sees that the boy is leaving. And the system says that he visited an unknown village that is in crisis, and he must save this village from the crisis and survive. But in the middle of that place, he doesn't have much to do. And he thinks that the atmosphere is sad, and the residents are hostile, and it is definitely different from the other floors. And he wonders if this was supposed to be the 10th floor, and thinks that in any case saving the village and surviving is as sinister as it is, wondering where he's going to get information from there. But some people are watching him from inside the houses, noticing the protagonist passing by with not so good intentions, and he starts to feel them watching because they're being very obvious, and he thinks it's going to be difficult to get information from those people with him being so cautious. And he says that they are extras called NPCs, but their appearance and mentality are strangely similar to real humans, and he thinks that no right seems like it's just part of a programming. And he says that this extreme disgust with foreigners, along with the depressive and restless climate of the village, is very similar to that time, remembering the future. And he talks about the look of a world approaching destruction, and he gets pissed about it because those damn people haven't even experienced anything like that, and they implemented a theme like that so well to be able to do that. So he sits near a tree, saying he needs to find an informant to be able to do something, but he can't find anyone, not even the ant, until someone comes near him, calling the boy, and it is the same little boy he saved. And the protagonist remembers him, but the boy is so far away and scared to see the protagonist, so he asks how the boy is. He goes close to him, giving some berries to the protagonist and returning to hide. Then he thanks the boy for having saved him, and the protagonist becomes calmer, asking if the boy can come there quickly, showing him a bag with several supplies different from those berries. Then he notices the food, eating the bread and becoming much more friendly, saying that it is very tasty, and the protagonist is surprised that he is finding it so good, asking if there is not enough food in the village. He says yes, that is why no one is friendly, because they might end up stealing his food. And the protagonist notes that the villagers must be going through hardships, and the boy says that it is thanks to the village chief that everyone is enduring so much, because the village chief is the hero. There, he is surprised by this hero talk, and the boy says that was what his father said, and that he has been protecting that village as best he could throughout his life. That's why he needed to help and trust him. And the protagonist thinks about it, and the boy questions what happened, and he says he is talking to himself, but asks the protagonist why he went there. And he says he was wondering if there was any way to help the chief, like giving him the food he has, or taking care of the monsters that threaten the village. And the boy asks if he saw a scary monster earlier, saying that you never know when it will attack the village. But the boy says that those monsters can't go to the village, and they said it was the chief who did this. And the protagonist begins to realize something, asking if the boy could tell him in more detail about it. But in that, another person arrives there, asking if he is the stranger who went to the village. And that gentleman comes along with another man, introducing himself to the protagonist, saying that he is the chief of that place. And the protagonist immediately raises all his danger senses, noticing that this is the village chief, and he remembers the guardian, telling him to be careful around the chief. And the chief says that it is sad to see this, as while they get to know each other, but food in the village is extremely precious, and distributing food so recklessly can cause confusion. So he would like him to avoid distributing food without his permission as the village chief. Then the boy's suspicions are confirmed, and the protagonist talks to the village chief, saying that it was good that he came, as he was planning to meet him anyway. Then the chief asks who he is, and he says that he is just a stranger who was passing by and saw the village, so he wanted to stay there for a few nights, asking if he could give him permission. And that man along with the chief tries to warn him, and the chief thinks for a moment, apologizing, but says that the villagers are very cautious with outsiders. And the protagonist realizes that he will not let his guard down, so the old man says that before that, he comments to the boy, asking if they didn't tell him not to eat without permission. And the boy starts to tremble, apologizing, but the protagonist caresses him, calming him down. Boy, telling him not to worry, because he doesn't need to be discouraged, and says that he gave him some of his food, and that it won't affect the village at all. And he takes the dimensional bag out of it, saying that he has enough to share with everyone. And that other guy talks to the chief that there is a lot of food there, saying that if he can find him a place to sleep while they are there, he will provide as much food as they need, and if it is still difficult, he can do something more. But the chief says that it is not, asking him to accompany him, saying that he will give him the empty house that is left. As the boy enters the village, he sees some religious men praying to God, asking him to have mercy on their lambs. He is surprised by that religious man asking him to cleanse his sins. He is ignorant of the blood. He wonders if this is a religious ceremony, thinking that it is understandable. After all, these are difficult times, and it is natural for their hearts to want to lean on an absolute being. He has also seen this scene many times. In a world nearing its end, people filled with despair have gone mad in various ways, and those who hid behind the name of religion while facing terror are numerous, and those who committed atrocities after abandoning everything, after seeing the reality before their eyes. He says that, of course, even so, in the end, no one was left. However, he sees something that makes him alert, and so that religious man says that they will sacrifice that contaminated soul, asking him to grant those little lambs honor, peace, and rest. Then he throws a man who is tied up into a hole, and inside the hole, he begins to scream, and then he stays silent, and the protagonist gets a fright. Then he begins to notice that even if it is there, the man's selfishness will not change, and one of them says that it is a great tragedy for the Miller family, but it had to be done, since it was to protect the entire village. And this is thanks to the village chief protecting the place, borrowing the power of the earth god. And if it weren't for the chief, the village would be in ruins. And they say that they need to make another sacrifice in 3 days, wondering what they will do if it really is their turn. They think that it should be fine for a while, since they still have one person left. Looking full of bloodlust at the protagonist, who is calm, and that man who is with the chief says that the ceremony was well completed this time too. But they still don't have a sacrifice to give to the 3 days. And the chief asks how the stranger is doing, and his assistant says that he did nothing suspicious, and as he thought, he accepted that stranger to make him a sacrifice. And the chief says that he was sent by his god to be sacrificed, and he must use that sleeping potion to make him sleep. And he just needs to throw him into that thing underground on the day of the ceremony. As time passes, the situation of the village is becoming increasingly critical, and a small sacrifice for the protection of everyone is inevitable. And he asks his assistant if they should not try to save even one more villager. And one day, a man-eating snake appeared there and built a nest under the village. And coincidentally, its territorial markings prevented other monsters from approaching. And thanks to this, the village was safe from monster attacks. And the village had already been consumed by the fear of monsters from outside the village, attacking at any moment. So he wonders what he as the village chief should do in this situation. And he thinks that in this process he had to sacrifice some villagers, but he doesn't feel guilty about them because that's what he had to do as a hero. So 3 days later, they go after the protagonist, who is already sleeping, taking him to be sacrificed, placed on top of that trapdoor. Then the leader apologizes to the protagonist, but still cuts the rope to throw him to the monsters, saying that this is all for the good of the village. And the boy falls into that hole while they just watch. Then down near the snake, several of its eggs are there, and it is already threatening the protagonist. But it turns out that a while later, the village chief comes down to see how the situation is, and says that it has been a day since they threw that outsider, and since it has already digested him a little, it is almost time to mark its territory again. And he thinks that there was definitely a monster attack in the north last time, so he should make it mark its territory further down there. But arriving down there, he gets a fright, his eyes widening as if he had seen a ghost, and that the protagonist finds it strange that he's there, wondering what brought him there. With the bitten snake in front of him, just looking at that old man, my friend, I didn't expect the protagonist to be like that. He has a silly face. But the creature is simply absurd. So the village chief asks the boy what that is, questioning if that monster he killed is the snake and wondering how it happened. And the protagonist asks how. So what? He's saying that the monster shouldn't have died. And the old man really thinks that's exactly it, getting mad at the boy, saying that it was for the good of the village. And if the snake doesn't mark its territory, the monsters in the region will attack the village. And the protagonist wonders if it's not for his own good and not for the good of the village. And the old man feels that this is exactly it. And the protagonist says that he knows a little about that monster. And the name of that snake there is gluttonous snake. And when it is not eating, it spends most of its time sleeping. And it is a rather lazy species, and after making its nest, before leaving the area, it will mark its territory. And because of this, the weaker monsters do not have the courage to go there. But at the same time, for her puppies to grow, she needs to feed them. And another characteristic of that creature is that it doesn't see those who give it food as food. And the old man really notices that the protagonist knows too much, and the boy says he's just guessing, but he knew that, and continued feeding the villagers while playing the hero. And he pauses by the old man, making him shit himself in fear. But unfortunately for the old man, he says that his hypocrisy ended up leaving him, lying there in fear. So outside, he takes the monster's head, and he complained, I don't know if it's true, because the chief lied to them. And no way that the chief was deceiving everyone. He was sacrificing villagers to the earth god, but it was just a snake. And a woman remembers that her husband was one of them. So the other guy, who is probably taking advantage of the fact that her husband became food, says that this is unbelievable, asking how he can do such a horrendous thing. And they say that it's shocking to think that their chief fed that monster knowing what he was talking about. But he says that thanks to this, they managed to prevent other monsters from coming there. And they question what they will do now, because now that he killed the snake, they are screwed. But the protagonist says he will help, and they question how so. He says that they need to show them something, and shows the egg of those snakes. And he says that, as you can see, it is the egg that the snake was creating, and they were left as soon as it died, and everyone there is scared to death. And he knows that everyone there is going to talk, but he asks them to listen to him first, asking if they remember that he said that the gluttonous snake did not see the being it feeds as food, and says that then they will use this loophole to manipulate the snake babies, and they should not worry about any human. It will be sacrificed like before, because everyone was already scared shitless, and they question what they will do, and the protagonist says that they will feed it to monsters, and they are left wondering how they will do this. If questioning if they will hunt monsters and feed them to the snakes, but questions who will catch the monsters. And the protagonist says that he himself will hunt those things at first, but by the end of the day, he will be just an outsider who will leave that village soon, and after they leave, they will have to do it themselves, and everyone asks if the protagonist is on drugs, asking if he wants farmers to use farm tools to kill the monsters. But he asks if that is not his people's village, saying that if they don't protect it, who will? And they say it is not that easy, but then the protagonist tells them to give up, questioning why they don't give up on this, and they come back with the sacrifice of villagers, and everyone there is scared to death. And the boy thinks that while they had no intention of protecting themselves, they wanted to find someone to lean on, and these kinds of thoughts which create the hero and the weak heroes, which are formed by other intentions. But as he thought, he was very hopeful for the desperate, questioning if it is really too much for them, and he needs to think of another way to end this. But then, someone says he does, and it is that same boy who he saved back then, and the boy is hiding behind his mother's skirt. But then he starts laughing, saying he doesn't know if he can help much, but still he wants to become strong as protagonist and protect that village. Then the boy is surprised, saying that the little boy is a good boy, saying that if everyone works together, they will be able to protect village. And the boy asks if he's serious, saying he'll do his best. So he talks to all those cowards, that even the child said he can, and one of them gets motivated by this, saying he'll try. And that's better than dying, doing nothing, and everyone joins in. Then one of them says that the people of that village are weak and get scared easily, and they were being very selfish, seeking help, without thinking about helping. So before he leaves, he asks if there's a way to smile at one, or teach them how to fight, and the protagonist receives another mission, and the people of the village manage to regain their hope. So he has 60% of the mission completed, and with that, he wonders if he can start now. But far away, the old man he left alive is going to do shit, entering another cave, saying that arrogant guy he showed contempt without even knowing his place. Then he starts laughing and goes after another monster, saying he's going to break everything, and that monster, no, it seems like a good thing. And so a while later, they are already hunting monsters, catching some small ones, tying them up. And they begin to understand, thinking that if they trap the monster's baby in the basement, and the citizen takes turns feeding them, then there is no chance of them being devoured by it. And they also notice that stranger is incredible in many ways, because he is killing many monsters alone, and the protagonist is going against a gigantic centipede, managing to kill it, only with his sword, stinging the monster. So the villagers call him, asking why he doesn't stop there, since the sun will set soon, telling him not to try so hard, and to go back there. But the protagonist says that it's okay, and he will finish there soon, and come back right away. And there the system sends him another notification, saying that now he has conquered 90% of that floor, and he thinks that the snake babies have warmed up quite a bit too. But the achievement level doesn't go up at all, wondering if it's because of the boss who disappeared, saying he wants to complete it after reaching 100%, wondering what's left. But then, what's left will come on the mattress, shaking absurdly, scaring the protagonist. And from the ground, a blue monster comes out, a bird flying over him. Then he says, that is the snake's natural enemy, the glutton, and he can't threaten it, the sacred bird of blue flames. He gets scared, realizing that it was because of that guy that his progress didn't go up. And the boss is all happy with that thing in the air, and tells the boy to look at that majestic and threatening appearance, saying that it would be good to keep him asleep with sleep poison. And if so, the citizens will treat him like a hero again, since he is a boss who controls monsters. But that thing looks at him, and the boss starts talking to the monster, that it was he who awakened him, ordering him to give it to him quickly, and to treat him like a master, decimating the chief in one breath, exterminating him completely. Meanwhile, protagonist notices that the destructive power of that is too strong, and the monster finishes him towards the village, which is there, and he runs off towards that thing, trying to stop it so that it doesn't reach the village, and he jumps over everything, using his jump to be able to hurt that thing with his sword. But even attacking, he can't succeed, because the monster dodges its attack in the air, and it notices that he can't reach it. And the monster comes back on top of him, using its paws and throwing him down, hitting the protagonist's nose, making him fall down. He thinks that this can't end like this, because the citizens have just started to unite. But as he falls, a rope begins to untie, and he thinks that he has to do something. The citizens realize that the stranger hasn't returned, asking if he's still killing monsters. They also notice that he hasn't slept in the last few days, and he's different. As he thought, they wonder if it's because he's young, but the rope that was with him begins to unravel, while the citizens don't even realize the danger that's coming towards them. And so, that thing hovers over the two, looking at them, ready to kill them. The two begin to scream, and the monster prepares to launch its fire at the two, but the protagonist's sword goes away, towards that thing, tied with the rope, and attaching it to its beak. And the protagonist says that if he can't reach it, he'll make it reachable, tying the rope to his wrist, and pulling himself close to the monster, climbing on top of it, saying that he caught the sacred bird, asking it to lend its abilities, using the transformation, taking most of its powers, imbuing it in that rope, and burning that fire creature. Meanwhile, the protagonist's mother is at home, saying that nothing is happening, and about Saryon, he went traveling as soon as he finished the test, and tells the person on the other end of the line not to worry because he's doing well, saying that in fact, he matured out of nowhere and seems quite trustworthy, and sometimes he even seems like another person. Meanwhile, her son, who really is another person, is against the sacred bird, exterminating it, but the monster doesn't die with just that attack, looking full of hatred at the protagonist. He says he knew, saying that it's a limit for a technique, relying on transformation, and an evolutionary ability, which changes in power according to the skill level, was a very low level, to be able to damage that guy. So the fire begins to consume the protagonist himself, but he grabs the sword, which was there, grabbing it, imbuing himself with even more fire, trying to resist, because it is too hot, but he thinks that he can't die like this after all. There is much worse coming, and he also remembers the necklace, which he got from those lizard men, remembering it at the last moment, so he thinks he must get out of this because he can still fill up. He uses the recovery item, Treasure of the Sharo tribe. Then he recovers all the damage he suffered, and in that, the monster doesn't even notice that he is still alive, being surprised with the protagonist falling on top of him, plunging his sword into that monster, sending him to die, throwing himself to the ground with that thing, and with that, he gets the result, finishing off the monster, who falls to the ground without moving, and the protagonist in turn is also in a very bad situation, fainting there until he wakes up with that child there screaming. He gets up all scared, wondering what place is that. Then they say it's great that he woke up, and he questions what's going on. They say that they thought he was dead after being burned alive. He questions if he fainted and what happened, but then they tell him to continue resting because thanks to him, this has come to an end, and that bird monster died, so there shouldn't be any more problems, and they cut him into pieces. So, he doesn't have to worry about giving food for the snakes for a while. And it's all thanks to the protagonist, but they can't believe it because it was a fire, where it would be difficult to even try to survive. He only has a few bruises from the fall, and otherwise, he's completely fine. They start to think that he might even be called a hero with his eyes shining, but the protagonist certainly doesn't want to hear that name, saying that he must have gotten lucky, and he feels nothing other than some pain. And then, that child runs to the protagonist to hug him, and he gets several achievement points, and also the perfect achievement level, completing the 10th floor of the Tower of Trials with 100% achievement. He finishes masterfully, noticing that he reached 100%, so there's no danger left, and the villagers can live a peaceful life without worrying about the apocalypse, apart from the rank, thinking that this will be a little annoying because he achieving, once again, the first, will make him fall into the mouth of the people again. But in that, everyone starts to thank him, saying that he is their hero, and they will not forget this favor, and everyone in the village is thanking him with all their hearts, and he's seeing, once again, that they are calling him a hero, remembers another moment. But in that, he takes the beak, taking the exit of the place. Then they ask if he is leaving already, and the protagonist says that the little boy caught him, and he goes to the protagonist, asking how he can sneak out like that, wondering what this is, and he tries to make an excuse. Then the boy asks if he is going to save another village, and the protagonist, thinking that it is a pain because he wanted to leave without attracting attention, then the little boy brings him a bag of those fruits, telling him to give his best because no matter where he is, they will never forget him, and those are the fruits that he harvested and he should eat when he's hungry. Besides that, she says that her name is Melly and thanks him very much for everything he did, and the protagonist is surprised, telling Melly to be okay. And returning to the real world, Cho is in an Ogochu car, and that guild leader asks if he's okay, and he says of course not, and he says that's it, because there's no way the star among the rookies would be nervous because of an evaluation, and considering that he's already on the 15th floor, it's certain that at least he's rank B, or he can even get a rank A, but the boy is not at all happy with the situation he's in there, so the leader notices this. Also talking about some rookies, saying that that one is expensive. Kim Soyoung will come for an evaluation soon, and he asks how does the guy know that? And the leader says that it's just his intuition, and he just completed the 10th floor. So he should already, it's time for him to come again. And so, Choi notices that he's catching up on Soryang's progress on the floors, and that Soryang guy must have caught Jong Dong Young's attention, and he says he feels bad for him, and Jong says he's just saying this by chance. But if he ends up meeting Soryang, either in the tower or at an assessment site, he has to bring him to his guild if he can, because you never know. Because if Soryang becomes his replacement, he might be released. I'm starting to notice that massacre he did in a certain guild there might not be intentional, and Choi doesn't like any of that talk. Meanwhile, at the Awakened Certification Agency, he arrives there and remembers Jun saying that they prepared themselves so they would silence the abyss as soon as it was over. Then he must leave immediately after that the evaluation ends, and if he ends up changing his mind, he knows that everyone will be in trouble, and Choi is dying of hatred for this, and he thinks. Of course he knows, because he has nothing anyway. Meanwhile, protagonist is arriving there to do the evaluation too, and he says that it seems he arrived right on time, because it's been a while since the last time he evaluated his ranking. And at the certification agency of the Awakened, it's like a government agency, and it's a place that evaluates rankings of various Awakened from foreigners, those without affiliation, and they take care of most of the Awakened, and the protagonist says he's there for the evaluation, giving his name, but he explains that in fact, this should be called a sacred place for the officials, the administration of the Awakened, and all the Awakened come to the agency periodically, since their ranking needs to be determined so they can enter the dungeons. They need to enter the dungeons to make money, and he thinks that in his case, his goal is to enter the dungeons, not the money. But then, they ask him to wait, along with some other candidates. He says that people who have had their rankings evaluated have earned the privilege of being an active Awakened, and their upper body, special abilities, and growth potential as an Awakened are all recognized when you are evaluated. And thanks to this, the guild representatives looking for new people are always out there, desperate to recruit someone who stands out. He notices that they have eagle eyes. So, that guy says he will take him there when he is called, and the protagonist thanks him. But then, they hear someone cursing, telling him to do his job properly, telling him to take a look, because his magical power is rank 3, and that is definitely enough to be rank C. So, he questions why he is rank D, and the man next to him says that the evaluation rules have suddenly changed. So they can do a lot for him. But that guy grabs the scientist's tie, asking if it's which person, why they changed the numbers, and says it's his, asking why he's changing, and the protagonist says that the games Awakened in the dungeon are based on his individual ranking, and even so, he asks, what's the need to throw a tantrum like that, regardless of the result, since there are so many representatives and watching there, that this is idiocy. However, while that guy almost hits the scientist, Choi stops him, asking, how are there still people like that in the world? And the protagonist is surprised to see him there. And while he is keeping that bully under control, he says that the artifact in his well has the ability to increase his magical power for a period of time. It is a rare item, which cannot be found, not even in case of exchange, and he doesn't know how someone like him got his hands on that. And even though his ranking is low, he seems to be quite skilled in other areas, and that guy is dying of hatred, cursing Choi, trying to reach him. But since he's trapped, he just kicks and screams like a cockroach, and Choi asks if he thinks those people are evaluating him precisely because they are idiots, and says that if he's so angry, he asks why he doesn't take the test again after taking off that bracelet. Then he gets angry. But Choi laughs at him with a very different aura than usual, saying that he thinks he wouldn't even reach rank D this time, and that guy asks how he dare. But Choi only puts his foot in after he is removed by security, and he continues to struggle while being expelled, so Choi thinks he got carried away since he wasn't in a good mood. But then, he hears a hi which scares him right down to the corner of his spine, and when he looks back, it's Sorian, and says that it's only the first time they've seen each other from the second floor, asking if Choi remembers him. And he says yes, and keeps wondering about that feeling just now, which was very strange, and he asks if it's Choi's first evaluation, but the boy questions why he's so surprised. After all, it's also his first evaluation, and the protagonist tries to get Miguel involved, so Choi asks if people don't usually evaluate themselves a month after becoming awakened, and the boy says that he was kind of busy, and he says that actually he didn't want to stand out, not at all, since it might bother his mother in the future, and he thinks that he has money too much, and there would be no way to explain it to his mother. But he asks Choi, saying that if he became an awakened, recognized by the agency, he could also enter the dungeons and earn some rewards. Besides that, he didn't do the evaluation, even reaching the 15th floor, and he tries to give Miguel, and says that he was a little busy returning to that look, which the protagonist recognizes very well and notices that face, and Choi says that now that he stopped to think, they were talking without knowing each other's names, but then Choi is called, and he is from the R's Guild. And the protagonist sees that it is him. He gets up, saying that he will go first, saying that he will see him in a little while, and the protagonist thinks about the R's Guild, saying, as he remembers, it was the guild that was massacred by him. So, he was already part of it at that time and becomes thoughtful about the boy, questioning himself why he did that for his age, and they say that it's only been a year since he became an awakened, and they say that there's a reason for him to be part of the R's Guild, and with him returning, So Hyun congratulates him, saying that he was classified as rank B, but doesn't seem very happy. However, the next one is Kim So Hyun, unaffiliated, and everyone is surprised by that name, especially Choi. And they notice that he's the guy in first place, who has been getting those unbelievable points since early on, and they say that those points on the 10th floor are crazy, so Choi thinks that Young was right, wondering, where is Kim So Hyun? And the protagonist gets up, saying that he sees him in a little while, and the boy is very surprised. Because, the boy who was next to him all this time was So Hyun, who he was looking for. And he remembers when Young asked him to take him to the Guild R's, speaking for him to stay in his place, and the protagonist goes to the measuring machine while Choi continues to remember the words that Young. He notices that that guy, actually, it's Kim So Hyun. He didn't want it to be true, but sometime later, the protagonist leaves the agency, and he's all down because he made a mistake. And some time ago, he was in front of the meter, and that scientist says that he just needs to put a little magic in the measuring instrument. And the protagonist does this with Choi, paying close attention while he puts magic. A huge glow comes out. He asks himself, what is this? Because that feeling off magic, it doesn't make sense. Until everything stops, he questions himself what they felt just now, with some of them even getting nervous. Then, the new affiliate, Kim So Hyun, is ranked as rank C, and Choi thinks that this is impossible, questioning himself how the boy is only a rank C when it's just magic compared to a rank A, and they think that is expected. It was just someone with the same name, and Choi notices that it seems other people couldn't feel this, but he is sure of what he felt. So the protagonist simply leaves there accepting his rank, and Choi notices that as he thought, that person is indeed Kim So Hyun from the rumors, but he ends up getting a little shaken, questioning himself if it's really him, because the measuring instrument said that he is only a rank C, but then he questions who would control the magic itself to lower his rank, and even that he is a genius, only awakened, globally ranked, can do this, and the protagonist says that's what he hopes they think, because it was only for a second, but who would have imagined that he made a mistake when controlling his magic, and says that it was good he controlled it at the time, because if he hadn't fixed it, it would have been total despair, and this happened because his attributes increased out of nowhere, but he says he thinks that after finishing the 10th floor, his attributes are increasing faster, and those last days he received some very interesting rewards, getting the fire from that sacred bird, and says that he received the sacred flame from that, and says that it is an evolutionary skill, and it is very strong, and it is stronger against monsters of the demon type, so it is something that he accepts willingly. These attributes increased along with that new skill, and more than that, he is very happy with the store, because perhaps either because he finished the 10th floor at level 10, but the list of items is incredible. He says that the problem is that he bought an egg instead of those good items, and it is the egg of an unknown divine beast. He thinks that he only bought it because it was one of the items which he does not know how to get, but the fact that he does not know its origin worries him, and is much smaller than he thought, and he says that a certain awakened who bought the egg and can hatch at any moment became a ranker with the power of a high-rank sacred beast, which came out of the egg. If he says that there was no change any in the egg, even after a considerable time has passed, wondering if it is an infertile egg, and Choi goes to the protagonist, calling him. The protagonist gets scared because he thought he had already left, and he says to go to the bathroom, but ask if he succeeded his result, and the protagonist says yes, and he is a rank C, and Choi doesn't really believe it and tries to talk to him, but then that guy who was making a mess inside goes up to him, saying that it's a good thing he bumped into him, cursing Choi, asking if he knows how much he suffered to get rank C. The protagonist notices that he's back to being that unpleasant person, wondering if he'll want to get revenge, but Choi asks Soohyun, and he says that's good, because he was curious about Choi Jong-hyuk's abilities, so he notices that he should see, but then that guy is hit by something and starts to fall to the ground. Jong, who is affecting him with his ability, talks to Hack Jong, asking why he arrived only now, and he says that he was waiting for him while he's poisoning that kid. The protagonist wonders who he is. He and Choi answers his question at the time, calling Jong the guild master, and that bully boy falls to the ground, bleeding, and the protagonist remembers the guild master, ours, Jun Dong-yang, and Zhang says that again, he is calling him, so expressionless, and in that, he passes by, kicks the face of the boy, who was already on the ground, and the protagonist realizes that he, good thing, is not, and he said to call him Hyong, hugging Choi. But he asks if he made a new little friend in that time, and Choi lies, saying that he met him in the evaluation. Zhang looks at the boy, full of disdain. However, he realizes something that the boy did not say. After all, he is not a normal guy. Since had the interest of Choi and says that he wants to test the boy, going to the protagonist and says that he is the master from the guild, introducing himself to him, asking what So Hyun's name is. Then Choi tells the boy to be quiet in the back, and he even seems to understand Choi's intention, but he smiles at Zhang, revealing that his name is Kim So Hyun. I really want him to leave this guy in a fight. It's not gonna happen, most likely, but it would be to good. And with protagonist revealing his true name, the guild leader really likes this information. So, Choi tries to lie, saying it's not him, saying that the guy is rank C, and that there's no way that's the Sarion he's looking for, saying he even watched his exam. But the guild leader tells the boy to be quiet, as he'll see this information for himself. So, he tells the boy that if it's okay, he wants to take a look at his Awaken ID card. Looking at the boy's card, he's surprised that he's actually rank C, saying he apologizes, because it seems like he's not the one he's looking for, and he made a mistake there, because his name is quite common, saying he would have asked him to join his guild if it were really him. The protagonist just stares at him, and he says it would be a bit embarrassing to take him, because he's just a rank C asking for permission. He says that if he's interested, he can come and try out at his guild, but the protagonist denies this, saying he's not really interested, and says that even if he were Kim Sarion from the rumors, he would never join his guild. Then the leader looks back with a look of hatred, and he questions how he'll know what will happen to him if he joins a guild that treats people's lives as if they were nothing. But the guild leader says that this is just an example, asking if he's ever seen him say some bad things to a member of his guild, saying that he deserves punishment. But then, the protagonist says that he was a rank D, asking if that isn't a bit much to call self-defense, and so the leader almost laughs, saying that it seems they disagree on this, and he says that the boy should know that there is an unofficial rule that says that no one interferes in an awakened fight or in its outcome, even if someone ends up dying in the process. Then he says that besides that, the probability of an awakened having to take responsibility decreases the stronger he is, no matter what he does, and a guild with a strong master like that is a guild that has the authority to be redeemed, even close to a massacre. Instead, he complained that these people aren't desperate to join this guild, and the protagonist says yes, and as he said, it seems they disagree on this. So the leader doesn't really like what the boy is saying he has nothing more to say to him, calling Choi to leave. He apologizes for that, but the protagonist calls him, handing him something, saying that if he ever needs help, just call him. Then he watches the two leave and thinks about Zhang, talking about the master of the medium-sized guild, ours, saying that he is a ranked awakened, and says that he was a gangster before, known for fighting in the streets, even before being an awakened, and is the guild master currently. And despite having abandoned the past and created the guild after becoming an awakened, it is a gift that the Ars Guild does not have completely clean intentions, since he is involved in loan sharking, as well as human trafficking, drug trafficking, and other services during his gangster days. And he also did not hesitate to kill that person from the past, and nobody changes that much. He is sure that that bastard is hiding something, and that must be why he has so much resentment towards Choi and Haekyun too. But there hasn't been any really absurd cases so far involving Choi and the Ars Guild, and he wonders what happened between them, and that it's another thing he needs to figure out now. However, looking outside, he realizes it's snowing, and says it seems like the world had frozen when the end of the world came at some point. Neither snow nor rain fell anymore, and the dry words only emphasized the devastation of every day. And he didn't know, at that moment, that that peaceful and comforting scene was the greatest extravagance. And he remembers that the new year is very close, and he also remembers something else, because he almost forgot because of Choi and Haekyun's exam, and says he had one more reason to go down the tower. And the reason he stopped climbing the tower and went to the lower floor wasn't just the rancor exam, and because of the rules that the Awakened Business Agency created for safety, and the compulsory obtaining of an Awakened certificate to participate in the conquest of real dungeons. And because of that, he had no choice but to take the exam, and his plans at first were to take his time and eventually take the exam. But he couldn't postpone it any longer, because he knew the incident would happen soon. But what if he fails? Even though he meets the test requirements, and he assumes he didn't think about that. because he won't be the only rank C awakened either, and if they talk about data, he also has no experience with dungeon conquest. But then he remembers when Yoon gave him a role and wonders if they will accept him and thinks that he doesn't really agree with what he's going to do. And in a coffee shop, two awakens are talking about some promising newbies. So they say they're not bad overall, and there's no one amazing, but there's a nice synergy there. And the man says they're all unknown, but the girl says he's being too insensitive, and she's also part of Hyde's team, thinking it was indivisible for him to be there. So it's not like the other members matter that much, so he shouldn't stay like that. The so-called rank B awakened trash, he says those people aren't enough, and they need at least one more person. So the girl asks if it's really necessary, because he knows that an increase in the number of members means a smaller reward for each one. So she asks why he's so cowardly even though he's rank B, and he says that safety comes first, asking if she has seen how the immortality rating in the dungeons is high, and says that he stopped climbing the tower because he values his life, and asks what he will gain if he dies in the dungeon. But she says that he is all scared just because of an orange dungeon, so she tells him to do whatever he wants, because he only has to follow the boss, and it is not as if she has a choice. And he wonders if there is no one else who is useful, and then the girl answers the phone and gets a fright talking to Jorah, saying that it turns out that they just received a new application, and that guy's name is Kim So-hyun. Then the protagonist says that the easiest way to define the difficulty of a dungeon is by its color. It is a system that uses the colors of the rainbow, whose difficulty increases exponentially as it approaches violet. An orange dungeon is the second easiest difficulty, and a team of rank C awakened should be able to complete it without much difficulty. And this orange dungeon will be a special case because on January 1st, 2024, in Gwangju, province of Jeong, he meets with the rest of the team, and they welcome him as they have been waiting for the boy. Then he says that what it looks like, he is the last one there. But Jorah says that everything is fine, as everyone just arrived, and he formally introduces himself. He is the captain of that team's raid, and he introduces everyone there, introducing himself as Kim So-hyun, and one of them was flustered upon hearing that name, asking if he is really that Kim So-hyun, the one who is currently taking the top one on every floor of the tower. But Jorah says that it is not him. He is just someone with the same name, and is a rank C, and this is also his first raid, and says that although he is Barayan, they were also surprised to hear that name, so that boy gets a little down, and the protagonist notes that it is a good thing he manipulated his rank, because his life is much easier if everyone understands it in their own way, and it is better if his abilities are not revealed yet. Imagine this. A blonde girl full of swagger arrives there saying that she had high expectations after hearing Kim So-hyun's name, but he's just a beginner with the same name. Not to mention that he's just a newbie, asking if he'll be at least useful, and the protagonist doesn't really like how she's acting. So Jorah says that this isn't something she should say to a C-rank colleague, and she asks how it is, asking if she thinks he's the same, just because he's the same rank, saying that he's much better than him. But then Barayan tells her to calm down, saying that it's enough, saying that if they're ready they'll leave, or asks if she has so much energy that she can even waste it before they enter the dungeon, and she gets all cute, saying that they'll see how amazing the protagonist is. And he notices that she looks like a villain from the Winx Club, and that woman Kim Barayan is Lee Jiho's friend, vice captain of the raid. Then another girl who seems much friendlier talks to So-hyun, and she says her name is Kim Yoon, and she's the team's choir, and he doesn't even have much to say to the girl, because she shines too much with all that excitement, and she tells him not to worry too much about what just happened, because there are people who like to be assholes with newbies, and so he doesn't understand anything about the girl. And she says she's sure Miss Yoon didn't want him to get hurt, and the protagonist thinks that if that was the case, she didn't want him to get hurt. Imagine if she did. Then Kim says she's excited to work with the protagonist, and he says yes, trying to be nice to her, but asks who that person is who was standing alone. Then she says she doesn't know his name, and Joyo and Barayan don't seem to know either. The protagonist questions what that is, asking if that even makes sense. Then the girl says that they said they can't reveal his name or face for personal reasons, but they checked his Awaken ID, so it must be okay. However, the protagonist says he doesn't know if it's really okay. After all, the reason he took a vacation and went to that orange dungeon is that soon everyone there will die. On January 1st, 2024, an entire raid team died inside a dungeon. It was an unprecedented case, since dungeons weren't that difficult yet. And the reason this incident happened was because what had been so covered up was the fact that 5 people died. But later it was revealed that the total number of people who entered the dungeon was 6, which means that the culprit who caused the tragedy in the dungeon is among them. And with his participation, the total number of people became 7. But he is sure that for the culprit, he is just another piece of shit that needs to be gotten rid of. And while he protects people and analyzes the situation, he needs to find the culprit. So he thinks that to do this, he will have to work a little. And then Joho says, "It is time for the explanation." And at the end of it, the Piyama smiled and understood everything. And the boy says that of course, and he calls everyone to enter the dungeon because they do not need to be nervous about going there. And inside the dungeon he says that it is just an orange dungeon and there will be monsters, but in the best case scenario, they will only be some beast-type monsters, like wolves and other things, but a huge cyclops is there ready to attack them. And the protagonist is quite surprised by this and questions why something one of those is there. So they go back to questioning why an orange dungeon has that difficulty. And while they're wondering why that thing is there, they end up being thrown away with a single blow. And the protagonist thinks that if the cyclops is in an orange dungeon, something is wrong. And he thinks that the cyclops is a monster that appears in yellow dungeons or higher, which means it's an evolutionary dungeon. And he says that just as transformation type skills can be evolutionary, there are also dungeons that can be like that, which gradually increase in difficulty. And he begins to notice that it may be that the reason the cleanup team was eliminated was because of the increase in difficulty of that dungeon. But he thinks that there are many things that can't be explained, and even a criminal can't change the dungeon's difficulty. And if they intend to kill everyone, a situation like this is actually very favorable. And he thinks that someone there is hiding their happiness behind a scared face. Then that annoying girl starts pressing them, asking what they are doing, and they have to get out of there quickly, saying that this is at least a yellow dungeon, but they think about the rewards. But she asks if they are more important than her life, and then starts asking how the hell they want to kill something like that, and says he's out. But then everyone asks him to stop her, and the monster passes in front of the protagonist, almost crushing them and going towards them. It turns out that everyone's eyes were drawn to that breadwinner, and they won't be able to stop the attack. But Joro gets in front of the monster's attack, stopping it right away. The protagonist is surprised because they said he was a rank B, and it seems that wasn't just talk. However, Cyclops is still a very intelligent monster named Karo, throwing him away. The protagonist assumes that he is still far from being a match for a Cyclops. With him being crushed against the wall, everyone is horrified because the strongest man there is on the ground. They all tell him to control himself because a rank B Awakened was defeated in a single kick, thinking that's why they need to get out of there now. But then, while the monster tries to hit Joro to finish him off, the protagonist gets in front of the monster's attack, and they are surprised that Ryan did that. Then the redhead goes there asking if Joro is okay, and he says yes. But the protagonist, looking back, is happy that he is at least in one piece. But the monster is attacking with one hand and punching with the other. But Ryan gets out of the way of his attack very calmly, going close to the others, and they notice that he is dodging the Cyclops attack, apparently quite easily. But he asks how long he will stay like that, asking everyone to calm down, because even if they try to escape, they won't be able to, and they question what he means by that. Then that guy in the hood says that there is no way out, and the path they came was blocked, and they question what he is saying. And the protagonist says that from yellow difficulty and above, dungeons have separate entrances and exits, and once you enter, you can't leave until you find the entrance. Then Joro says that the protagonist is right, but he doesn't know why the difficulty of that dungeon increased out of nowhere. But still, another thing comes at them from the ceiling, and the guys are after Makita because a commercial earthquake was happening, and they think that for now they will have to fight to escape from there. And the protagonist asks to leave the Cyclops with him, but Joro asks Ryu to wait, saying that he will also help. But at that they shout at the captain because there are many monsters there. And he is surprised that those humanoid monsters are going after everyone. And the protagonist says that there are about 30 of them passing by and killing everyone he can, and he says that at least. Besides the Cyclops, the other monsters are of an orange dungeon level, and leaving them with the rest of the team should not be a problem. Although, of course, that skill would be able to finish off those monsters in one hit, but it is not the right time yet, and he has to take care of that guy over there. Because they know that a Cyclops' weak point is the eye. The important thing is that eye is not referring to the one on his face, and the Cyclops' weak point is another hidden eye. And the protagonist appears right next to the monster's face, and he reacts quickly trying to hit him. But the protagonist stops on top of that thing's hand looking at him, eye to eye. Because there are 3 eyes in this equation, then he talks to that monster, hitting him right in the palm of his hand. And he says that the reason why the Cyclops is holding that club so tightly is partly to attack, but also to protect his eye. And the protagonist ends up injuring the eye he has in Cyclops' hand, and he thinks that it's over for now, and they're still fighting there. But then one of them calls Joro and Barayan, saying that it's over in his area. But then Saryan, who was claiming advantage, ends up lowering his guard, and Joro screams at him because the monster is attacking him, and Cyclops manages to catch him without the boy noticing. And he notices that the monster didn't die, and the idiot only now realizes that it wasn't the hand he was holding the weapon that had the eye, and it was the other hand that was on the other side. And he sees this and realizes that it went wrong. Then with a hand that crushes him as if he were simply a mosquito, and Joro screams because the boy apparently has now become a wasteland, and everyone wonders what happened and if he died. And he says that they knew they shouldn't come to that place because he was a lost cause. But then they tell him to look because the protagonist didn't die, even with that beating. And so he manages to get out of there using the heel and jumping up there. and he thinks that that one passed very close, and says that it could have been dangerous if he hadn't borrowed the guy's ability for a while, which is giant breathing, because his body's recovery is strengthened, so he falls there on the side using that ability, and thinks it was worth increasing its level, because the chief of the Sharo tribe, who has the Berserker trait, is also from the sacred bird of blue flames. He had good abilities, but until now it was only at the level of imitating the appearance of his abilities. But now he can copy their strength too, and it's a little more than before. But he wonders if he should play a little more while he's with her, and Joho runs to Saryan, asking if he got hurt, but the boy simply jumps away at an absurd speed, leaving the supposed rank B angry, scared, and the protagonist goes after those monsters, passing through them calmly, but detonates everyone with his sword and falls near this Klopp, who tries to hit him, but the protagonist appears behind him, asking where he's looking, hitting the monster's head right. Then Joho notices that that speed is incredible, and the technique too, and he wonders if those are really the skills of a rank C, and the protagonist continues, attacking him face to face, and the monsters go after Joho too, and he comes to his senses, thinking that he needs to focus on his own battle because that doesn't matter right now, and he just has to focus on what he needs to do. So he calls Barayan, telling her to stay in front on that side, and tells Mansoki and Eon not to forget the support. Then she asks if they heard, telling them to stay behind her, and then the protagonist notices that it seems like they've come to their senses, but the monster tries to hit him again, and he ends up having to get out of the way, so he thinks that they should end it between the two of them now, with him attacking the monster, chopping up the thing's entire body, consequently hitting its eye, and finishing this clope. And looking back, he realizes that the rest of the gang barely managed to kill them all, and Barayan herself is desperate, as she thought they were going to die. So Laura asked what they do now, because even though they killed all the monsters, they still have no idea where the exit is. And if these things keep sprouting from the ground, their fate is certain. And she asks if they shouldn't ask the agency to come and rescue her. But Joho says that honestly, it's also the first time something like this has happened to him, so he has no idea what to do. And they think that first, since it seems safe there, they should rest. So he goes to Suryan, asking if he's okay, and the protagonist says yes, saying that there's nothing exactly wrong. But he only now remembers that he was supposed to be a rank C, and says that he knows it was an emergency, but wonders if he overreacted, and says that his whole body is tingling. And Joho then says that they'll ask E1 to treat it, and he'll also talk to Barayan about what they should do now. And the girl arrives there asking if the protagonist is hurt, but he says it's not that bad, so she says that she'll start using healing magic on him. He just thanks her, but the girl he starts talking about how good he is at fighting, saying that he can't believe he defeated a Cyclops alone, and that he's a monster that even awakened from rank B has difficulty dealing with alone. But the boy starts to put Magellan, saying that he was lucky, but she asks Suryan if he isn't worried, and he asks if she wants to know if he isn't worried about the difficulty of the dungeon, and she says that she is too, but talks about the people there, and says that Minsik is scared to death and doesn't even try to fight, and Miss Yomi only knows how to be rude. And in the middle of that situation, when they even have a person with an unknown identity, those people especially are on her mind because they said some things about them in the online abyss, and says that they said things about them not sharing the rewards fairly, and made up excuses to make it seem like the two didn't contribute enough. And she says that maybe, no matter how they deal with that dungeon, they won't receive an adequate reward. But the protagonist notices that it was because of that, and he tells the girl not to worry, because he has a good idea of what happened now. So Juho goes to the protagonist, saying that he has something he wants to talk to him about, asking if he can go quickly. And the protagonist says that of course he will, while the girl gets desperate. And he says that in fact, he also wanted to ask her something, looking into Juho's eyes, who is not understanding the protagonist's intentions. And after the conversation, as they continue on their way to that healer, he says that it's good that there are no monsters around. And the protagonist says that they should have killed everyone who left there before, and says that we want to ensure until the next part. And Juho looks back. Then the Bagago asks what he talked about with Zorian, asking how that plan is going. And he remembers the protagonist, saying that he also had something to ask her, and he says that the plan is cancelled, and she asks why. And he says that what seems to be worse, waiting for them in the voice's room, and arriving at that huge door. Everyone gets scared, and the protagonist thinks that it is almost time for them to start showing their true intention. And entering that room, everyone wonders where they are, and Juho says that it looks like the center of the dungeon, wondering if there is an entrance there. But Laura looks away, seeing another door, if that is not the exit door, and they think they have to go, and she says they can finally get out of their place. but Juho asks her to wait because if they go suddenly, things could go wrong. Then the dungeon system actually activates in front of them, and the system sincerely welcomes travelers who have arrived there. The dungeon challenge will soon begin. They notice that it is the voice of the tower system, wondering what they are talking about when the exit is right in front of them. The protagonist says that when you go to conquer a tower, it doesn't end just because you killed all the monsters in the yellow dungeon above, just like in the Tower of Challenges. You can only complete the dungeon if you meet specific conditions. Then the system asks them to choose the method of completing the challenge. The first method is to fight the monsters, and they will be summoned through the back door for 30 minutes. The second method is to open the door on the other side and run away from the monsters. For 30 minutes, the summoned monsters will chase everyone. If you don't choose to open the door within 10 minutes, the random method will be chosen. Strength, and Baguaya wonders what this means, since the system will only do everything as it sees fit. So Corandera thinks this means they won't get out of there if they don't choose one of the two alternatives. So the blonde says that of course they have to flee, telling them to think about the difficulties of that dungeon. It's impossible to fight them head on, but Baldy questions if the rewards wouldn't be greater if they fight instead of fleeing, and they've done well so far. But the girl questions if he's messing with her, since he hasn't even done anything and wants to choose what they should do. But he questions what she's talking about, since she's just trying to think of reasons not to fight. But at that, Baguaya asks them to stop, telling them not to act like children, asking if they think it's the time for that. Meanwhile, Joro continues thinking and decides to look at Broda to see what he wants to do, and the girl hesitates to smile at him. So Baguaya asks what Joro is going to do, since he only has 10 minutes until the challenge, and he says that in his opinion, it's all thanks to Ryun that they managed to get there, even in the fight against the Cyclops. So he thinks it's right to ask what the boy thinks. And Laura looks like she has Alzheimer's, saying that the leader is asking this to the Ranksy idiot, the same one who saved their lives 2 steps ago. But the healer says it's true that he fought well, and Broda tells everyone that he thinks it's better to fight, and they're scared to death. And Laura says that he was very euphoric for having killed the Cyclops, and says that maybe his greed for money also increased in a situation like that. And Broda says that rewards are also good, but everyone must have heard what it's like to run and fight, and it definitely seems easier to run when they hear it. But if the only option is to run, this means that monsters they could never fight against would chase them, and he says that besides, they can't be sure what's behind the door, so it might be better to plan a formation and go in there. So Joro thinks that this is certainly plausible, and in the situation they find themselves in now, the best way to choose this, and if no one has anything else to say, they will get into formation. They really expect and choose to fight from the front, and everyone is in a state of extreme tension while the system fails. And so the door is open and the monsters come towards them, and with them coming, everyone has to do their part. But Joro already has his sword caught by a lizard monster, and he wonders why they are so strong, and in that his neck is also caught, and he is terrified that he can't breathe. But then Sarion appears cutting off the monster's tail and calmly attacking it, and he wonders if a minute has already passed. Meanwhile, the healer helps everyone by giving support, and everyone gathers the monsters they can, and the protagonist in turn is killing several at the same time, while thinking that it is almost time, wondering what will be the next move of the person who is on the ceiling in evil, and the protagonist wonders if he will show himself or hold back to survive first. But then something happens, so everyone is alert. Joro and the protagonist themselves do not quite understand, and so the healer is shitting all over, and the door that was there ends up killing that hooded kid, trapping him in spikes. And with them seeing that the exit was a trap, that guy ended up being killed. They don't even know what happened, so Joro tells them to get real, saying that the invasion is not over yet. But then the monsters start to undo in front of them, and so the first round was forcibly interrupted, and 10 minutes later, the second round will start in its place. And please, they must go through the door and reach the exit safely. And everyone doesn't understand anything, because they had less than 5 minutes left until the end of the challenge. And she asks who opened the door, and the healer says she doesn't know, and he ran right after the door opened. But then, Barayan asks if Joro can stop the monsters, and he says it's impossible, because as he said before, there's a possibility that the monsters will be much stronger than they've ever faced, and since they were fighting, everyone is without human life. But Barayan says that there may be a trap in the wheel escape. But in this, the protagonist tells them that they don't need to worry, calling everyone. But Laura asks if he can't see that body, asking where they are going, questioning if he wants to commit collective self-death. But the protagonist says that they really shouldn't know anything, and the system said that about Method 2, the summon. Monsters will chase you, and there was no mention of avoiding traps. But they say that there is a trap right in front. But the protagonist says knows that the system doesn't lie, and it's possible that the trap only activated against someone who betrayed the chosen wheel. And he asks if it's serious that they don't know about this, like people who climb the tower, and besides that, they should think a little. Everyone will die in 3 minutes anyway. Then he asks if it wouldn't be better if they at least tried one last time, and Joro agrees with the boy, saying that whoever has a problem can stay. But he thinks it's better if they leave like Suryan said. Then someone tries to counter-argue, but he says that everyone can say that he's not fit to be captain, and he can even call him shit if they want. But first they must think about how they can get out of there alive. Then Laura says she's in. After all, whatever they choose, it's always better to act as a group. So he calls everyone to leave because they don't have much time remaining, and they say that as soon as the door is opened, they will leave. But then they ask if Suryan is not coming with him, and he says he will stay behind, and they question what the boy is talking about and why he wants to stay, saying that he must have a screw loose, questioning why he stays there and fights those monsters alone. And the protagonist says that of course he will not stay there alone, and there is someone who needs to stay with him for everyone's sake, asking Kim and Yoon if she does not agree, and she finds this strange, and he asks her to go with him, so she says no, saying she wants to leave, asking why she has to stay. But then everyone leaves, leaving the girl with the protagonist, and Bajin asks what this is about and what she did wrong for him to do this, and he says he will explain later. But then the healer asks the captain to wait because she does not want to stay there, asking him to take her. But the protagonist talks to Joho, questioning if he has not forgotten of his promise, and he says yes, saying he hasn't forgotten yet, closing the door and leaving the two behind. And as she falls to the ground, she asks why Suryan is doing this to her, because if they stay there, they will both die, and she wants to live and is sure it's the same for him. But the protagonist talks about whether he wants to live, asking why she doesn't say that after lowering that dagger there, and questions if she thought he didn't know who she was affiliated with. And with that, he cuts the girl's clothes and says that she is from the Damp Guild, the worst assassination group in existence. And Damp is a murderous organization which serves as an incentive for all kinds of crime and will commit all kinds of atrocities in the future. And until then, the name of the Damp Guild is not yet publicly known, but in a few years, it becomes a threat to humanity comparable to the outbreaks, and they are also the ones who accelerated the end of the world. And if he wants to prevent the world from ending, he needs to end the evil at its root. And the protagonist says that she was planning to achieve conquest among the guild by wiping out that entire group. And the girl realizes that he knows, and he says that she made a very cunning plan, and Liamir may have been the least cooperative person, but at least he valued her life. And even during the fight, he saw how she kept trying to find a way to escape, and Mitsuki may have been quite greedy during the exploration, but his fighting skills are not good enough to wipe out the entire group. And about that mysterious guy, he entered hiding his identity, so he was clearly suspicious, and you used that to make him the first sacrifice. And on top of that, she leaked information about Zhao and Bareon so that it would be easier to suspect them when someone was taken. But that was exactly what made him realize what was going on. She starts to laugh, saying that she could already tell from the moment he defeated the Cyclops. But he is not an ordinary guy, realizing that he is really Kim Suryeon from the rumors, but says that it doesn't matter because in a few seconds he will die, and says that when she is dying, surrounded by those monsters, she will open the door and escape because she has the stealth skill and she is not a healer. In fact, her skills are specialized in assassination. And this was also the skill that allowed him to open the door without them noticing. Then the second route begins, and the girl tells him to try his best. And the protagonist says she wonders about that, and questioning if her ability really hides the smell of blood she has. Then she asks when that happened, with that blood mark on her arm, and then the monsters surround her, and she is finished. And the protagonist now realizes that there are only those things left in front of him, several Cyclops and other smaller monsters, which he goes after, saying he's sorry. But no one will be able to get past him. Yes, the protagonist kills when necessary. That's already a huge point in his favor. And the protagonist alone goes soloing all those monsters, and manages to kill each one with a single sword stroke, he says as expected. And they keep appearing, and there's no end to it. But in truth, he thinks this is better, since the stage was set for him to use that technique efficiently, and he tells everyone to come to him because he's going to finish everyone off, summoning a little mana in the palm of your hand. Meanwhile, everyone is running for the exit, and they tell them not to stop because the monsters will continue chasing them. And Laura says she already knows that, but Bagenho talks to Joro, asking if Ian is the one who killed that man with the trap, asking how the hell he knows that. and he says he only got information in advance. Then he remembers the protagonist talking to him when they went face to face. The boy questioned what Joro wanted, and he talks to Surian, asking if he is really rank C, and the boy questions why he is asking him that, and he says that in fact Barian and he talked a little, and the boy is strong enough to finish off the Cyclops with one hand, and they were wondering if he maybe is that ranker Kim Surian from the rumors, and the boy already feels that his peace is in danger. So Joro says that if he is really that Surian, he wanted to ask him if he would take the position of raid captain, because he thinks he is more suited than him for this, and taking care of a dangerous situation like this, and leading the team is just like him, and he asks Surian to answer him, waiting if he is really a rank C, and the protagonist says no, saying that is what he would have said, saying that he is right, and says that he is that Surian from the rumors, and Joro asks if he hid it on purpose, and the boy says that he has his reasons, but he was honest with him because he judged that he is worth trusting. Then Joro asks what he is talking about, and the protagonist apologizes, but he refuses his request because he has to continue being raid captain, and says that after seeing him trying to handle the position of captain, he was sure that he has the ability to calmly direct his allies even in a crisis, and furthermore he does not hesitate to sacrifice for the group, and he is a trustworthy captain and someone much better than him to do this, so he expects him to listen to his request. And Joro asks what request he has, and the protagonist asks if he remembers that he had said earlier that he wanted to tell him something, and says that it has to do with this, saying that soon in that raid a murder will happen, and he is incredulous with what the boy is saying, and the protagonist says he can explain in detail, but he must promise you first, promise they is going to get everyone out of there except him. And he then questions what the boy is going to do, and he says he's going to stay behind, since he went there to catch a criminal, and Joro then thinks about the best rookie in the abyss, and it's because he's that kind of skilled and famous person that it was possible for him to stay behind alone and buy time. But even though he's ready for it, he questions himself if he can really take care of the countless monsters in the dungeon, but then he thinks he should stop focusing on that, because even if he's worried, he can't do anything, because someone like him would just be a stone in his way. However, he thinks for a bit, saying that this really won't work. And no matter how much he thinks about it, he can't leave Surian alone, and he leaves asking Surian to forgive him. Then Bagago asks Joro where he's going, and he says he doesn't think he can keep his promise to get the others out of there, and he goes back, going after the protagonist, opening the door with everything, but finding everything burning there, he wonders what happened. Then one of the monsters goes after Joro, but the protagonist uses the sacred flame at the same time, and burns that monster with the flame. And with that, Joro is more than surprised, while the protagonist is also surprised that he came that way, seeing other monsters coming towards him, and in that he uses the flame again on his sword cutting, and burning the monsters in one, and Joro is left open-mouthed seeing that. And when the boy falls to the ground, Joro runs to Surian, but the protagonist talks to him questioning why he came back, because he thought he told him to get out of there, and he says it was bad, because he couldn't bear to let him go back. But he asks with Takwinho and E1, and he says that they took care of him, and in fact, to be exact, the monsters finish it off, and he says that he came back in a hurry, but he had already cleaned everything, and says that he didn't help at all, but he says no. He says that he can still be useful, because that's where the wave really begins, and that portal starts to change and become more threatening, and a lich appears from the portal, and he says that it's finally the appearance of the final boss, and that's where things are going to get ugly. And seeing that thing, Joro wonders what the hell that is, and he says that as he said, it's the boss of the dungeon, and he questions if he's saying that the boss is a skeleton monster like that. But then the boss talks to him, because calling him a skeleton monster is kind of rude, and he's even more surprised that the skeleton talks, so he says that he would like him to call him by his title, instead of something that displeases you like skeleton. So Joro questions what title that is, and the boss introduces himself all cocky as the priest of darkness, a lich, all cocky, but the protagonist tells him not to act like that when he only gives him the tail powder. But Joro doesn't really understand what the boy is saying, and the protagonist says that he is not a real lich, and to be exact, he is a creature that managed to partially become a lich, and the count and density of the magical power of a real lich is on another level. But the boss does not accept this, asking if he thinks he would fall for such a pathetic provocation. But the protagonist goes back to insulting him. Test of the tail. Weakling, fails, keeps barking, and does not die from his windpipe, and fake lich. And the lich, seeing the boy tear him apart like that so much, he gets very angry, calling him an arrogant wretch, saying that he will end him and feed him to his monsters, invoking his magic and bringing the monsters back, even though he was burned. And then Joro notices that the bodies are rising, and the protagonist thinks that even if he is only a half-lich, he is still a lich, so he is able to command the dead. And the reason why the Adanjo changed to yellow is probably due to his effect, and Joro wonders why he had to provoke someone like him. But the protagonist says he did it on purpose, so he will focus on him first. Then he summons the sacred flame on his sword, and makes a circle around the two of them, and Joro is surprised while the protagonist tells him that he does not want to be rude, but he is not on a level that can face those monsters and it will not be easy to fight while he protects. He becomes down because he understands what the boy is saying, and the protagonist says that the undead should not if he can get into that circle. Then he just has to attract the monster's attention without leaving. But he asks what the boy is going to do, and the protagonist says that his opponent is that guy up there going all out for the lich. But when he attacks the monster, he gets out of his way, and the boy is surprised, falling without being able to hit him. And the lich makes fun of flying around there lying down, full of swagger, saying that he is fast for a human, but he won't be able to touch him. And the protagonist questions if that was a teleportation, because lichs are not strong creatures in hand-to-hand combat. They tend to be the type to create undead in open distance, and also avoid direct combat, and all this to hide their biggest weak point, which is the life crystal on their forehead, and the mana stone is their life source, and lichs need to distance themselves to protect themselves. So naturally, they develop the ability to teleport to meet their needs. But this means that as long as you follow these movements, you can kill him without any problems. He leaves with everything towards the monster, but the lich gets out of the way, appearing right on top of the protagonist, and he notices that he used the cloak to create a momentary blind spot and is already on top of him, creating a Rasengan, throwing it towards the boy who receives it squarely, but activates the sacred fire to end those rays, making an explosion in front of the lich. Then as he flies, he sticks the sword in the ceiling to be able to hold on. He wonders if he finished off that monster, but the lich smiles again, thinking about the sacred fire, saying that if in fact it would be able to inflict a critical hit on him. But even so, what use is an attack that doesn't hit him? And he continues to make fun of the protagonist, laughing down there, and the smile gets frustrated because he thought he had hit him, and he thinks he's still not good enough to hit a flying target. And the lich says it's funny that he's trying to think of a solution while he's swinging there, saying that thinking isn't a bad thing, but he suggests that he look at his sword first, because the sword is imbued with the lich's lightning, and he says that his death energy infects everything it touches and slowly ends his life. In about 5 minutes, he should lose his only weapon, but the protagonist in turn thinks that this won't happen because he'll end it before the 5 minutes are up, jumping on top of the lich once more. Meanwhile, Joho notices that there are all those monsters around, and notices that the only thing he was protecting isn't the sacred fire, but he thinks that he didn't go there just to be protected. And the protagonist continues fighting the lich there above, and this makes Joho sure that he would only get in his way if he left, and a B rank like him would die in an instant. But even so, he gathers courage and leaves the fire, thinking that standing still and doing nothing is not his style, going after the monsters and attacking the first one, managing to hit its back and causing considerable damage to that thing. While he attacks that lizard, the protagonist notices this and sees that he left the sacred fire. However, he realizes that Joho is doing something better. He is using fire to be able to fight, and now that he stopped to look, the amount of his magical power has increased since they entered the dungeon. He wonders how he managed to evolve during this, and says that in this case there's a change of plans, and so he goes down there to help Joho. Then the lich asks if he is running away, but the protagonist goes after the monsters, chopping several of them at the same time. Then he falls in front of Joho, asking the lich what is this talk about being running away, telling him not to be a bother to them, saying that they are just starting out. Then Joho talks to Sarion, who was playing because he went there, and the protagonist talks to Joho, apologizing to him for what he said before, saying that he has a level that can handle those monsters, and first he must help finish off those little ones. So he wants him to help finish off that unfortunate guy. Meanwhile, the lich keeps smiling, saying that they are really in deep trouble, asking if they think they can win in a 2-on-1, and the two stand in front of the lich. And Joho asks if he thinks that is possible, and the boy says yes. Then Joho says that personally he is not sure, but he will trust that he knows what he is talking about, telling the boy that he will try not to get in the way. And the lich gets more and more pissed off, saying that he will teach them the terror of death, launching all his monsters. Then Sarion calls Joho to go after him, killing several of them with a single attack, while Joho goes directly after the lich. Then he notices that this time they are coming straight at him, but says that he is much weaker and slower than the other boy. But the protagonist gathers sacred fire in his sword, throwing it towards Joho, himself and the lich, and he notices that it is a split attack, saying that they are even smart, but none of the attacks will hit him. But Joho doesn't think much, just summoning his power in his sword, and uses the storm sword with the wind rush towards the lich, and that wind rush catches the sacred fire, imbues it, and creates a spiral of fire towards the lich. And he realizes that the abilities were combined into one and ends up being hit. And in that, while Joho is about to fall, the protagonist goes to him, catches him with the sword, and throws him up again. So the lich that was just hit thinks that he will not fall in that exchange twice, and begins to launch his death ray ability in the direction of Joho, who parries with the sword. But the protagonist appears behind him while the lich is chanting advantage. And in this, they both are each on one side, resonate, and say that he ended up attacking the lich. But while he is attacking, his sword ends up falling apart, breaking due to the death curse, and the lich with that begins to smile all happily, saying that it is a shame, and it seems that he forgot that his sword was infected with the energy of death, and asks how he plans to give him defeat without a weapon. But he asks who said that only he has a sword, and they smile behind his back. He ends up hitting the lich, cutting his breaststone, and with him being cut in half, all that is left is to scream, despair, and end up dead, falling to the ground. And the protagonist says that when he started to fight with Joho, he knew that the lich would think he would dare his bait, and that is why he was much more focused on his movements than on his, and he thought he would be able to defeat him when his sword broke. But since he decided to fight with Joho, he planned to let him deliver the final blow, because he predicted that he would be able to pierce thanks to his underestimation. And even crawling on the ground, the lich says that this is not the end, and says that when darkness extinguishes the sun, their king will be reborn. But even so, he crumbles into dust, and he continues saying that their king will banish them to a realm of pain. But in this, the two just watch while Joho asks if it's over, and the protagonist confirms that it is, and thinks to himself that it's over. But his final words are giving him a bad feeling. After all, he spoke of his king and that shadow up there. Good thing, right? And after all the trouble, they somehow manage to get out, but they're left wondering what they should do about it, with everyone giving interviews in front of the portal. And then the reporter asks Barian what happened to her companions, and she says she hopes they get out alive, but they might already be dead. And she starts crying desperately, even throwing up her snot, and Jorhu thinks it looks like Barian called the rescue team, and that's a bit difficult, so he tells the protagonist that he can't reveal his identity, especially the fact that he really is Kim Suryeon from the rankings, and he says he knows it will leak someday, but for now he doesn't want to get involved in trouble. But then Jorhu says he's going alone, and the protagonist questions if he's going to do that in this mess, and he says yes, saying it's good to make excuses and solve problems, since he took care of Barian's mess several times. But he says there's one condition, and a part of the reward he gave before, he wants the protagonist to take all of that, and Suryeon is surprised that he wants to do that. And he says that this much stones and ether would be worth a few 100,000, talking to Jorhu, but he says that even if he earns less, since he is a rank B earns well, and he says that the boy can take it anyway, because he doesn't want it, and he doesn't deserve it. But then he asks why Jorhu thinks that way, and he says that they managed to defeat the lich because he had his help, and it is because he received help that cannot be compared to that. Besides that, he believes that if he really wanted to, he would have defeated the lich alone, and he knows that he gave it a chance and grew. And the protagonist begins to notice that what seems cannot fool him. So Jorhu asks him to take that. While he takes care of that, he should go out the back way, and he will call a taxi to pick him up, and says that he has an acquaintance who is a taxi driver, and calls Yan Jorhu, leaving the protagonist ready to get out of there, and he really leaves. But Suryeon is surprised that there would be a taxi that would come so within the mountains like this, saying that Jorhu has more connections than he thought. And anyway, he managed to find the culprit as planned, but in the end he couldn't save everyone. He was only able to save the rest thanks to Jorhu's help, and it would be much more difficult to do it alone, and he thinks that it's still not enough, and he needs to get stronger. And in the past he thought he was strong, and he managed to survive alone when everyone had fallen, but that wasn't enough, and to change the future he needs to get much stronger, and so he will recruit people he can trust. Although at this moment taking care of himself is his highest priority, because his exhaustion is at 83, and he is very ill, and the driver says that even though he looks so young, he seems very fragile. And the protagonist looks at the horizon thinking about making some money for the hospital bills. Meanwhile, a guy in an apartment is checking his phone, until his secretary comes by calling him, and he asks what's wrong, and he says that there is someone who wants to sell ether stones. That guy is the head of the ether stone management department. Lee Kyung-jong then asks what he wants to sell those stones for, and when he gets the case information, he notices that it's a C rank, asking if they can't take care of someone like him alone. But then the secretary talks about it, saying that he brought more than 500 grams of ether stones, and he is very surprised by this. And the protagonist, while they talk, is waiting for a VIP room, and the boss arrives there all friendly, apologizing for making his dear client wait, saying it's a pleasure to meet them, introducing him to Lee Kyung-jong, saying that he is in charge of taking care of the ether stone auction hunt, and he says that he heard that he brought a large quantity of these stones, and the protagonist shows him, and he sees each of those stones, noticing that they are indeed real, and stones of that size would only come from a yellow dungeon or higher, asking if he got them legally. The boy already finds his question strange, and questioning what Lee Qianzhong means, he apologizes, saying that he didn't mean to offend, but they know he's a rank 100 awakened, so they're a little worried about how he got a reward from a yellow dungeon. And the protagonist says he wants to take advantage of this to trick him. And he says he was very lucky, and thanks to his luck, he managed to get them as part of the dungeon reward. Then he shows something to both of them that makes their eyes widen, and they get very scared, noticing that that is the high rank ether stone of the life attribute, and that is the onlit life stone. And many people don't know, but this is a type of ether stone. And since you need to break it to be able to kill them, you only get it as part of the dungeon reward chest. But the chance of getting it is very low. Honestly, it was an unexpected and lucky achievement. And Su Ryan says that if they suspect him, he can go somewhere else. But then, Lee Qianzhong tells them to wait, saying that they shouldn't rush, asking why the boy doesn't listen to him. Then, he notices that the stone is no longer there, and the protagonist says that it's only once that he'll wait for this, saying that he'll listen to the offer only one more time, and the two are scared to death. And that night, in his bank statement, he receives an absurd amount, 600 million for that amount. And he thinks they got the price right. And even though it's going to be nothing but garbage when the apocalypse comes, he still needs it now, because it's good that money won't be a problem for a while. And the best part is that he doesn't have to ask his mother for money anymore. And he tells her that he's back, and she runs to him, happy that he returns safely. But when the protagonist looks at her, he notices that she has a bruise on her face while asking how his trip was, and he sees that. He is surprised in a very bad way, and he is horrified looking at her. Then she says that he had told her that he would come home early, and dinner is not ready yet, asking if he had fun with his friend, and says that his face is very thin. But he calls his mother asking about that bruise, questioning what happened, and she says that it was nothing, telling him to calm down, and asks if he knows the restaurant she works at, saying that she got hurt while breaking up a fight between some customers, but he is dying of anger, asking why she doesn't stop working there, and says he doesn't think she should keep taking so many risks. But she questions what he's talking about, asking if he won't be going to college soon, and says that he has to at least earn enough money for tuition, and she couldn't create such a healthy environment for him, but she wants to give him as much support as possible like his mother, and he's always been her pride and joy in the end, so she wants him to be proud of his mother too. Come on, what a badass character, what a fucking badass relationship. This kid has to give the world to this woman, I swear. If he doesn't, I'm going to Korea and beat him up. And he's more than surprised to hear those words, because he remembers his early childhood and his original mother asking him if he thought he could be the strongest awakened just with that much mana, throwing all the results at the boy's feet, telling him to try harder, and he needs to become a decent son. After all, he's destined to be a hero. So while he's dreaming, she calls Soryu. Calling him comes back, asking if he's okay, and the protagonist thinks for a bit, talking to his mother that he has something he needs to tell her, and sits with her at the table. And she is surprised that he isn't awakened, asking if he is talking about that thing that appears all the time on TV. He says yes, and with that he can earn good money, and the awakened also has a good reputation in society, so his plan is to work as an awakened and not go to college, and apologizes to her, because he should have told her this before. He didn't want to hide it from her, and says he wanted to tell her from the beginning, and she is surprised by him, asking if this is really what he wants to do, asking if it is not just because of the money and social reputation, but from the bottom of his heart. She questions if this is really what he wants to do, and the protagonist remembers the future, saying yes, saying he really wants to do this, and she says she understands. And he asks if she's not mad at him, because he thought she would be mad, since he hid this from her for over a year. And besides, it's a dangerous profession, and he thought he would be worried and mad at him. But she says yes, that she is worried about the boy, but seeing how he hid this from her for over a year, he knows she won't change her mind. She'll just get mad at him, and she doesn't want him to change his life by force, and she just wants him to make his own choices and be happy. But as always, if there is something bothering her or making her unhappy, she asks him to him right away, and the boy agrees, thanking his mother, and says that he made a little money as an awakened and believes it's enough for her to be able to quit the restaurant. So he starts pulling his cell phone out of his pocket, showing it to his mother, and she asks how much money he made, and as soon as she looks at her son's bank account, she widens her eyes, noticing that he made 600 million won, and asks how they got so rich in such a short time, wondering if awakened people normally make that much money. And he asks his mother if she's not exaggerating too much, and he thought she would be worried about him, and she says that of course she's worried, but who doesn't like money in that world, and says she'll prepare better food for dinner, asking Sarayan to wait a bit, asking if there's anything special he wants to eat. And in that warm situation of that home, he thinks that it's only been like this for a long time, this cozy atmosphere that he had never experienced before. And sometimes this coziness becomes so comfortable that he almost thought about giving up everything and just enjoying this peaceful life. But he is not the real Kim Sarayan who should be there. This comfort belongs to the real Kim Sarai and not him, but that does not make him sad at all, since he was given another chance to protect the peace in this world. So he talks to Kim Sarai, saying that if by chance he returns to that body, he wants him to be able to face people confidently and does not want him to lose such a loving mother. And he says that he will make the real Kim Sarai a hero. And a while later he goes to his room, saying that he needs to become much stronger than he is now, and he will not achieve anything if that Marilito gave him so much trouble. And he thinks he needs to climb the tower again, and to do that, he needs a weapon. And not just a broken weapon that he took from the authorities, but a legitimate weapon, which means he will have to go to another place, and arriving at Ferreira's house. He says he may say it's been a while since he heard that voice, and Ferreira is preparing several weapons. After finishing one of them, the protagonist comes face to face with the master weapon hunter, who still made a mistake entering the place. He then keeps calling Ferreira, who ignores the boy, but after being called so many times, he leaves very angry, asking who the hell is bothering him. If no one answers, he has to assume there's no one to leave. However, the protagonist says it's a pleasure to meet him, but he doesn't understand anything and asks who the hell that boy is, while the protagonist just smiles happily at Ferreira. Then he talks about the sacred sword balming, and its name comes from the sword used by the hero Siegfried. Its name means a sacred sword that kills dragons, and this was the weapon that he, Kim Sung-in, used in his past. And the supreme sword, created using countless precious materials, along with the efforts of several awakened ones. And the one who forged Balming was the master weapon forger, the old man, who still made a mistake. And in the past he went to review, who still made a mistake. But arriving there, he only found the old man alone inside the forge, and seeing that the boy arrived, he was not very excited. And the protagonist questions him about the item he asked for, and he says that he has already finished giving him an impressive sword. And he says it's one of the best swords he's ever made. Then the protagonist talks to Thadero, saying he can't accept this sword, but he asks how so, and he says he already knows that the materials he was saving for his supreme work of art were used to make it. Then he notices that the boy already knew, and the protagonist asks how he can accept it like that, since he didn't even receive payment for the service, questioning how he would simply accept an item that contains all his treasures. But Dairo speaks to him, saying that lately everyone is calling him a hero, and the legends about him are so great that they have already reached him himself. And even though he spends all his time in his workshop, that he remains isolated in the mountain. But the more the legends about the boy increase, it seems that his life becomes more complicated, and asked if he doesn't think this is unfair, because even though no one has done anything for him, people expect him to help them unilaterally, and he has to live always fulfilling the expectations of others. While his expression becomes increasingly serious and sad, and the boy has no way to counter this. So Dairo speaks, which is because he is the only one who can do it, and that's why he decided to create an unfair relationship like that. And just as people can want his help without giving anything in return, someone can come and help without asking for anything in return too, because making a good weapon for him is something only he can do. So Dairo was his master forger, his benefactor, and one of the people he couldn't protect in his past life. And currently he is in front of this Dairo, saying that it's been a long time, and this time he will protect him. And the protagonist says it's a pleasure to meet him, introducing himself with Su Ryan, and he says he doesn't know the name, asking if he is some famous person or something, questioning how he found that place. And he says he heard that he makes weapons for the Awakened, but then Dairo asked who said that, saying he doesn't make weapons for just anyone, telling the boy to disappear. And he says that was exactly what he expected to happen, because he is always the same. And he says he came prepared, saying he brought materials, and receives no answers until the old man goes to him, saying that he thinks he can at least take a look at those materials. And the protagonist notices that he faked his bait, and inside he shows the materials to Dairo, who is surprised, and he says that it is exactly a highest rank ether stone, and that was the other item he got from the elite reward chest, the highest rank ether stone. It is an item almost impossible to get at this point in time and in his past life. The highest rank ether stone was only discovered after the outbreaker of the Guangzhou dungeon, and that was the other reason why he needed to attack that dungeon. And this ether stone has many uses, but they really shine when they are forged into weapons. He questions where the boy got that, but Sorian asks if it really matters, and the old man says that of course it doesn't, asking what he wants. And the protagonist says that he wants a sword and would like him to make a powerful sword for him. And he says that he thought he was some kind of stuck-up brat, but if that's what he wants, he went to the right place, saying that he doesn't need to pay, since he brought sensational material, and thinks that first they have to sign a contract. But the protagonist says that they don't need that, and then Ro asks why, questioning if he's crazy, also questioning if he doesn't know how valuable this thing is. And he says he is well aware of this, and he completely trusts the old man, and knows that he wants the forging process of that sword with the ether stone, and not the sword itself. So the old man starts laughing, saying that he is quite funny, and that he liked the boy, saying that he will accept his request, and will make the best possible sword that matches that material, and the protagonist agrees, asking him to do his best, and says that it will take some time to make, and if he needs a weapon until then, he can pick up anything useful there in the workshop. And the protagonist actually picks one and goes home, and remembers that he will need a production period of 10 months. He already expected, but it is still a long time, and at least he got the sword that looks good. And as expected of the old man's work, it is already useful, and he thinks that all that is left is to advance in the abyss. And he enters the place, going again to the Guardian, and arriving there, the Guardian realizes that the boy passed, and he begins the approval of the 11th floor, returning home, and going up floor by floor, each time being the first, and goes up to the 14th, 15th, 16th, and so on, even with difficulty, overcoming each of the floors. And so half a year later, Joho is in a very bad situation in a hospital bed, and Barian tells him that he is an idiot, because he will be there for 6 weeks to fully recover, saying that he should have taken it easier, but he says that it was not as easy as he thought it would be. But she says that out of nowhere he said he was going to challenge the tower again, and even increase the difficulty to the 5th, asking if he was not trying too hard, and says that he ended up with only an injury this time. But what if something serious happened? But he says he can't give up just because it's difficult, and with that attitude, he'll never reach that boy. But then he gets a call asking who's calling him. But as soon as he sees it, he realizes it's Soo-hyun, and the protagonist talks to Joho, saying it's good that he answered and it's been a while, saying that if it's okay with him, he has a favor to ask him. And so, the protagonist says he asked Joho for 3 things. The first was to see if there were any good buildings in Siam for the awakened to live in, and since he got the shop for his mother, he needed a good place to live and be independent. And the second request was about the dam guild, and there's no way the news of the Wanzhou dungeon hadn't reached them yet, and that G1 might have been the end of that. But they might wonder why the guild member died without fulfilling his objectives. And because of that, he was worried that it would be dangerous to pursue them. But Joho says it's okay, and he'll be careful not to get caught. And the protagonist says that from what it looks like, he can stop worrying about it. So he asks the boy to leave it to him. And besides, the third and final request was about him, saying that on December 24th there will be a crash in Eni, and he says there will be at least hundreds of thousands of casualties, and it will be an unprecedented disaster. But Joho asks how the boy knows that, and he says he can't go into details right now, and he assumes he's asking him for something difficult, and he can refuse if it's too difficult, and he won't blame him, and he said that because he wants to, and Joho trusts him, and he says he's already told him that too, saying he'll do what he can, and the protagonist agrees with that, saying that he will leave everything in Joho's hands. And how much for the last request? He talks about the disaster that will soon happen in Eni, saying that he asked for help to stop a green Danjon break, that there is not even half a year until Christmas Eve, and he needs to get much stronger before the Enian incident, and he will get the sword back from Daiho soon, and if he can pass the approval on the 20th floor, he is sure that he will be able to stop them, and of course, if he can complete the 19th floor perfectly, it will be even better. So, he arrives at the 19th, and faces a desert in front of him, and falling there, he sees several monsters around a group of people, and there are rats there, and the system tells him that he is in the rat's den, and he must survive and escape, and the protagonist realizes that there are really a lot of them falling near those things, scaring everyone. And the monsters look at the protagonist, and he notices that those are bones of something, and it looks like they were completely cleaned a while ago, and he thinks that those guys must be hungry, and in the eyes one of those things, he must be pretty hot, so the rats go after him, but the protagonist kills them all in one go. However, one of the rats manages to jump on top of the boy, attacking and tearing his clothes, but he manages to finish off everyone nearby. He notices that he's let his guard down, wondering if it's poison or something else, but no matter what it is, it seems like it's going to hurt a lot if they bite him, and they all come at him again. However, the protagonist uses the sacred flame to kill everyone in the area, then jumps on top of one of the bones, noticing that they're not walking alone, but there are a lot of them, and it's going to be a waste of mana to keep using the sacred flames. After all, he doesn't know how many there are left, and if he could finish them all at once, it would be better. But then, the rats start climbing the bone where he is, and the protagonist has to jump away to avoid being bitten, and he thinks he doesn't even have time to create a strategy, killing the rats and seeing others gathering together to be able to climb up to him. And he descends over the bone, cutting everyone he can see, until he finds a hole in the ground, and notices that there are cracks there that is paved, wondering if there is an open space down there. And he realizes that there is only one way to get it using the sacred flame, throwing it into the hole to be able to open it, and going there to finish everyone at once. So with the sword stuck in the ground, he uses a kick to simply break the hiding place and entering there in his lair, and after opening that crater in the ground, he goes down to the basement, finding a lost ruin, and when he looks around, he notices that it seems he was right about the open space, and bets that that is the true place of approval. Then he sees a rat there, noticing that only he survived, but he questions it because he seems afraid of something, and the rat simply runs away, and ends up stepping on a trap, activating it, and being impaled with thorns, and the sprout begins to realize what that place is about, and several torches light up around him, illuminating his entire path, and he begins to realize that shit happened, because he knew that this wasn't going to end with just rats, and as expected, there was one of those things there, and it seems to be a basilisk. And face to face with that monster protagonist, he only manages to escape the tail it gives him. But even escaping that attack, he goes after it again, trying to pierce the monster with his sword. But he can't. The sword hits and bounces back. And he realizes that even Darrow's sword isn't effective, and that thing has insane physical resistance. But he wonders what happens to magic using the sacred flame in that thing's mouth, and the snake swallows its flames, but doesn't seem to be affected in. Anyway, looking at him, calm, trapped, he swallowed, and he notices that it didn't take damage, and says that it's not as much as the physical resistance, but the magical resistance is also quite a lot, and it will be difficult to win using the sacred flame. And the monster comes back at him attacking again, but the protagonist manages to escape to the side, but the monster uses its tail to attack him. However, he uses the jumping up, but the monster doesn't stop there, coming to be able to bite him, and as soon as the protagonist is in a place where he no longer has fixation, he can only use the sword to stop the monster's mouth, not letting it close so it can bite him, and he notices that he goes faster than he expected, but he is thrown against the wall, trapped against the monster, and after receiving that beating, he falls to the ground and starts to think, noticing that that thing is very agile for its size and seems to have no weaknesses, and he notices that he would be taking a somewhat disguised beating for that guy, but he is no match for him. Look, protagonist, you are getting beaten up enough for you not to even have one of those, see? Then the monster tries to bite him again, but the protagonist moves out of the way. While still in the air, he thinks he only has half his mana left. Before he can use it all, he stops his movements and attacks the top of its head. But as he attacks, he rolls back. When he looks back, he sees a vine there and hangs on that thing, using the ceiling to walk and run in the other direction. He thinks that no matter how high the magic resistance is, it will still hurt if he attacks that part, hitting the side of its head, almost near the eye. Then the monster starts to struggle until it throws its tail towards the protagonist, almost hitting him. He needs to make a bridge to escape the attack. Then he imbues the sword with magical flame again, attacking the lower part, the softest part of it. The snake starts to struggle because of the attack, throwing the protagonist away. Increasingly irritated, it goes all out for the boy. He just smiles, and the snake realizes that he has done something bad, because he is all tied up and trapped, with only his face close to him. And he talks about the physical, magical resistance, and even the regeneration that thing has. And he is actually the first monster that has fought with those 3 high attributes, and even having all of that, he doesn't win against him, and he is stronger than that monster. Taking the flame and throwing it up right into the snake's mouth, finally finishing it off, and after the battle, he has an evolution in his sacred flame, summoning it in his hand and throwing it up. And from there comes the bird of the sacred flame that returns to the protagonist, descending in the middle of all that fire, and he performs the phoenix evolution of the sacred flame, and this skill can be obtained on the 18th floor when the sacred flame skill evolves, and that is not really a skill. This is more like summoning, and you can control and give orders to Phoenix. And he says the only downside is that it uses a lot of mana, but it's worth using all that mana for that skill. And he says this because that guy's destructive power is 10 times greater than the sacred flame, and the snake I thought he had already killed is still there waiting. So he throws that Phoenix towards the snake, and it passes through the snake's chest, killing it in one go, and he finishes the 19th floor masterfully and feels more at ease that it's finally over, because the difficulty in the Tower of Trials increases exponentially every 10 floors, and that means there's a big chance he'll get into big trouble on the 20th floor, like what happened on the 10th. And he's already done everything he could in half a year, and now he only has one thing left to do: go back to Darrow in search of the sword he asked the blacksmith to make. And that's when everyone starts talking about the rank, and it seems he got it again. The protagonist got the rank 1 on the 19th floor, and they question how someone can complete the 19th floor with that score, and that means he's been at the top of the 9th floor rankings for half a year, and they wonder who the boy is. And he also ignores all calls from the Awakened Association, and they'll see him say that he also doesn't respond to any recruitment offers from famous guilds, and no one knows who he is, and he's a mysterious guy, but Jorah knows the information, and the protagonist goes to meet him, all excited about the boy's arrival, and he says that he's fine, he just arrived, and the most important thing is about the subject, and he asks if the boy liked the car he got for him, and the protagonist starts to say that he thinks it's a bit too extravagant, and Jorah questions him about it, telling him to do him a favor, because it's the least someone like him can do is drive one of those cars, and he says that when he asked him how he got around, he said he only went by subway and bus, and he says that he has no idea how shocked Jorah was, and says that awakened people have to walk around a lot. That sports car has 8 cylinders next to a natural absorption engine and several other things. But the protagonist tells them to stop that and talk inside right away, and when they get there, he asks how the boy has been, questioning if his preparations for the 20th floor are going well, and the protagonist says yes, saying that he has been quite late because he is waiting for something, but luckily they told him to pick it up today, and he thanks him for looking for a new house for them, as well as the store for his mother. But Jorah is happy to help him, asking where he said they live, and he says it is in Anson, and he thinks about it for a bit, since it is not very far from anything, and the protagonist gets a little embarrassed. And Jorah says that somehow he managed to schedule a meeting with the director of the certification agency next month, and if he tells them what will happen, he might be able to get help. And the protagonist thinks that next month means 2 months until the outbreak, and it's not exactly the ideal scenario, but he asks about the dump guild, so Jorah says he's been keeping an eye on them, but hasn't gotten much out of them, and it seems they're very good at hiding their activities, and there's been an increase in deaths and disappearances of awakened, but the result is harder dungeons appearing recently, so he need not suspect Mick of this. However, there was a strange case recently where the awakened suddenly died in the middle of the street, and the autopsy showed that it involved poison, and the protagonist thinks about it remembering the guild leader Ars, and he asks if there is any way they can take a look at it, because he feels like they would get something if they follow this trail, so Jorah agrees to do it for the boy, and asks him to be careful when returning home, and the protagonist goes to the car thinking that there are only 3 months left until the outbreak in Anhang, and he says that Jorah is doing his best. But this whole situation still seems pretty dire, with the guild leader Ars still having Choi in his hands, and he says that what seems to be the safest option is to do it alone. So he goes to the blacksmith, and arriving there, he notices that all the weapons there are of high quality. So the blacksmith thanks him for waiting by bringing the weapon, and says that it was difficult to do all this because of how good the materials were, but that it just made everything more fun, and says he can guarantee that the specs are great, so he shouldn't worry, telling him to go ahead and take a look. And when the boy picks it up, he realizes that it's an excellent sword, and it's more normal than the Baeming, but from the moment he picked it up, he could tell that sword is alive, and with that, he throws the sword that was in the sheath up high, and lets it fall on top of the sword he just made, and when the sword touches the other, it breaks at the same moment. He realizes that the greatest degree of sharpness and durability is there, and it can react to his mana and discern exactly what he wants to cut or not, and that it is a perfect sword. And with that, the blacksmith asks if he thought of a name, saying that the sword is his now, and he should give it a name, and the protagonist says that she will be called Gra, the dragon slayer, and he questions about that, asking how, like 100 or 200 grams, questioning what that cheesy name is, because he didn't like it very much. But the protagonist explains about Gra, saying that it is another name for Baeming in northern European countries, and he can't use the name Baeming again, but he doesn't want to resist the meaning of the name of a sword that kills dragons. After all, he's going to fight one. So at night he says he's going to the old man, and he asks if he's already going, asking why he doesn't have some tea before leaving, but he says that next time he will do it, because he needs to go straight to another place, and in a fortress far away. A guard is watching over the place, until someone touches him on the shoulder, and he turns quickly, but notices Commander Maximin, so he apologizes for scaring the guard, asking how the border patrol is going, asking if there is a problem, and he says no, and everything is fine. But Maximin says that he must be tired, saying that he needs him to work on the gold just a little longer, because if the Oldring Kingdom launched a surprise attack against them, the entire castle would be in danger, and he agrees with this, telling him not to worry, as he will do his best. And while the guard leaves, Maximin keeps thinking that it's been a month, and the situation inside and outside the castle is terrible, and if this continues, the commoners will be the ones to suffer, and he wonders what they should do now. But in that, someone appears there, telling Maximin that he has a lot on his mind, and he gets scared, looking quickly, and asks if that guy has arrived, calling that ultra-suspicious guy of retainer, and he asks what he brings of these parts, questioning if he wasn't helping his highness. And the retainer says he came to see how the guards were doing, and he asks what the current situation is. And Maximin says they are doing everything to protect the castle, but they are not in a favorable situation. After all, Uldren's military force is much greater than his, so while he speaks, the retainer tells him to wait, asking if he wants to abandon the castle, as he raised that hypothesis, questioning if he heard wrong, and Maximin says he is saying there is a possibility. And if this confrontation lasts too long, it will be difficult to continue with the armed forces. So, if that is the case, he will do it, but the retainer says he cannot, and they will all die there, together, before even considering abandoning that castle, and Maximin finds this strange, wondering how he can say that, since it is not as if he will join the battle. And he asks what the retainer thinks a soldier's life is, and not long after the declaration of war came from Uldren, that man who was. Apparently, His Highness's first-class retainer came to them as commander-in-chief, and he asked for absolute obedience to his superiors, and that is the duty of a soldier. It is the rule of war, but that man considers the life of a soldier as inferior to an ant. And Maximin asks how could His Highness appoint someone like that to be commander-in-chief. Then the retainer says that in any case, he should not have unnecessary thoughts and hold out for a month, just one more month, asking if he is not more than capable of this, calling him the hero of the ancient kingdom, Captain Maximin. And he thinks about holding out for a month and talks to the retainer, saying that nothing will change even if they hold out. But then, the whole castle begins to shake, and he questions what is happening, and that is when the soldier arrives, calling Maximin because they have a problem, and there was an unexpected external attack just now at the castle gates, and the protagonist arrives there, tearing everything apart. And a few hours before, in front of the entrance to the 20th floor, the protagonist arrives near the gate and finds another Bible lying around there. And he asks what they have there, since he is the doorman on the 20th floor, and he says that the boy has a rare vision these days, and asked if he came to him for advice, and he says yes, asking if that guardian could help him, and he says he doesn't know, and maybe, after hearing a single offer from him, if he likes it, he will do it. And the protagonist says he imagined that, since the doormen get more cunning with each floor they pass, then the boy says he will hand over 100,000. And the doorman doesn't quite understand, being surprised, and the boy says he will give him 100,000 points, asking if that is enough. But the doorman starts laughing, saying that he will pay him an amount that most people would take 10 years to save in one, saying that he is really different, asking where he is going, and he says that he is thinking about challenging the floor at level 10, asking if there is anything he should be careful about, and he tells the boy not to worry, because he will not die there, and other people would die before that happens, although he should not kill anyone if he can avoid it. And the boy does not understand very well, and the doorman says that, in addition, he must be aware of what his objective is at all times. He questions if that is everything, and the doorman says yes, but he says that he gave him 100,000 points. However, the doorman says that that's all, telling him to come in soon, and as soon as he pauses, he notices that he is like that again, and he always speaks in riddles, and even knowing that his advice always helps in the end, he questions what he meant by his objective. But as soon as he walks in that white space, he falls into a black hole and goes into a forest, grabbing a tree, and managing to fall to safety, realizing that he is on the side of a kingdom, and the system tells him that the level 10 trial has begun, and the kingdom of Grendelin is an iron fortress protected by thousands of soldiers, and then they say that within his 1 month limit, he must bring down the castle. But please keep in mind that he is not their enemy. He may be able to gain an ally during the suffering of the trial. He must discover the secret inside the castle and survive. And the protagonist notices that the explanation is talking too much that day, but because it is so detailed, he was able to understand a lot about the situation, and the system said that he needs to bring down the castle and discover the secret. And this means that it is not as simple in the case of defeating himself head-on. And the same goes for what the system said about him not being their enemy, and the gatekeeper said something similar about not killing anyone if he can avoid it, and he thinks that means he should avoid unnecessary battles. But he questions how he brought down a castle without fighting, until during the night, he continues thinking about it and notices that there is a thick wall in front of him worthy of the name of Iron Fortress, and the guards and mercenaries on guard are also quite skilled. And there are even some people who can use magic, and they must be at least rank C in terms of awakened, and they are abundant in numbers and have a great geographical advantage, and he has to bring down the castle, but he must not kill anyone, and he also has to discover the secret. And he has a month that is plenty of time given for approval, but he does not have that kind of luxury. After thinking a little, he says he decided to go to the gate, scaring the guards that were there, and he tells his guard that he does not need to think too much, and he will just do what he always did, a face-to-face confrontation, and tells them that he is a passing traveler. Apologizing, he asks if he can spend a night in the castle, but the guards ask if he is crazy, and ask which kingdom he is with, questioning if he can't say that they are prepared for battle. And the protagonist thinks that in the 2 months he has until the outbreak in Anson, he needs to finish the approval as quickly as possible and go make the preparations. So the protagonist says he understands, taking his sword and apologizing to them, because he will have to enter by force, and he jumps over them, standing on top of the gate, and cutting everything with his sword, taking it down. And everyone is scared to death with all that destruction, and the protagonist stands in front of it, entering their fortress without killing anyone, I think, by force.
And it's because of this very dirty approach of the protagonist panics, because the intruder destroyed the castle. Looking at his sword, he's pleased with, realizing it's truly exceptional and that its forging allows him freely adjust its edge. All the guards rush towards him, but the protagonist, completely out of control, charges forward, defeating everyone and quickly passing by. He looks back and realizes there's nothing he can't cut with his sword, and at the same time, if he wants, he can choose not cut. He only passed by, defeating everyone, not killing them, just clearing their path. Other soldiers then begin firing at the protagonist from above, using bows and arrows, but he deflects each one with his sword, surprising. They realize they can't hit him even with their bow, and are completely terrified. The protagonist then jumps onto the wall, right in the middle of, and throws the leader of those soldiers off. He climbs up, but tells himself he's sure he didn't die, and one of them asks if he's alright. The guy is actually still alive somehow. Well, alive, walking, we don't know. Then they start talking near the protagonist, who doesn't understand anything, and he wonders what it's all about. Then, one of the superiors orders him released, telling him to protect the castle wall because he himself will fight the man. But then they say the commander can't, because if he goes against the invader and something happens to the future of the kingdom is ruined. The protagonist is surprised that it's the commander, since the soldiers are prioritizing protecting instead of fighting. They start apologizing to Captain Max, and one of them orders the soldiers to escort the commander inside. He continues to ask everyone to release him, but still orders them to protect him in the safest place possible. The protagonist notices that despite the man being their superior, they are ignoring his order and doing their best to protect, and he was planning to advance without hesitation while understanding the situation. The situation is dire, but he realizes it's faster to just capture, so he jumps over all the soldiers getting close to the cap. However, one of them says he won't let him get near the commander, launching an arrow that latches onto the protagonist's foot, holding him while he's still in the air. But he manages to simply kick the guy, bringing him closer, causing them to collide. While colliding, the protagonist falls with the guy, but he still manages to step onto the wall and jump away with one of them. They start shouting that he captured their ally, ordering him not to attack. But as he approaches the commander, there's not much they can do, and he throws those soldiers aside and goes straight to the commander, who quickly breaks free from his own ally. The protagonist cuts the rope, noticing that he can now clearly see him face to face, and that this guy is definitely strong. He clashes his sword with the commander, and the shockwave throws all the other soldiers who were there far away. After they all fly off, the protagonist comes face to face with Captain Max, and one of them asks if he's alright. He tells the soldier not to worry, saying he'll take care of him. And so they must check the situation outside the castle. The protagonist notices that the man is not an agent of the Uldren Kingdom, and is surprised that he knows that. Maxman thinks he must be a third party acting alone, and the protagonist is completely surprised by him, as he has exceptional situational awareness, befitting his position as commander. Furthermore, he possesses skills comparable to an awakened rank-based warrior, and this man is truly formidable. They warn Maxman to be careful, as they can't do anything without him. However, Maxman questions how many times he's told them not to appear so weak, but they confirm that it's true, saying that they all believe. They recall that 20 years ago, during the war against the Uldren Kingdom, just as they brought victory before, as long as they are there with, they will easily stop Uldren. The protagonist says he was wondering why these allies had such strong confidence in him, and that he is the war hero of that country. He adds that it seems no one realizes that this confidence is the very thing that binds him, as he was exactly like that when he was. Kinson then speaks to the commander, apologizing for destroying the castle gates without permission, but he has urgent business. He asks if he can be allowed into the castle, and the commander says that's unthinkable, saying the protagonist is talking nonsense, as his kingdom is at war, and they can't let a dangerous individual who destroyed the castle gates and threatened the soldier. The protagonist then says that if that's the case, he'll have to apologize again, and says that the way to bring down the castle without bloodshed is to persuade the person they trust most inside the castle. He goes after Maxim, and Maximo even thinks about questioning who the protagonist is, but his hand is tied by the boy. He notices it's the rope that bound him for, and so the protagonist takes the rope from his mouth and uses the transformation, using Gigantomachia, raising his hand and transforming it to the hand of a giant. He thinks he'll use this guy to discover the castle's secrets and pass this test perfect, and if possible, he'll also help. He breaks free from those shackles, then smashes through the entire ceiling, and everyone starts calling for the captain, asking if he's safe. But when they look ahead, they're surprised by what they see, and since they can't find the captain anywhere, they decide to go to the area and continue defending the castle. Everyone there agreed, and one of them says he was right in front of them, wondering where he went. The protagonist, already inside the castle, emerges from within a shadow along with the cap, throwing him out. When the captain comes out, he questions what that was, and the protagonist thinks to himself that it wasn't a waste to use those points in the 15th floor shop. It's the shadow assimilation ability that IT allows movement from one shadow to another, a dark ability often used by awakened assassin. It has a long casting time, consumes a lot of mana. It's a difficult ability with limited uses and an effective range, but it's the perfect ability for infiltration, and he prepared it just in case he needed to secretly infiltrate somewhere or stay out of reach. from the radar during the provocation, and it seems that it was he's right, and besides, he says he's sure he's inside the castle, but he smells a strange scent there, his own scent, and there's only one more thing left, to obtain the secrets of that place through that guy there. So he asks if the captain is alright, but unties him, and the protagonist apologizes, because given the situation, this was the only way he could think of to talk to him alone, apologizing for what he did. But then the captain questions if he wasn't trying to attack the kingdom, and the protagonist says no. Then he asks why he broke down the castle door and attacked his soldier, and he says he had no choice, and they wouldn't let him in. Then he says he was in a hurry, couldn't waste time. But then the captain doesn't understand anything, asking what the boy means. The protagonist says that there will soon be a problem in that castle, and the captain is surprised, questioning what kind of problem he's talking about, asking if the kingdom of Oldran is going to attack. The protagonist says he doesn't know either, because he went there to find out. That's true, but if something really happens, it will be a much bigger problem than a war between two kingdoms, and so he is surprised, and the protagonist asks if anything suspicious has happened inside the castle late. Then he remembers something, recalling the conversation he had with that strange guy earlier, and he says that even if that's true, how can he trust him enough to tell him? He questions what he will do if he is a spy from another kingdom, and the protagonist says that if he were really a spy, he wouldn't have used such a laborious method because he can take down that castle alone. As soon as the captain hears him say this, he remembers when he exchanged blows with the protagonist, saying that to be honest, he realized at the moment their swords clash, and there isn't a person in his kingdom who can face this man in battle. Then the captain notices that he is saying that he will have no choice, because he cannot stop, even if he doesn't believe him, and the protagonist asks if he will tell him, and he says that he has some suspicion, but in exchange, he will go with. The protagonist, and the boy, is happy that things are going as he likes, saying that he is more than welcome. He asks if they are still far away, while accompanying the captain, who says they are almost there. When he opens a door, he says they have arrived, and explains that the place used to be a prison about 100 years ago, and perhaps there was a high rate of death, but many prisoners died. He says they ended up closing the place, and building the prison elsewhere, and not many people know of its existence. However, he questions the protagonist about what this place has to do with the problem he mentioned. The protagonist says he'll soon find out, because he can smell him in that castle, the unforgettable smell of the dead. However, they hear a voice asking who's there, and they're both surprised. When the captain looks back, he sees it's the retainer. He speaks to Commander Maxim, asking what the hell he's doing there, saying that a commander can't vacate post during wartime. He questions whether this man with isn't the intruder from before, and then the protagonist asks what he's doing there, since that prison was locked. Until the commander opened the door. The protagonist explains how the retainer knew how to get, saying he was passing by and sensed a presence in that location, and that's all. He also mentions that they should be careful inside the castle at a time like. However, the protagonist thinks it's a moment a little too perfect for this, and that he might follow it. But the retainer says that's ridiculous, ordering Captain Maxima to compose himself, and says that he is the intruder, asking why a commander like him is doing something like this, questioning if he's being controlled or something of the sort. However, while he's ordering Maxima to get out of here, the protagonist simply decapitates him in front of the cap, surprising. As soon as the retainer falls to the ground, Maximum asks what he did, because to kill the retainer of His Royal Highness and the Commander-in-Chief, he really is an enemy spy. However, the protagonist says that the king's retainer is a very interesting disguise, asking him if it isn't. Then, when he sees that thing rising, Maximum is surprised, and that one over there is a lich, standing in front of him, and Maximum can't believe what he's seen. He's saying that he wasn't a man, but a monster all this time, asking what's happening in this country. The protagonist immediately connects the smell of death and the darkness in a castle that isn't even at war yet. That smell was enough evidence to know that he was lurking inside. He had encountered someone similar in the past, so he was able to discover his identity faster than usual. However, there's a clear difference from that time. This is a real lich. He's on a completely different level than the fake one he saw in the Guangzhou dungeon. The retainer says he knew he wasn't what he seemed, asking where the protagonist came from, and finding himself in a different castle from the neighboring kingdom. But the protagonist isn't interested in talk, saying that he might even have come from a world he doesn't know. The retainer says it doesn't matter if he answers that the plan has changed or not, so Maximum is surprised by what he's seen. Speaking, he confirms that's exactly right, beginning to use magic in front of the two, surprising. The lich says they're both going to die right there, then throws that purple and black lightning bolt, but the protagonist steps in, throwing his sword towards the lightning bolt, cutting it instant, surprising both Maximum and the lich. The protagonist realizes that this guy is also surprisingly good at handling magic, and he wonders if it's because he's using the highest quality ether stone, since it seems this sword won't break like the other one. But a good sword doesn't mean it's enough, because the lich is a dark type monster, and unless they use a holy skill or a direct strike on his life stone, the attacks won't do much good. And he remembers Maxim, noting that this guy is quite strong, but it would be difficult to expect help from someone without a sacred ability, so he imbues his sword with his flame, thinking that if that's the case, he'll finish him off using his sacred flame. and he jumps on top of the lich, attacking, but the monster runs away. From the front, flying, he summons another of those lightning bolts towards the protagonist, but he throws his flames at that thing, quickly destroying, cutting the effect of that lightning bolt and creating a huge flat, and he puts his hand in front to avoid being blinded. And he thinks that this was unexpected because his sacred flame couldn't overcome the lich's aura of death. He is much stronger compared to that weak lich he faced, and he could survive a little longer, continued using his sacred flame. But he doesn't want to waste mana because nothing good will come of it if the fight prolongs, and he realizes that he has no choice but to aim at his life stone, going all out against the lich, trying to hit it, but the monster just moves out of the way, and the protagonist is surprised. But then he steps on the wall that was in front of him, prepared to attack again, throwing his flames towards the lich, who continues to dodge, and besides dodging, he prepares an attack to throw at the protagonist, and when he throws another, this time, the boy's purple lightning bolts move out of his way, appearing right behind the lich, ready to strike face. He delivers a powerful kick to the bony creature, sending it flying. It lands in the direction the monster is coming from, and when the lich looks back, he sees he's about to hit. But before the protagonist can land a blow, he simply creates wings on his back using that purple lightning. The protagonist notices he defended himself by releasing that aura. Then the lich turns, preparing another attack, throwing it at the protagonist, who now begins to cut the object. But then the lich lands calmly in front of him. Maximum asks if he's alright, and the protagonist simply says he's fine, but continues to think something is strange. Despite having such a strong aura, it seems the lich isn't taking him seriously, because so far he hasn't revealed his full power. He wonders if that thing has a plan, but the monster remains silent. The protagonist senses the aura coming from that little door over. On the side, the lich says that it seems the preparations are complete, and the boy doesn't understand anything, but he gets happy, saying that the game is over. Behind Maxim, something comes out of that door, which is broken open, flies towards them. An aura comes out of it and rushes towards the cap, but the protagonist stops in front of the aura, saving him and also surprising the cap. Then the protagonist comes face to face with whatever is coming from inside, saying that he finally understands. Now he understands everything. Maximum notes that suddenly something attacked them from behind, questioning if the lich can control the darkness from afar as well, and the protagonist says that's not it. After all, this is the home of a lich, a dark and gloomy place where the light doesn't reach, a place where intentions, hatred, and death endure. And so the lich says that what he seems to have discovered is that this is his home, where the sweet cries of the dead are echoing, and it is their home. And so when Maximum turns around, he is horrified, seeing yet another lich there. He thinks this can't be true, noticing that there are several liches in that. 3 of them for them to face, and the protagonist finally discovered, with thousands of soldiers in a castle with a large but enclosed and limited area, that liches have infiltrated, disguised as the king's assistant. There are 3 of them, and this can only mean one thing. One of them says that he prolonged this too much, saying that they won't waste any more time on weaklings like. The other, somewhat timidly, says that he should have killed them when he was going down the stair, asking if he really thinks he can continue with his plan. He's so careless. Maximum questions what those guys are talking about, and what kind of plan is that. The protagonist wonders if he knew that the lich have a king among them, and Maximum is surprised. The protagonist talks about the lich king, the sovereign of the kingdom of death, and there are some ways to summon him, one of which is human sacrifice. Maximum doesn't believe it, remembering that the retainer spoke to him last night about abandoning the castle, because he wanted them all to die together, and the protagonist says he's right, since they were using soldiers from the kingdom as sacrifices to summon the lich king there. Then the shy one says the protagonist is quite clever, and the one in the red cloak is one of those who, as a mere human, knows of the existence of his great king. The other one agreed, saying that while they were searching for sacrifices for the king, they found that castle, and after killing the king, they controlled his body to disguise themselves as his assistant. When Maximum discovers he killed a king, he becomes increasingly angry, ready to attack the lich in the purple cloak. He says the ritual should happen in a month, but they manage to complete the altar faster than expected. However, the protagonist stops Maximum, and the lich says that once they've dealt with, they'll begin the summon. The protagonist looks back, surprised that he'll have to face 3 liches, as they are not easy opponents, but he can definitely handle them alone. He must control his mana well, but one of them immediately begins attack, summoning a square around. This square becomes a prison, and the protagonist can't believe it, as it's the guidance of dark. This is one of the highest ranking abilities of a lich, which crumbled into space with the summoned dark. There's no way a normal lich shouldn't be able to use that ability. He doesn't believe they are apostles of the lich, and so he bids farewell to the human, trapping the protagonist inside. Not even the sacred chimas work against this type of ability, and he begins to realize things have gone wrong. But then that barrier is broken in front of him, being shredded and cut into many tiny pieces, and the protagonist can't believe what's happening. And when he looks at Maximum, he's surprised that he broke the darkness's guidance, and the lich doesn't even believe it, since no physical or magical ability works against a lich's guidance ability, questioning how he managed to break it with a sword, and questioning who this guy is, thinking his sword is sacred. But Maximum asks what they're talking about, since his sword is just a simple old sword. And simple, it just so happens that he is a holy knight. And the protagonist finds out about this too late, and Maximum says that they killed his king and tried to turn all the soldiers to sacrifices, saying that he will never forgive, saying that the plan ends there, and he charges at. The lady in red says that they found the opponent quite annoying at that moment, but they say that he is still just a human, telling them to crush him to death and not waste their time, as they are almost fulfilling their objective. Nisso in purple orders them to bring the dead from outside the castle, ordering that no human escape be allowed, and the lady in blue runs off carry out that order, but Maximum says that he won't let. Nisso in red asks where he thinks he's going, preparing a spear to attack Maximum, ordering him to just die out. However, the protagonist uses his divine flames to break that attack, protecting Maximum, who throws himself towards the flame and also towards the lit. The phoenix simply breaks the spear and charges at, and he wonders what the hell that firebird had, ordering him to leave. Then, the one in blue also gets scared, and when the phoenix looks at, she lunges at. He says he didn't do anything and runs away, but Maximum asks who the protagonist is, and he's surprised to see him with that face. He says he understands why he'd be angry, saying they killed his king and turned soldiers into sacrifices, but even so, he shouldn't let the anger consume him. Then Maximum asks what he should do in this situation, and the protagonist says that he himself is the commander of this battle. However, if he's well known, only this once, he questions if he's willing to trust and allow him to lead. Maximum is surprised by the boy's request, and while the Red Lich is fighting that thing up there, the protagonist asks Maxim to prepare. He says he's not sure if this is the right thing to do, asking the boy if it would be right to leave him then run away. He says he's been receiving his help all this time, and if he doesn't fight alongside, it will be too much. It's bad, but the protagonist says he's out of time, telling him to decide quick for the sake of the castle and the soldiers' lives, asking which is more important. And so he agreed, and actually leaving the protagonist behind. Then he says the gatekeeper told him he had to be aware of his objective at all time, meaning he has something to do that's separate from what anyone else has to do. He says he'll leave the soldiers' protection to Commander Maximum. Then he goes after those liches, saying he'll do what he has to do, wielding his knife against the first one. And as soon as the one in the blue cloak comes, he just looks up and is surprised. They ask what the protagonist just did, and he simply sheathes his sword, and a huge cut is made in the middle of the place, knocking him in two, and everyone is surprised, because that kid is crazy. Then with that collapse, all the soldiers outside realize what has happened, because the castle roof, it simply fell, so the Lich try to defend themselves. With their magic, the one in blue, says that they are making a point of bothering, forcing him to do it later, saying that he won't repeat it, ordering him to summon the dead, and if he doesn't, he will kill him for the protagonist. So he actually prepares to do it, and their leader orders the one in red to go see the altar, saying that it needs to be intact for the ritual. Then he tries to run away, but the protagonist's phoenix chases after, almost hitting him, and he runs for his life. But the protagonist is right there behind him, questioning where he thinks he's going, and before he can even think, the protagonist lunges at, cuts him in two, cutting his life stone, undoing it. The one in purple starts to get increasingly angry, cursing the protagonist with everything he had. But then when he launches his lightning bolt, the protagonist manages to dodge, and so he falls to the ground, casting another spell, making a cube around him. He thinks he's still in midair, and that cube closes before he can do anything. Something happens, but the protagonist summons his phoenix, and it clashes with the cube, causing it to break free. The protagonist wonders if he overdid it, but the Lich orders him to stop that nonsense, knowing that the sacred flame bird is devouring his mana, and if he surrenders now, he will inflict a painful death. The protagonist just laughs, saying he's right, and that thing consumes a lot of mana, ordering the phoenix to return. He still questions who said he would be useless without mana, since he still has his sword. Then the protagonist remembers moments before, when Maxima was still trying to see if there was anything else he'd do to help for. The protagonist says everything is fine, as he has already done something, and Maxima doesn't understand. The protagonist says that now he can use the divine affinity, the sacred blade, and asks how about they start this gaming. After that destruction, the soldiers are still questioning if there were any fatality. He was ordering them not to waste time, trying to discover the enemy's location. And as for the other, everyone was wondering what was happening in that palace, until the Lich came out, surprising everyone outside, and they questioned what was in the sky, and that was the shy Lich, and he thought the other one was a real pain in the neck. But if he didn't do what he said, the creature got angry and became terrifying when he was angry. So he started unleashing his magic, ordering all the dead to resurrect, throwing several wisps of magic to the side, and bringing zombie, and the poor soldiers who didn't even know what was happening were shocked, seeing monsters coming towards them. But they looked up and saw that it was that one there who was summoning the monster, ordering them to attack. But then, they question who that guy is, and the Lich remains motionless in the sky until someone calls Loki, and it's Maximum who spots him. He says he's relieved to see him alright, but after the castle gates were broken down and this happened, he's scared. Maximum says everything is fine, stating that he's already evacuated all the soldiers from the area, so there shouldn't be any fatalities there. Besides, he says that this isn't important now. Question regarding whether the castle gates have been repaired. Loki says not perfect, but while they talk, several dead are climbing the wall. Maximum tells him to do everything to protect the castle gates no matter what, and he will take care of it. He should then look after the soldier, but Loki calls the captain, saying they will help too. Maximum questions how many monsters are outside the castle wall, and he says he is different, can handle them easily, and they won't let him fight alone. Maximum is surprised but agreed, ordering them to get into defensive formation. He thinks they won't fight him at full strength, and that's his job. The protagonist's job is to protect the other soldier, and that man will take care of the rest. The protagonist is truly fighting the purple lit, engaging in a fierce battle. They continue exchanging blows until the protagonist tries to land a powerful hit, but misses because the lich moves out of the way. However, even missing and still in the air, the protagonist manages to turn and strike the lich, almost cutting his mana stone. The lich falls to the ground, stinking, and the protagonist immediately rushes in. However, the lich continues to find this impossible, as he has been growing stronger for almost a century, and as he is now, he can be considered the strongest among the disciples. He is shocked by what is happening, but he continues to look at the protagonist, questioning why he can't kill the human like. The protagonist actually breaks his mana stone, and the lich falls to his knee, refusing to believe it, thinking that he cannot die in their place, and that his plan will fail this way. However, the protagonist thinks that he is not disappearing even after having the lich cuts the stone of life, and he thinks he's truly a unique being, but tells him to relax, as his plan has completely failed. However, the lich questions whether he told him to relax, saying that he's the one who should relax, asking if he really thought they were the only ones with the plan to summon the king. He says that countless disciples are working day and night to revive the Lich King, and even if there are 10 like them, they won't be stopped by anything, because the king will rise again and bring darkness upon the world. However, the protagonist, fed up, says that as he already said, he should relax, going after the Lich, and saying that the Lich King will die by his hands anyway. The Lich asks what he said, but the protagonist finishes him off without much explanation, and says that what he told the Lich is true. The Lich King invaded reality during the outbreak in his past life, and the one who killed him was himself. He says that in any case, it was the same thing in the Guanji dungeon. Also, and all the Lich running around, and his resurrection might happen sooner than in his past life. And that's problematic because it seems like everything is happening faster than back then. So he thinks it's better to worry about what's ahead of him than to think about the future now, since he only has one Lich left. And that Cap, he wonders how he's doing, and Maximum is trying to get the shy Lich together anyway. But he keeps flying around and taking a shot at. The captain can't seem to land a hit, and Maximum thinks it's difficult to fight against those free movements, and he's taking advantage of the fact that he's not good at aerial combat. But he thinks it doesn't matter. After all, he didn't plan to defeat him in the first place, and he just needs him to focus on him so he doesn't get close to the other soldier. That man will be back soon, so if he can hold on a little longer, everything will be alright. However, he ends up realizing that his friend is dead, and the timid Lich can't even believe he's dead and wonders why, questioning if he's dead. Maximum is surprised when he says his friend is dead, because it seems that guy finally succeeded, and in that moment he's actually happy that the other one died, and starts summoning a huge magic circle, making it impossible for all those soldiers to even breathe. Then Luke calls the captain, and Maximum is scared of what's happened, and asks what he thinks he's doing, telling him to stop that now, because the ordinary soldiers won't be able to withstand it. He'll end up needing to use that ability. But then the protagonist, inside, he goes straight to the Lich, hitting him with a powerful punch. The punch pins the Lich to one of the structures, and Maximum is surprised to see him. He asks if the boy is there to finish him off, and the protagonist says yes. But the situation isn't good at all, as it would have been dangerous if he had been even a little later. Maximum is relieved that the damage wasn't more serious than. The protagonist talks about the Great Drain of Death, which drains the life force of all living creatures in the area and strengthens the undead. His attempt to avoid killing anyone must be for that reason, because if more people had died, the spell would have been much stronger. Even though he's just an apostle of the Lich King, he didn't imagine he would be this powerful. He acts as if he's a subordinate to the other guy who defeated him, but he's just as strong. Then the Lich says he won't forgive him under any circumstances, and keeps saying this over and over again, then summons a huge, the scepter, which emerges and surprises them both, pulls the scepter into his hand, and begins to use his magic through it, summoning once again a gigantic magic circle in the sky. Maximum says that he created a protective barrier for his spell using the staff, and the protagonist thinks that the Great Death Drain will activate again this way, and he needs to break his life stone quick before everything gets out of control. But when the protagonist attacks, he hits a barrier, and the Lich begins to reiterate that he will never be able to break because he conjured this spell with his life, and if he wants to break this spell, he will have to kill him. Thus, the protagonist is repelled, and he wonders what to do because he might be able to reach him. But if the spell lasts longer, countless soldiers will die. But Maximum tells him not to worry, because he said that before, the boy's job is to finish him off, and as for his job, he will perform very well, thrusting his sword into the ground. On the ground, he says his job is to protect the soldier, and with that, he raises a kind of barrier that comes out of the tip of his sword, rising above the entire castle. The soldiers, seeing this, are surprised, as the oppressive aura is gone, and they question what has happened. The protagonist realizes that this is the sacred shield sanction, and he says that this is his ultimate ability, the strongest as a holy knight. It increases the morale of all his allies within range, and weakens the effects of dark. But even though it is so good, it consumes years of his life. But even if it takes his life, he must protect the soldier, no matter what. He leaves the rest to the boy, and the protagonist wastes no time, jumping onto the bubble and preparing to attack the lich from above. He notices that everyone is fighting hard, each risking their own. Then the lich appears behind him, ready to attack, but the protagonist calmly stops the attack. The lich questions how inferior human. Neither they, nor anyone else, killed their friend, and opposed him without knowing their place, saying that they are weak, powerless, and can't do anything alone, and that they need thousands of them for a single sacrifice, and that they are all insects. But while the protagonist continues defending himself against that thing, he questions whether the other is his friend, noting that even someone like him greatly values friend, but asks if he knows something while holding the staff, and shatters it completely, saying that the people he killed, and the thousands he planned to kill, all had friends and family. With that, the protagonist once again summons the flames of Phoenix, throwing them at the lich, now asking if he understands what it's like to lose something important, burning that thing, saying that he should then take those feelings and shove them up the asses of his dead friends in hell, finishing off the lich once and for all, cutting him along with the mana stone. The lich wonders how he lost to a mere inferior human, letting his staff fall, but the staff doesn't even reach him. The protagonist's Phoenix force shatters the barrier, shattering it completely. All the undead inside the barrier also shatter, and they notice they are disappearing. Maxman manages to stop his ability and wonders if it's all over, but he faints before he checks. However, the protagonist appears and catches him, preventing him from falling, saying he did a great job. Maxman asks if it's really over, and the protagonist says yes. Maxman sits down more calmly, but says that before celebrating, he'd like to rest a little, asking if the protagonist is alright. Then the protagonist also falls to the ground, completely exhausted, and says he wants to rest a little too. They are even surprised that he only wants to rest a little. And after a while, at the agency that manages awakened beings, someone there is thinking that this is impossible, because a dungeon is going to appear in the middle of Anya, cause an outbreak. And here that person is Song Yute, director of the agency that manages awakened beings, and he questions that guy if he expects him to believe it. In something so absurd, talking to Lee Jusong says that humans can't predict when a dungeon will appear, and he questions if Joho is saying that this dungeon will immediately cause an outbreak and plunge the city of Anya into pure chaos. He says that even if a dungeon appeared, an outbreak doesn't happen that quickly, and at least a month has to pass, stating that this is common knowledge. However, Joho says that the appearance of dungeons also didn't make sense, saying that he can't ignore something when he has no idea how it happened, and the city of Anya has 600,000 citizens, and they are in danger. But Song says that if nothing happened, he would be the one at risk, saying that they could end up putting 60 million panic, not just 600,000. However, someone arrives and tells them to stop, saying that it will never end if they continue like, and that this one doesn't hurt. Song speaks with pity and asks if he thinks this makes sense, and he says that it has never happened. Joho has a point, but he says that the problem is how reliable. The source of the information is unclear, because if he's not just being pressured by Inserter, then who would be the person who gave him the information? Joho says that the source of this information is a rumor, and they must have heard that name before, saying it's Kim So-hyun, saying that he's the one climbing the ranks in the abyss, causing a commotion, that mysterious super rookie. Song asks if he knows Kim So-hyun, and it hurts to say that a few months ago there was someone named Kim So-hyun who entered the Gwangjo dungeon, the same one he was in, but he was rank C. He says that he's the right person, asking if that made him change his mind. Song then says that it didn't change, and Joho asks how so, and he says that there isn't enough proof showing that he's the right person, asking if he wants him to trust him now. Joho tries to insist, but Song says that if they evacuate everyone as he asked, and nothing happens, what will happen? The director, speaking as if the responsibility will fall on him, tells Joho to listen, explaining that dungeons are like natural disaster, and even if some citizens die because of it, wouldn't be his responsibility. Joho realizes that he'll act as if nothing will happen, just because he doesn't want to take responsibility, and he almost curses Song, but he says that he decides everything, and he's also the one who receives all the responsibility, and he'll pretend nothing happened that. Meanwhile, the protagonist masterfully completes the approval of the 20th floor, receiving 100,000 points, and his attributes have also been increased. Strength by 1, agility by 2, vitality by 2, and mana coefficient by 2. The protagonist is surprised, as it was very different. He can't believe he had 3 apostle level leader, and even though it's a multiple of 10 floor, it's still only the 20th, but at least he had significant results, and his coefficient went up to 70, and his mana rank went up to 7, which is high even for rank S, which was his goal in the past. But he questions whether it's not over yet, because the system is still calculating the reward level, and he receives a lot of notifications without understanding anything, questioning what it's all about, since he could have received help from those, and he realizes that's why the gatekeeper said that, and why he had a whole month, and he wonders if he's too used to doing things alone, because he feels like he's lost some. And so, when he looks down, all the soldiers helping, the reconstruction along with Maxman, he says that maybe he didn't do everything alone this time, and when Maxman says that the castle problem has been solved, but the war against the Uldren Kingdom is not over yet, and tells them to prioritize the castle walls and gate, and then fix the interior, and everyone agreed, and the protagonist goes to him saying that Maxman is very busy now, and he is surprised, because he was looking for him everywhere, and thought he had left without treating his wounds, but the protagonist says he went for a walk to change eyes at a bit, and Maxman says he wanted to have his achievements reckoned. In front of them all, the protagonist explains that he fled precisely because of, and it's somewhat uncomfortable to trade or to receive expectation some. Maxman then says that he was like that in the past, the war hero of the old kingdom, Maxman, and after all his efforts in the previous war, that's what everyone called. Of course, he wasn't sad to receive that nick, but the pressure intensified over time, and eventually he was crushed by it. Since being called a hero, the protagonist notices that he's feeling the same pressure felt in the past. But then Maxman says that the protagonist taught him something, that his job is to protect the soldier, and thanks to that, feels much lighter. The protagonist notices that he really does seem lighter, saying that the answer is always right under their noses, and he agreed, asking if that's not how life works, mentioning that his Royal Highness was assassinated, and there's a lot they need to do in the main country, but the current plan will begin there. The protagonist then said, "That's good," telling him he's leaving soon, and Maxman is surprised, saying it's still early, but the protagonist says that it seems his work is finished, and he leaves the rest to the commander. Maxman then says that he said it's uncomfortable to praise him and have expectations of him, and that might sound rude to someone like him, but he wanted to say that the hero who saved the castle, the soldier, and him too, is the one who smiled, thanking him for it, wishing the boy well from then on, and the protagonist simply thanks him, and thus he reaches the maximum reward level. An extra reward would be given for the reward level, and besides, a new ability of his is unlocked, hero and immortality. Meanwhile, in the real world, the redhead is training, calling Joro, telling him to grab his cell phone quick because she doesn't want to hear that annoying ringtone anymore, and he questions who's calling at this hour, and when he picks up the phone, he's surprised, and the redhead too, because he simply dropped the weight and stood up, and he talks to Sorian, saying he was waiting for his call, but then when the protagonist talks to, he's surprised, asking about the hospital, and also asking where the context is, because the crazy guy just threw it out. Wow, that's tough. And at the hospital, they're talking to the protagonist, telling him he shouldn't be wandering around, asking what he thinks he can do to his body. However, the protagonist says he's awake, so he recovers quick. They give him some medicine and put it on the bandages, and some paracetamol, saying everything's fine. After a while, with a lot of insistence, he ends up leaving the hospital, saying he told them everything was fine, that they didn't need all that. But then Joro shows up, asking if the protagonist is badly hurt, and Sorian is surprised that the crazy guy showed up. Then Joro asks him again, after they go to a park, if he's really okay, because his arm was cracking like crazy early, and he says that as long as he's moving, everything's fine. Joro says that after learning that he completed the 20th floor and went to the hospital one day, he thought he was seriously injured, and says he saw his rank, and it was incredible again, asking. The protagonist wonders if the boy can give him some tips, but he's surprised that the boy would ask so out of the blue, saying that he doesn't actually have any tips, and was just being very insistent. Joro then starts to wonder if that's why he got hurt, since it seems like he doesn't need to worry about. But the protagonist says there's something more important, questioning what he asked to do. Joro simply gets straight to the point, telling the protagonist that he failed and apologizing because besides failing, he ended up revealing his identity. The protagonist isn't even that surprised, saying he already knew, that he didn't expect anything from the director after all. Then he asks if the boy is close to him, and the protagonist says that he was an awakened being from the agency in that past life, and that he was his superior. Joro then says that he ended up failing in the negotiation, but managed to get some information out of Kinda, who was close to him, saying that he heard a green dungeon appeared in Insen, and a raid is being planned, and apparently most of the awakened being gathering in Insen. Right now, the protagonist notices that it's already starting, and he went back to his previous life as well. Because of that, he couldn't properly prepare for the outbreak in Anya, and part of the reason was that idiot director Song Yute, who was too busy trying to shirk responsibility. And that idiot Song, who only seems to care about himself, he'll make sure he's really busy soon. Joro is surprised by Kuin and the protagonist's voice, saying that the dungeon appearances are exactly as he described, asking how Su Ryan knew. He says it was just intuition, but thanks Joro for trying, saying they'll have to move on to plan B, saying he'll go alone from now on. Joro is surprised, questioning if he'll really go alone, and the protagonist says yes, saying that he has already received enough help from him. But Joro says that it wasn't enough at all, and the protagonist doesn't understand where he's going with, and he says that they can't expect any more help from the agency, so he must tell him what his plan is, saying that there must be something else he can help, and the protagonist is surprised, and ends up realizing that he was going down the wrong path again, saying that he will tell him his plan. And 2 months later, on December 17th, a week before Christmas dinner, some people are talking about things online, that post they made, and the post says that on December 24th at 6 a.m., the city of Anyang will be the victim of a terrorist attack, and the culprit will be the dump. They are a wicked organization, full of the worst assassins in the world, and if they value their life, they should flee as far away from Anyang as possible. I hope no one loses their life because they thought it was just a meme, and everyone thinks it's a joke, but they wonder what the heck this dump guild is. The journalist says there's a new post on the Abismo online website that's been causing confusion on 3 social media platforms, and the terrorism warning, and they question whether it could be true. However, the journalist says they brought someone who claims to have seen the dump guild in person, and he immediately asks Juho if the dump guild really exists, and he says yes, saying he saw it with his own eye, making a huge blank face while inside he's very nervous, saying he smiled and gave him a very difficult task. The protagonist is troublesome, and he mentions that some time ago, they almost suffered several casualties during a raid in a dungeon in Gwangju. They question whether this is true, but the redhead, seeing this, wonders what the hell he's talking about. As for Song, he questions how he uses Aramaja like that, since he already has enough problem because of the dungeon raid. Doi says there's nothing to be done, and even an agency can't control the actions of an awakened being. He thinks it must be Sorion's fault, asking if he's discovered his identity. Doi says yes, but he couldn't bring him there immediately because he heard he's been hiding in the abyss for the last. He keeps thinking about Sorion, saying he doesn't understand why he would cause so much trouble, wondering what he planned. Meanwhile, the protagonist is firmly immersed in the potion until he drinks the last, and his heart gives him that monstrous jolt. He feels the power, and then asks if this is what he wants, and he starts screaming. But outside, a man starts banging on the door, shouting and calling out, saying that he rented the room for a whole month and didn't leave it for a sec, asking what the hell he's doing there, because if he's going to die, he should at least pay first. However, he notices that the door is open and a huge aura is emanate from inside. He says that at least he seems alive, saying he's glad he didn't run away. But when he looks inside, he wonders what that monstrous aura is, and the protagonist simply apologizes, saying he'll pay double. Then the man starts sweating profusely, saying that's enough, asking if he plans to stay much longer. The protagonist says he's leaving, and as he moves, the man sees only a huge amount of pressure escape from. When he looks, he only has a bag of gold coin, and the man keeps wondering where he went. And on December 23rd, it will be a month since he left his things in the trash horror and went to the tower, and he used the points he saved to buy a higher-ranking mangacapped, and some time before when he was buying it, the almost less-than prisoner vendor, saying that he doesn't believe that someone on the 21st floor would need saying that he would need at least 2 million, and so he can buy it, and the protagonist actually throws 2 million points into his hand, and he almost freaks out, and he says that after taking over in a room and drinking the catalyst, he trained to control the ambient mana around him, and honestly, it tasted and smelled pretty awful, but thanks to that he managed to reach the perfect condition, and he's leaving, moving like a character from Attack on Titan, thinking that tomorrow is the day, and he's prepared. Elsewhere, a man approaches the guild master, saying it's time to leave. The master agrees to go and speaks to Hakajun, telling him it started, and Hakajun agreed. Once outside, the man discusses a terrorist attack by the dump guild. The boy questions whether they're a criminal guild operating in the underworld, and the idea of their existence being revealed to the public is too much. The leader agrees, asking the boy's opinion. The boy says he definitely has a chance, and it's likely that since a green dungeon appeared, Yen-san is involved. However, he doesn't know if they should go that far. The master denies this, explaining that he's talking about the person who wrote the publication. Hakajun finds Hakajun's statement strange, and the master explains he was thinking about who exposed a guild known only to a small group of awakened beings. He then conducted an investigation, and the name of the person who wrote the publication is Kim So-hyun. It's all very familiar to the boy, and he says that his plan is to do more investigating why that wretch is obsessed with the dump guild. As the car arrives, Hakajun stares at the master inside, thinking it's strange, wondering why someone like him, who cares about nothing but himself, would be so bothered by what's happened. He questions what this dump guild has to do with anything, and once inside the car, he starts to imagine that the Aries Guild, Cheongdongyo, and the dump guild are connected somehow. He thinks Kim So-hyun has something strange about, and remembers when the boy took his test, and how he spoke from outside. He becomes thoughtful, but doubts that someone who is only rank C could really be the Kim So-hyun from the rumor. Still, he remembers the protagonist giving him that number, saying that if he ever needed help, he could call him, and so he thinks that something's wrong with all of them. And in the city of Insan, there's a blonde guy hanging around, saying that it's the middle of Christmas time, and there's nobody there, seeing that there aren't any rich old ladies to rob, and the bald guy behind him says that they must have left because of that post, but asks if it wouldn't have been better if they had done it near the blonde guy's mother, and simply curses the guy, asking if he really believes those rich kids, because they went complete crazy with that post. And while he's saying that it's a lie, the protagonist appears behind him with a very ugly mask, saying that it's not a lie, and all for a surprise, asking who that guy is. saying that he's a bizarre madman, and the blonde guy asks one of, questioning what's with that mask, asks if it's cosplay, laughing at the protagonist, saying he's happy he's finally going to beat the crap out of that idiot, saying he looks like he just escaped from an asylum. But the protagonist pulls him, grabs him by the collar, and lifts him with one hand, questioning what he's talking, saying that unfortunately that's not what happened, and he's just a common terrorist, putting a sword to the blonde guy's neck. Then a bomb explodes right behind him, surprising everyone. They run away in fear, saying there really is a terrorist there. News spreads, saying there was an explosion in the Pyeongchon district of Anyang City, and I presume this is the attack mentioned in the Abyss online publication that was so widely discussed. Citizens are currently rushing to evacuate. A man goes to Director Song, and he's furious because he thought Joho was playing dumb when he asked them to evacuate, but something still happened. And Dio, he says that according to witnesses, the attack seems to have been initiated by a single person, and he starts connecting the dots, since the source of the rumor was Soren. He tells Doi that he'll leave everything in his hand, and Doi agrees. Song then orders as many awakened beings as possible to gather in order to capture this Kim Soren, claiming he's the terrorist, and in a way, he really is. The protagonist is on top of a building amidst the sea of flame, wondering if he's caught their attention now. After looking at what he's done, he's satisfied, saying that it already looks quite like a terrorist scene, and it seems like the buildings and cars are burning, but it's all a lie. He says he improved the sacred flame and learned how to make things look like they're actually burning, without them actually burning. Thanks to this, he managed to create that scene, and there were zero casualties. He's sure most people have already evacuated, but it's not over yet, as he heads straight to the city center from Anyang, and it must be time for him to arrive. And he actually did arrive, and the protagonist notices that this is quite frightening timing, and says that it's the awakened ones who came to stop, and Dio says that they came on behalf of the Awakened Being Management Agency, ordering him to stop his acts of terrorism now. And Kim Doi introduces himself, saying that he is the state-contracted Awakened, an associate director of the Awakened Being Management Agency, asking So Hyun to go with him in silence. And everyone is surprised that this is Kim So Hyun, that super rook, and Kim Doi says that he knows that he is working with Lee Ji-ho and caused that incident, saying that if he cooperates, everything will be fine. However, the protagonist says that he talks too much, saying that he doesn't need all that talk. He calls them all over so they can go up together, since he doesn't want to waste time. And everyone there gets annoyed, asking who cares if he's a super rook, telling him not to get so cocky, and they charge at the protagonist, attacking him first. And Loro says he finally got to meet Kim So Hyun, asking if he was part of the dump guild, and the protagonist notices that he's a high-rank B and starts exchanging blows with, while another prepares a long-range attack. Aside, telling Loro not to just keep attacking because he must try to create an opening, and he launches that beam towards the protagonist, who gets out of the way at the last second, and also recognizes that this is a low-rank B. And then the other one there asks if they are attacking just because he told them to attack all at once, questioning if they have no pride, but asks why Doi isn't doing anything, since he is the strongest, and Doi says that no matter how he sees it, there's something strange. Then that guy questions how so. Meanwhile, the ninja goes after, attacking in every way, but the protagonist stops his arm. Is it him or Jean? I don't know. And when he stops it, an attack comes from above, almost at the joint of that samurai's arm, and he almost falls to that huge hammer, and so the protagonist jumps back, and he thinks that most of the people there are around rank B, and it's not enough. And then Doi uses the page of Wing, and a sheet with Wings appears above the protagonist, and he says that there are 0 civilian casualties, and it seems that the buildings are burning, but seeing that none have fallen so far, there's no damage. He says he wants to ask Sorian something soon, asking why he's acting like a terrorist and evacuating, questioning if he's trying to keep everyone away from the out. The protagonist is surprised that he's a maid, questioning why he doesn't just finish him off before asking the question. Doi says that if that's how it's going to be, he has no choice, and he actually switches the protagonist's place, throwing him off the building and jumping. Then he uses the marker page, invoking the 5th knowledge, light, and lightning bolts strike the protagonist, who puts his sword in front and explodes there. Doi falls down with the protagonist, seeing that he's completely safe. He notices that he's already been attacked by all those awakened beings, couldn't dodge because he's in the air, but he still hasn't suffered a scratch. He wonders if even he isn't a match for the boy, and the protagonist says that he must be around a high-rank egg, and so he questions. Kim Doi is told that he thinks he's shown enough proof that none of them are good enough, and Doi notices immediately. The other two then appear, saying they're going to finish him off, but as they're about to attack the protagonist, one of them asks if Doi is okay. Doi says yes, but asks if the guy can buy him some time. He doesn't know how to get some time, and Doi says he'll have to call for reinforcement from the agency. He'll tell them to summon all available awakened beings and send them there. Then, when the blonde guy attacks the protagonist, calmly jumps over him and even kicks him in the head. Seeing what the protagonist is doing to him, he questions whether he's not going to fight him seriously, and the other realizes that this guy is much stronger than they expect, saying that what happened less than 2 years ago finished the first floor. And so they say that's what he said, and that this guy, even being a magical swordsman, only uses a sword to fight. So they continue facing the protagonist and taking a beating calmly, and Doi speaks, and Doi thinks to himself that sure he hasn't shown anything yet. And despite being so strong, he questions why he's been away from public life for so long, and out of nowhere he decides to. But he's certain of one thing. He remembers the protagonist saying he's shown enough proof that none of them are good enough, and he thinks Kazorian has S-rank skill, or maybe even higher. So Doi tells them not to attack him without thinking, just to wait for reinforcements, so they can focus on defending against his attack. The protagonist thinks, as expected of Doi, that he understands things quickly, and he's making the others conserve energy and strength for the real fight that will work. He says he has two reasons for hiding his identity and putting on this whole show. First, to assess the total strength of the awakened beings they have, and he had to find out how strong the awakened beings ready for action, and second, to get more awakened beings as reinforcement. He says if he reveals he's not a real terrorist, director Song Yute wouldn't send reinforcements, and he doesn't care if it's in the out or not at the end of the story. Accounts, but if he starts causing trouble to try and get into the national news, that's a whole different story, and he just has to stall until reinforcements arrive. There are 2 hours left until the out, and Yute wonders he won't attack. Meanwhile, other people arrive, saying they've come to request reinforcements, and they hear those voices. The protagonist also looks up, and everyone is happy they've arrived. Yute already senses that the director must be very angry, and I say that this is the group of awakened beings from the state who were chosen by the Awakened Being Management Agency, the agency's special forces, also known as ACT. The protagonist thinks it's been a long time, and Loro is surprised that the guy there is Rank S Park Young. What surprises them even more is that Rank S came to the battle, and Loro takes the opportunity to ask Yeongil to let him join ACT, but one of them says he needs priority. Meanwhile, the protagonist remembers Yeongil saying that he was one of the strongest Rank S fighters, and that when he was Kim Sung-in, they had a complicated relation. Then Yeongil asks what the situation, and the man behind him says that as they can see, they are low on number, and according to the reports, that man, Kim Sung-in, is registered as rank C, but his actual abilities are rank S, or perhaps even higher. And Dwight says that he might even be stronger than Yeongil, but a guy upstairs asks what he's talking about, questioning if he's just scared because he hasn't been to the field in a while, and that's the second in command of the current ACT, Kong Song-cheol, rank A, and the boy says that no matter how much you look at him, he's just a kid, but then Yeongil himself tells him not to underestimate, and the boy quiets down. Then he talks to the principal, Dwight, saying that he doesn't know how strong he, but plans not to do anything. Dwight questions if that's true, and he says he'll join the fight after that, throwing all those Pokemon to be able to face the protagonist. Kong says that all he needs to do is catch that, asking the master if that's all, and DW Light says that even though he's Yeongil's student, he's still rank A, so he apologized, but he doesn't think he'll be a match. However, Yeongil says it's alright, saying that the ACT members are different from the other awakened. Then he himself faces the protagonist, while Soo-hyun thinks he hasn't changed at all, and is still the same as when he was training. Then he says he'll see if his teaching skills are still the same, and they all attack the protagonist at the same time. He tells his master that he wants to see it with his own eye, and Kong and the others go at it eagerly, falling in front of the protagonist. He just braces himself, and as they come, they begin to separate, each passing by the protagonist and taking a position. When the boy looks back, Loro is also surprised and questions what it is, while they all run around Soo, and none of them understand, as it's quite crude for an ability. Dwight says that they might think they're just running around in circles now, but each of them is preparing an ability to attack the protagonist. As soon as he sees those abilities being forward, he starts looking around and deflecting. Loro notices that it's an incredible barrage, and Dwight says that the different attack patterns are concentrated on a single target at an incredible pace. It's not only strong, but he'll have difficulty defending against it entirely. It's a systematic attack that combines support, restraints, and strong blows. It's a great coordinated attack used to defeat strong individuals and bosses. Yeongil says it's a perfect coordinated attack, and it's the identity and specialty of ACT. Then Kong calls Soo-hyun, tells him to stop running away like a coward, and show him what he's capable. When the boy attacks, the protagonist simply takes a step to the side, dodging the attack, and everyone is surprised. Kong says that he didn't dodge. The moment he makes contact with the ground again, he'll lose his chance. The protagonist naturally loses his balance, and then another chain comes to the boy's hand, with a coordinated attack trapping him in the tangled spiderweb. He is trapped by all those chains and lifted into the air, and the blonde boy is surprised that they caught him. Kong prepares to attack with everything he has, and his attack causes a huge cloud of smoke billow everywhere, affecting everyone in shock. The blonde boy wonders if they succeeded, and Shikamaru reminds Kong that he told him to take it easy. He says they broke his chain, but the protagonist emerges calmly, and Yeongil is even more surprised. Everyone can't believe what they're seeing, because Kong is the one who's all tangled up in his own sword, and they question how on earth the protagonist, and so they realize the pincer maneuver didn't work, asking if they messed up, and Kong says he knew their plan from the beginning, and none of them understand, and Kong says that when he struck with his sword, while that bastard was tied up, he simply used it to cut those chains, and turned the body along with, and besides that he used the chains to restrain him, but he won't even comment since it will look bad, and Doi says that even though he has great reflex, How did he manage to do all that in such a short time? Time passes, and Yeon-gil listens attentively. The protagonist says that of course he knew what they were going to do, since ACT was the unit he participated in his past life, and he was trained in using tactics to the point of being sick. Yeon-gil then says he thinks he was wrong, as it seems he should have dealt with the boy from the beginning, asking if he said his name is Kim So-hyun. He mentions that the youngsters seem to be treating him well, saying that if they had met under different circumstances, he would have been tempted to hire him to work with, obviously to ensure his strength isn't used for wrongdoing. However, Doi tells him that the awakened are starting to gather, asking him to be careful not to mess with the rank. He says he will try, and so, while everyone begins to gather, the protagonist sees that his plan is working. He says that for a long time he wanted to fight Yeon-gil one-on-one, but he drops his sword, thinking that now is not the time for that, and surrendering. Yeon-gil and everyone else there don't understand anything, and the protagonist simply completed his plan. So they start wondering what he said, asking if he surrendered, since they only went there because of asking what he's planning, and Yeon-gil questioning what he means by that, and the protagonist says that's exactly what he said, and they don't need to waste their strength on a futile battle, because the real battle is about to begin. Then, a dungeon breaks open, an earthquake shakes everyone, and when they look up, Doi realizes it's a dungeon that just opened, and it's still a green dungeon. Kong notices that it's not over yet, because there's an outbreak happening right there, and an outbreak starting like that out of nowhere is too much. The protagonist says that as they can see, the appearances of the dungeons and the speed of the outbreaks are going to become more complicated and harder to predict. Then, he retracts all those flames, and Doi realizes that the fire that had spread everywhere is being absorbed, and as expected, that was his thing, and he was going to say that he's sure the situation is confusing, and they may be angry with him for not revealing the truth from the beginning, but he asks all of those who have awake help, returning the true color of their flame, transforming them into red, and showing his true face to everyone there, ordering them to fight with him, for they must protect the city of Anya. And Hakahun is more than surprised, for he knew that this guy, Yeoman Jericho. So Hyan and the protagonist, looking at that see that it is indeed that sudden outbreak in the city of Anya, and it is the catalyst for the phenomenon that will threaten the entire world, and currently, it is known that an outbreak is a phenomenon that occurs if a dungeon is not completed on time. But this time, it was a special case where an outbreak happened as soon as the dungeon was created, and things like this will happen more frequently from now on. So he talks to Doi, asking how many reinforcements they have, and he says there are at least 100, and he thanks Oro for his work, noting that he managed to understand these intentions. But he denies this, saying it was because of the confusion that he caused with the fake terrorist attack, that he was able to summon reinforcements more quickly, and so they are questioning what they are talking, as if they knew the outbreak was going to happen. But one of them shouts desperately, telling them to look up, and from there, the monster is emerging first, and they realize that chaos is beginning, and Doi notices that this is an outbreak from a green dungeon with much absurd monster, and they begin to fall from the portal into the city, ready to destroy everything, and one of the adventurers is right in front of them. They already realize that some people have been killed just from the first stomp, and then another shouts to the one who is nearby, asking why he is backing away, because that way he will die, and then that guy can't even move, just spitting out a punch with his eyes closed. But the punch doesn't come, and he sees that young Gil saved life, and then young Gil says that he can't even believe it, because each monster is at least at the level of a boss from an orange or red dungeon, and so, he tell that guy to pull himself together, he doesn't want to die. He runs away, and meanwhile, he sends messages to Act, ordering them to join the support formation and help with the preparation for the other awakening. Kong tells his master that it would be much easier if they handled himself. Then, he sees the protagonist's flames behind him, and when he looks back, the protagonist says that all the awakened ones are now confused because of the unknown situation, and just like who wasn't paying attention to his back in such a situation, calming the others is the priority. He asks if this isn't something only ACT can do, telling him to do his best within his own situation. Kong questions what the boy is doing, and the protagonist simply rushes to the center of all those monsters. Kong wonders who he thinks he is, because he's making him angry, saying the same things as the master. Then the protagonist simply goes after those many monsters and uses the sacred flame, killing many in one fell swoop. He thinks of Angwil, saying that he should succeed to deal with the monsters in the green dungeon without much trouble, and since they have the ACT there, the evacuation in this video should go smoothly. He won't have to worry about each little monster thanks to. So he questions why that thing isn't showing up, and out comes the biggest monster, huge purple dragon, and the protagonist says that's Igala's the black dragon. When Dai sees it, he wonders what the heck it is, and he also asks the others what the status of the population evacuation, and they say it's halfway done. Dai says that there haven't been any deaths yet thanks to the initial evacuations, but if they don't deal with the monsters soon, the damage will continue to increase, and not only the city of Anya, but the entire country will be in danger. As all those things continue to come, the hunters strive to prevent those monsters from landing, as they cannot let even one of them leave the city of Anya, and they all continue to help with evacuation. telling them to stay calm and follow the orders of the awakened. And even Dai continues attacking those things, using Shure's magic is at its maximum, and he looks at the protagonist, seeing him up there, thinking about Kim So, thinking that hope is gone, and now it's him. But he questions whether he could really face all the monster and the dragon, and while he's thinking, a huge ogre appears behind him. But before he can do anything, someone appeared, and it's Yonghwa himself who saved him, saying that he's losing focus, killing that thing so calm or saving. He can't believe Yonghwa appeared so quick, and he says he'll explain in a simple way, since they don't have much time, and the extermination of monster and the evacuation of the population. And he will handle all of that, and he will continue to support the other awakened. And lastly, with the protagonist appearing behind him, he asks if he can leave the dragon to the boy, and So Hyun says of course. So he says he'll leave it in his hand, and they just understand each other. And the protagonist then calls his phoenix, hitching a ride and heading towards the dragon, walks through the buildings and manages to cut down the monster to begin the fight, dealing the first blow. When he looks back, he jumps back at the dragon, but the dragon reacts stiff, turning around and attack him as well. However, the protagonist doesn't give up and attacks the dragon once more, but it doesn't cause as much damage and begins to tremble. He forces his sword and this time manages to make another cut in the dragon's tough skin. Then he calls upon Phoenix to use the sacred flame, and she comes close, taking him to the ground. When he lands, the dragon comes at him, but Phoenix disappears. He realizes the dragon is incredibly resilient, and as he expects, it's not easy to defeat. So, he charges at the dragon, while the dragon prepares to unleash Amaterasu on the protagonist, but he quickly dodges and reappears above the dragon once more with Phoenix, blinding him and setting the creature's eyes on fire. The protagonist, clinging to the Phoenix's leg, is an easy target in midair, and the dragon throws him down. However, he manages to defend himself with the flames to avoid injury, and he thinks that even though it's the second time, he remains very resilient. He believes he can still win. In his past life, the outbreak of Anyang City was considered a tragic disaster, with over 150,000 deaths, half of which were caused by this dragon. The unexpected outbreak in this dungeon caught all the awakened by surprise, and when he was sent into battle immediately after the dungeon, he lacked the strength to stop. But now, face to face with the dragon, unleashing flames in all directions, he acknowledges that this is a very powerful flame, but with confidence, he can cut through anything he wants. And he does indeed cut the flame with his sword, passing through the middle of it. He says there's a brief opening after he uses his breath, and he does a double jump into the sky to get higher than the dragon, looking at it from above, and thinks that now is the moment he has to attack, seeing the contract of the dragon's neck. From the inventory, he pulls out the assassin's spear, and Dragon's Near, a weapon created using the legendary Gungnir spear as a base, is sold in the Abyss shop. It's quite expensive and has only one use, but it's powerful. He pushes it with his mana, saying it's powerful enough that he won't let a single person die because of it. Then, he throws the spear with all his might, and it multiplies in size many times over, ready to strike the dragon's back. While the dragon flies calmly, the protagonist's attack arrives unexpectedly. When he looks up, it's too late, and the dragon is completely impaled. Its blood flies everywhere, and after being impaled in that way, it falls down below, dead as a doornail. The protagonist kills it with a single attack and wonders if it worked, but his answer comes quick because the amount of blood coming from the dragon makes it seem so. He says that as soon as the half-dragon Igalus suffers a fatal attack, finally appeared the other half of Igalus' soul, and a humanoid emerges, saying that it hurts, acknowledging that the protagonist stopped and asking who he is. The protagonist replies that before asking that, he questions why he doesn't try asking himself who he is, and thus begins to have an identity crisis, questioning who he is. He then starts to cry, thinking that it hurts, and this, once again, makes the dragon writhe, and the dragon flies towards the protagonist, while that humanoid continues saying that it hurts, crying, and the tears of blood transform into needles that go towards the protagonist, and that thing screams, once again, saying that it hurts, and the protagonist is hit by that many needles. Everyone down there watches what has happened, and even so, they smile and face those needles head-on. Then the dragon grabs one of his hands and slaps the boy, throwing him far away, and the protagonist is stuck inside a building. Meanwhile, Joro arrives there, finally, apologizing for the delay and asking where Sorian is. He can't believe it when he looks to the side and sees that he's about to be eaten by the dragon. Sorian can't believe it's happening because the dragon actually swallowed and devoured the protagonist, and all that blood coming from the boy's hand makes Sorian freak out, yelling at. But then, it's said that the protagonist's life has reached a critical level and the immortality hero is activated. With that, the dragon notices something and the protagonist thanks him, calling him my damn dragon, and he recovers all his life, and the recovery speed also increases, and his physical ability increased tremendously. After being almost dead, the protagonist gains an absurd buff, opening the dragon's mouth with just his hand, saying that thanks to him, it seems he's become the strong. Meanwhile, that thing keeps wondering where and who that guy is, the one it sees opening the dragon's mouth right in front of it, and it's also surprised that the black dragon is there, and then it tries to bite the protagonist, and that thing thinks it's strange, because that should be its enemy, but still, it reminds it of someone. and he wonders why he became A with the eagle. The protagonist takes advantage of being in the air to once again attack the dragon's head. He says he feels better than ever and as light as a feather, noting that this is the effect of the hero's immortality. After this stolen ability is activated, he uses a building as a springboard and jumps back onto the dragon, delivering numerous cuts across its body. He notices that the dragon is so hard he can't aim anywhere, and there must be an opening somewhere. He wonders where the opening is, until he sees it in the dragon's tail and rips it off in a single cut. The dragon begins to roar, but the protagonist asks if it's not time for the Falk troll itself. Listening from inside, that thing inside the dragon remembers people calling him Master Falk, saying they always believed in, asking if he will save, begging him to stop the black dragon egg because he is the only one they trust. He thinks that it seems like an eternity has passed, wondering why this isn't there. Finally, questioning how much longer he can go on, he realizes he has to continue, but he thinks he only has one choice. If he can control that thing, everything will be easier. However, beneath the rubble, someone is still calling to the Master Falcon, who is on the dragon's back, dead, joining. The person who called to the Master Falcon observes that, saying that he can't do something like, but in the present, the protagonist is still attacking the dragon, this time cutting off one of its legs. He says that the people he protects and those he couldn't save would like to see him in that deplorable state. Finally, he thinks of the people he protects and those he couldn't save, and with that, the dragon spits blood but attacks the protagonist again. This time, the protagonist uses the sacred flame to wound the dragon. Meanwhile, the falcon thinks he was fighting Iguala, while the dragon continues attacking the protagonist. The falcon gains more and more awareness of, and he remembers that even so, he couldn't defeat them. Iguala, then the dragon this time summons several bloodstained thorns right above him, and the protagonist is surprised that those thorns are completely turned towards himself, and he even pricks himself. Then the falcon on top of Iguala's plunges its hand into his chest and begins to tear it open, calling the protagonist inside, begging him to please end. So the protagonist grabs that spear, prepares to launch the dragon-slaying spear into his chest again, but Iguala's simply takes flight. But the protagonist sees him fleeing into the sky and still aims and launches the arrow, saying that he will not escape. While Igualas tries to flee, the arrow pursues him, and this time the dragon's body passes by and hits the falcon directly on its back, and so the dragon begins to fall. Everyone watches that until the gigantic thud with that monstrous body falling in the middle of the city, and after the dragon is finally defeated, falls into the city, the falcon is still alive on its back, even though it's taking its last breath, and the protagonist flies from Phoenix to get close to, asking the falcon if his memories have returned. The falcon says yes, explaining that the past he had forgotten has finally come back to haunt. He says that because of the endless battle between him and Iguala, they simply merged, and even after escaping the dimension, he fought to kill the damned being fused to his body, but every time it went wrong. He thinks he killed innocent, crying because of it. However, the protagonist says that too much time has passed for him to be regretting these things, telling the falcon to try to think about the things he managed to protect, not the things he lost. He asks if he has forgotten what he did to save the nation, saying that many more could have died. But then the falcon asks if he is trying to console him, saying that he is not good at that, and the protagonist only agrees, saying that he is terrible at that kind of. The falcon then says that he is right, saying that it would be a lie to say that he doesn't regret it. But even if he went back to the past, he would make the same choices. And so the protagonist is surprised that he talks about going back to the past and making the same choices, remembering what he went through and the things he faced. Then the falcon says that he managed to end a huge battle thanks to him, saying that he will give it to him, saying that it is the best armor forged in the Tesseran Empire, and it was created for him when he fought against Yahello. The protagonist thanks him because he obtained the sacred shoulder pad of the falcon, and then the falcon says that he wants to thank him once more because it was really a very long battle. As he disappears, he thinks that he can finally rest now, and the protagonist wishes him to rest in peace, the hero of Tesseran. As he disappears in front of everyone, both Doi and Dioro run to the boy, and he remembers that he is there. Then Dioro starts asking if he is hurt, and the protagonist says that he is not, saying that he is fine. Then he says that he was stronger, he imagined, then he almost died, but Dioro says that he was a terribly strong monster, asking if he realizes he could have died, and Doi says he's glad he's okay, because thanks to him nobody got hurt, and says that the director might not approve of, but he apologizes and thanks him as a representative of the institution, and the protagonist, seeing this, says that it's not necessary, saying that it's good that nobody got hurt, and seeing how everyone is doing well, this makes his anxiety subside a little, and then he starts to faint again, falling in pain there, and Dioro says that he is indeed hurt, but then he realizes that he only stopped to take a nap, and Doi says that he must just be very tired fighting so much. He says he's relieved that he doesn't have any serious injury, and he mentions that as soon as they deal with this situation, a gigantic storm will begin with this man at the center of it all. But he thinks that, for the protagonist of this storm, he, sleeping peaceful. Sometime later, news spreads everywhere that there was an incident, that an outbreak occurred in Anya, and civilians were evacuated. Experts comment on the case, and a disaster may have happened in Anya. And this becomes news cruise around the world. And after a while, the protagonist finally wakes up, waking up in a hospital bed, completely unconscious. The protagonist, wondering when he fainted, says he thinks he overexerted himself and sees that it's already the 27th, meaning he slept for 3 days. When he looks to the side, he sees a message saying that someone came to visit him, but he was sleeping, so he just left the message saying he believes they need a statement from him because the whole world is talking about this incident. The protagonist is surprised that it's from Juho, who tells him that he acted as his representative, handling the annoying calls and messages, and that he did all this without being asked, but believes he will understand. The protagonist says he was thinking about why his phone didn't have any notification, noticing that he was doing all the work. Juho says that he saved many and must be very tired now, so he shouldn't think too much about anything, just rest, saying that he will probably wake up hungry. So he left some fruit in the room, and the protagonist begins to recognize that it's good that he's still there, saying that he succeeded. Preventing Wonju's Danjo and Anyang's out, and all his work served a purpose, and certainly, things are different from his past life, but he has much more to do from now on, so he can't let his guard down, as he has to think about what he's going to do next. But while he's thinking, someone knocks on the door, and he asks who it is. The person who enters is surprising, as it's Hakajun, who's inside looking quite unwell, as he's badly injured. Inside, the protagonist is surprised that he doesn't seem well, asking why the boy is there, questioning what happened to his fate. Then, Hakajun says he has something to ask, asking what Suryeon thinks about him joining his guild, but he says this completely tremble, and the protagonist can't believe what the boy is saying. And sometime before, at the Ares Guild, the master speaks to everyone, because since everyone is there, he will share the news, and the guild advancement test from medium to large is very important for the future of their guild, although they have several benefits. Once the guild becomes a large guild, the most important thing is the amount of support funds they receive, which increases. He asks if they don't think so, saying that he expects everyone to prepare for the advancement test, and if anyone makes a mistake, he will kill them personally, and everyone agrees, and he says they are dismissed. But he also tells Hakajun that Garoto is surprised that the master is calling, so he looks at him very angrily, asking if he doesn't think they need to have a little chat. Then 2 thugs stand at the door, while the boy is beaten inside, and he says that he has already told 1,000,000 times, saying that he doesn't care if he is bad, cunning, or even violent, couldn't care less, but he can't ask someone he would betray, so he grabs the boy, asking why he lied to him, and he says he didn't lie, saying he really didn't know. However, he doesn't quite believe that, since he found him in the abyss, and they even took the rank test together. But he didn't know, asking if he really is. He tells him that he was unable to identify Chin Su Ryan, and he hits the boy again, saying that he has already given him several chances, and this is his last, ordering him to bring Chin Su Ryan, and that they have a better chance of passing the test to have. However, the boy asks how he should bring him, since he has only heard of him a few times, and has never tried to talk, and he cannot force him to come, saying that he should know how strong he really is. However, the master doesn't care, asking why his Rikijin is acting so aggressively towards the boy, saying that he doesn't care how, because if he ordered him to bring him, he must bring him, and if he failed, he questions whether Yong-sun also needs to learn a lesson. The boy is terrified, filled with hatred, looking at the test, saying that this will be the last time he says that, and before the advancement test, he must bring Chin Su Ryan. Back home, his sister Yong-sun is cleaning his wound, asking, it hurts a lot, but he says no, that he's fine, and it's just bothering him, but she's still very worried about, asking if Zhong Dongyong did this, and the boy freezes for a moment, because she guessed right, and he says no, saying that there are several monsters that have come stronger, but she questions what kind of monster, just focusing on his face like that, telling Rikijin that he's really okay, and he can stop, but she starts coughing as she speaks, and he asks Yong-sun, okay, asking where the medicine, telling the girl to take it quick, and when the girl swallows the medicine, he becomes even more worried about, even with her face all deformed, and he remembers when Jong spoke to him, even on the ground, saying that his beloved's illness will be painful, and they say it can't be cured even by modern medicine, but he questions if the boy isn't happy to have him nearby them, because he can give her painkillers that work, handing the boy a potion, saying that he will ensure that he fulfills his part of the, and he would also prefer that there be no pain, that the boy, even with hatred, cannot fail to do what he commands because of that, and he tells Yong-sun that she is not well at all, and when she is not well, he also doesn't hug her, saying that that's why until she is better, he will never give up, saying that if it's for her, he will do anything, and so he is there with the protagonist now, saying that's why, telling him to think about it carefully, because it's not a bad deed, and he will certainly receive several calls from guilds and the association, but if he joins his guild, they will ensure that he is not bothered by anything, and he just needs to join his guild, but then the protagonist tells Hakjun to stop, saying that this situation, he should also know how strange this is, because before continuing to try to convince him to join his guild, he thinks it's only fair that he explains what's real going on, saying that something's wrong, questioning if that's not the case, because he remembers when he told the boy that if he ever needed help, he could call him. So Hakjun asks if that's all he needs to know, just what's happening, then he draws his sword. and points in the protagonist's direction, ordering him to fight him. If he wins, he will tell him everything that is happening, that if he loses, he must please join the Aries Guild. And the protagonist then thinks about Choi Hak-jun, the youngest awakened rank A in the country and a member of the world-class Guild Aries, the famous Choi Hak-jun, who was called a genius, and on the night before his test to become a rank S, he massacred the entire Aries Guild. Although he had seen him a few times, was Kim Soo. When he went to talk to the boy, he questioned the protagonist if he wanted him to save the world, telling him not to be stupid, asking why he had to waste his life for the sake of others. And he says that he was a completely different person, and the current Choi Hak-jun, unlike before, is a good person. And when they met in front of the agency, it seemed like he wanted to say something, and he did his best to ignore it when they were face to face with him. And even in Anya, he heard him fighting to save other people. And that Choi Hak-jun, why did he become that? So, Choi really goes after the boy, trying to hit him even though he's bedridden. Hak-jun says that since he didn't answer, he'll take that as a yes, and the protagonist realizes that he's forcing him to fight while he's injured, and he's not the type of person who do that, because that other version of him seems much more natural. The protagonist tells Hak-jun that he'll figure out the reason he's doing all this on his own. Then the nurses start to feel a tremor coming from the room, and are surprised, even question if it's an earthquake. Another nurse says there's a problem because there are awakened beings fighting on the upper floor. Hak-jun tries to hit the protagonist with everything he has, but he just keeps dodging until he returns the first punch, hitting the boy's arm. Then, besides hitting the arm, he manages to step on and get up. He says that if this continued, it will affect the hospital, so he needs to end this as quickly as possible, and he wonders where the protagonist grabs the sword. And when he looks to the side, he notices where it is, but Choi quickly lunges at, not giving him time to react. The protagonist then grabs the sheet, throws it in front of the boy, obstructing his vision, and Hak-jun is left unable to see anything. Meanwhile, the protagonist runs after his sword, but Hak-jun apologized, saying that this fight will be somewhat unfair, and he won't let him get his weapon because he knows he's much weak. Then, he throws a slash at the protagonist, who is running towards his sword, destroying a large part of the building and launching the protagonist outside. Although he manages to dodge the attack, it's a huge blow, and he notices that Choi is really strong. But since there's a small kitchen knife nearby, he grabs it because he needs to use some. However, he senses that there are civilians down below, and he's going to lure them to the rooftop to resolve all of them. He uses the sacred flame to try and solve everything while he flees with the phoenix. Hak-jun simply observes from the roof. The protagonist thinks that even fighting barehanded, he shouldn't lose, but that's if he's at 100%. He still hasn't fully recovered from the fight in Anya, and then out of nowhere, the boy appears, throwing himself up there, ready to face the protagonist, and he asks if he really thinks a kitchen knife will help, and he says of course, and then the two exchange blows, and he says that since this weapon isn't appropriate for an awakened being, he won't be able to do much, and of course, the magical resonance returns. But even so, he'll be able to at least defend himself, because he's confident in his magical control, and so he begins to imbue his sword with his hand, and manages to make a cut. Hak-jun, who certainly feels the pain of that cut, is still focused on defeating the protagonist, using the sword slash, raising it, and throwing the full moon explosion at the protagonist. He's so face to face that there's not much he can do, and the attack ends up taking over almost the entire roof, and down below, the police begin to gather along with several other gossipy civilians, so they surround the perimeter, because something is certainly happening on the hospital roof. Then Hak-jun, who launched that attack, is smiling, nervous, because he sees that the protagonist wasn't hit. He managed to completely stop the attack with that little kitchen knife, and Hak-jun says he already knew, because he can't win, and around the protagonist, there's a huge RV with everything destroyed from the boy's attack, and the protagonist then gets straight to the point, telling him what's going on. So he talks about Gwak Yeonsan, and she was the person Hak-jun wanted to be happy in this world. Gwak Yeonsan and he spent childhood together. She was his closest childhood friend, and also his girlfriend, and after Gwak Yeonsan graduated high school, she inherited her family's flower shop, and she helped him a lot when he still didn't have a job. Always, anyway, she always encouraged, and that's why when he became an awakened, he was very happy. But then something happened, because the moment he arrived, the flower shop was closed, and he ran to see Gwak Yeonsan, and when he entered the establishment, she was lying on the floor, spitting blood and coughing, and he asks her what was happening and who did this to her, but she can only say his name while coughing up blood. At that same moment, entering the place, he sees Jung himself, saying that he wanted to buy flowers for his beloved, and it seems that the shop is having some problem. At that moment, his eyes fall on Hak-jun, and the boy is surprised to see an awakened one there. He says that looking at her, it seems she was affected by a powerful poison, and it turns out that he specializes in this area, and it seems that today is their lucky day. He asks what he thinks and questions whether he should help the protagonist, explaining that this is why he needed the medicine girlfriend, and that Jung Dong-hee had been using it all this time. And the boy says that he's the only person who can make the medicine. So he takes the sword, talking to So-hyun, asking if he remembers what he said before, when they met in front of the certification build, that he said he would help, saying that he really wanted to believe what he said. And this time he gathers the courage to ask So-hyun for help, asking him to help escape Jung's clutch, asking the protagonist to help both Yun-sun, but even if he helps, he will never be able to believe in himself again. just like he was deceived by Jung all this time. And if he can't grow up and has to continue depending on others, the same things will be happening in the future, and he has no other choice. And he says he's going to end it all, thanking So-hyun sincerely, while giving the boy a forced smile. Elsewhere, Jo-ho is reading a news article and asks the man in front of his Siri. The man explains that his livelihood depends on the information he sells, asking why the mind would say it's confidential, and that he's only telling him this now, warning him carefully. He says that whatever he does, he shouldn't involve Jo-ho, and Jo-ho agrees. But when he leaves, he immediately calls So-hyun, asking if he's awake. Then, when he learns that the hospital was attacked, he's shocked. However, the protagonist tells him that nothing serious happened and that he's fine. He then says he needs to ask some, and he starts talking to Jo-ho, telling him everything. Jo-ho is surprised that this is what's happening with Hak-jun, thinking it's perfect because he also has information he needs to pass on, and it's about the Aries Guild. Meanwhile, that scoundrel is peacefully in his office, reading the news until someone knocks on the door. He's surprised that the person entered without even knocking, and even more astonished that it's Hak-jun, who says he should be on vacation and asks what the boy is doing. He then speaks to his master, saying he has something to ask. While he's asking, Jung notices his sword is completely bloody, and when he sees it, he becomes a little happy. Hak-jun explains that if an awakened being tries to use someone else's ability, and that awakened being died, their ability will likely disappear. This startles the master, but he starts laughing, asking what he's going to do with this information. At home, Yun-sun keeps calling Hak-jun, listening to the latest news about an awakened attack in Seoul's Gangnam district. Unfortunately, there were no casualties, and the awakened agency is already working to control the situation. The suspect is an awakened member of the Aries Guild named Choi Hak. She continues calling him desperate, asking what he's doing and begging him please answer. Then, someone knocks on the door, and she almost has a heart attack. While listening to her boyfriend on TV, she opens the door, and it's the protagonist. She asks who he is, and as she learns that someone from the city's big club, Nautis, was targeted, the protagonist greets her, saying his name is Kim Seo-hyun. Seeing him, she's quite surprised, and he thanks her for letting him in despite what's happening, saying she must be surprised. She replies that he's famous, and she'd heard about him from Hak-jun for quite some time, and the protagonist is quite surprised. After all, this is unexpected, and the girl says that he said he wanted to be like, and the news says that Hak-jun attacked, but he's not someone who would do something like that, and the protagonist says he doesn't know the detail, but he understood the point of the story, the point where Jung is threatening him using her medicine. He probably came to him on orders from the guild, and when he visited, he seemed desperate and worried, but he never asked for help, and since he decided to resolve the situation alone, he can't do whatever he wants, so he went to there, trying to understand the details and find out what she thinks about all that. She remembers him telling her that everything will be alright, and that she is okay, telling her not to give up because he will solve this. And then she starts to cry, asking the protagonist to help, but she could never fight alongside, begging him, please, not to abandon Hak-jun. And the protagonist, without thinking much, agrees with, saying that's what he wanted to hear. Meanwhile, Jung is fighting Hak-jun, throwing the boy away while poisoning him as well. Then he starts laughing, telling Hak-jun that he is very disappointed because of all the options he had. This is the worst, asking if he thinks he could finish him off just because he got a little stronger. And the boy is on the ground, still frustrated because his body isn't listening and it feels like thorns are piercing his entire body. And so he asks if he now understands the difference in strength, and even if he doesn't lift a finger very soon, he's going to die. But Hak-jun tells him to shut up because Yun-sun's illness is his poison's fault, and it's all his fault, and he systematically committed a crime, pull her into his guild. Then he realizes he's been discovered, saying maybe, but it wasn't important, so he doesn't even remember properly. Hak-jun admits to himself that he's known for a while, but couldn't do anything because he was weak. Still, he's frustrated at the moment, trying to compose himself because now it's different and now he can't. Then he gets up and lunges at Jung with everything he's got, saying they're going to hell together. But then he says he's too confident, raising his finger and snapping it before Hak-jun can even touch him. The boy starts spreading poison and bleeding in front of him, stopping immediately, dropping his sword, falling to the ground. Jung asks if he thought there was only one type of poison, saying there are poison, like the one he used on his girlfriend, that caused damage. The time passes, and there are poisons that explode all at once, and he knew he would cause trouble one day, so he injected it into the boy periodically, saying that he really should have hidden his expression better. Then, he kicks the boy, pinning him against the wall, and here, Jun is increasingly screwed as his vision is starting to blur, and he thinks that if he can't kill Yang's Jun, and also can't cure Janssen's illness, he thinks to himself that he is truly irresponsible, and even knowing that Janssen would be alone if failed, he went there anyway, apologizing because he may have tried to escape death. But while he is falling, the back door is broken down, and Jun is surprised because he has many visitors today, and the protagonist arrives there saying that the guild members were running away when he asked for directions. So Jun is surprised that he says he thinks they've met before, and the protagonist says he came there to register for the Aries Guild. Jun then hands the protagonist the registration, commenting that he's quite surprised because it seemed like he was completely against joining a guild, and to think he would come there of his own free will is amazing. But the protagonist just kept staring at Hak and is standing nearby. So Jun says he's a bit curious, asking why the sudden change of heart, saying that the boy already knows knows he's not a very nice guy. The protagonist replies that he thinks Hakahun is mistaken about because he's not a nice guy either, saying he's definitely tired of being a hero, and if their interests align, he's willing to work with anyone. Jun says that's good to hear, but getting back to the subject, he says that they normally discuss benefits and payments after a new member joins, but he can't trust him yet, and if he goes ahead and signs the contract, they will fulfill his wishes as much as possible. The protagonist says that sounds good, and when he signs, Jun is surprised because he thought it would be so easy. He says that now they will discuss business, asking if there's anything he wants as a member of the Ares Guild, and the protagonist immediately says that first he wants an antidote for Shy Hak. Jun is surprised, and he says that he named the guild after Hakahun. It's a deal right now, so leaving Hakahun like this doesn't seem good for business, and he doesn't know if he saw the news, but he owes him a debt, so Hakahun says he'll make him owe him one, just so he can use him later, saying it's possible. But even if he takes the antidote, it won't help, because the poison has effects that remain in the body. However, the protagonist says he doesn't care, and Hakahun alone is worth more than 100 awakened rank C being. And then Jun says that since the boy insists, he'll make him go to the boy, grabbing Hakahun by the neck, removing the poison from inside him, pulling him back by his arm, and leaving him clean. And now he says they'll discuss dividend payments and other things about the guild. And as soon as Hakahun is okay with the protagonist, he goes to him and says he met Yosan, and he's surprised, asking why the boy did that. But the protagonist tells him to shut up, and so Jun says he'll receive 70% of the dungeon profits, a position of vice leader of the guild, asking what that means, saying he thinks the deal is great. However, the protagonist mentions the 70% and the vice leader position, telling Jun that, as he said before, he doesn't seem like a good negotiator, and if this is really a deal, then he won't participate in one where he loses. Jun gets irritated with the protagonist, asking what his terms are, and the protagonist says he wants 100% of the profits and the position of guild leader, demanding he give up his entire guild. Jun doesn't like this at all and starts laughing, saying he was wondering what the protagonist was plotting, asking if he wants the whole guild, telling him, "Boy, don't make me laugh." But the protagonist questions what's so funny, that he says that he built this company by using weaker and taking advantage of, and that's how his guild grew. So he's going to use the same method and take over this guild because he's stronger than Jung now. But Jung tells him not to play the saint, because it's not even about taking advantage, it's about using them, asking the protagonist if a predator feels pity for its prey, since they are just useless and weak worms that would have no use if they were alive, and they were destined to be devoured by the cycle of life. But he found a use for them, and the transit formed people useful to society. Physical weakness of the heart, of intelligence, this world where the strongest always win. All of that is a crime, and that is the world of the awakened. So the protagonist is being ironic, and he says that the strongest always win, saying that he might be right, but he missed something, because even prey that seems weak can sometimes attack the predator to protect itself, and Hakahun is already behind Jung, ready to strike, and when he turns around, he barely sees the sword coming towards him, and the protagonist tells him to see for himself the despair of the weak, and the boy simply runs the sword across Jung's back in one go. It's really meant to be kept quiet, and after he takes that blow, falls hard to the ground, and the two watch, and Hakahun, in turn, finally removes that thing from his face, asking if it's over, talking to his Hyan, questioning what just happened, because he was sure he was dying from Dong Myung's poison, and even if he had been detoxified, his destroyed body shouldn't have healed, as he couldn't feel anything or see properly. However, when the protagonist touched him, the boy blushed instantly. The protagonist arrived, surprised, and the protagonist simply told him to be quiet and let things happen. The boy questioned whether the protagonist had done anything wrong, wondering why, since when they first met, and even now, he was questioning why he was helping him so much. The protagonist said it was a shame, but now wasn't the best time for the conversation, as it wasn't over yet, and that thing was getting up from the ground. And what was that? He talks about that surprise attack, saying it's good, telling Hakjin that he taught him well, and that's what he wanted from him all this time. He uses Hemostasis, a rank 2 magic skill with 55% proficiency, healing external wounds depending on the user's proficiency, with the healing speed increasing over time. He knew he had a skill dealing with poisons and medicine, but the thought of also being able to use the healing skill is too much. Hakjin then speaks to Jung, saying that although he desperately wants to kill him, he doesn't stand a chance in a 2-on-1 fight with Shuri. He says that if he stops now, he'll let him regret his sins in prison. However, Jung starts questioning what he thinks, telling him not to even try, asking if he thought the same thing he was going to hear, invoking his deadly green zone poison skill, filling everything with an amoeba-like goo. At that moment, Hakjin rushes towards Shuri and tells him to get out of it, but the protagonist questions what the hell this is, and the boy says that this is the strongest ability he has, and the green zone deadly poison is of magic rank 4 level 5, which creates an area covered with lethal poison, and the range of the ability and the damage caused by the poison power will increase depending on the magic rank, and he says that he can cover the entire area with lethal poison, a daily skill capable of killing with a single touch. Jung then speaks with Shurian, saying that he himself admitted to stealing from the weak to build that guild, and that he's right to a certain extent, at least that's what he thinks. However, Kishinatsu knows knows that even extortion is a privilege of the strong, so he throws the poison at the two of forcing them to leave. Wherever the poison touches, the protagonist observes, as it seems he can control the poison beneath. However, while the protagonist is thinking, Jung tries to attack, but Jung ends up kicking him midair, attempting to hit the boy, but also throwing poison. The protagonist notices that the poison seems to only affect living beings, and Choi Hakajun's table and sword are also affected. Since that's the case, he sees what he can do, as he's surfing on a table to get close to Jung. He's surprised, along with Hakajun, and Jung asks if he found the same weak. Jung then switches to acid, mocking the violet zone, launching a gooey substance onto the table that melts it. The protagonist becomes increasingly worried, throwing the table and jumping back. He explains that he understands why, while he attacks and defends against living targets with green zone poison ability. He also uses the violet zone acid ability to protect himself from attacks and surprise. The balance between these two abilities is incredible. He then starts calling Suryeon, saying he could be considered one of the best, but questions whether the boy isn't quite boring to be considered a hero, asking if he really thinks he can take over guild. Then the protagonist, in turn, admits he was wrong, because the answer was right in front of him the whole time, and he throws something into the air, and Hakajun stares at each of those drops of blood, and he's surprised because that's the ability he saw in Yin Yang, and the protagonist uses his characteristic transformation, blood needle spear, and he prepares all those spears fly towards Jung, lock him to the last wrinkle of his chest, and the protagonist says that if he's so strong, he has to deal with, my friend, that guy is going to dream about this tonight. He's going to shit himself with fear just remembering that scene. And after the protagonist throws all those swords at him, Jung simply runs away, sliding on his own poison, and when he manages to steady himself, he raises a bunch of poison to cover himself, and also to throw at the protagonist. But Hakajun appears in front to cut that thing, and he speaks with a smile, while the boy touches Hakajun's shoulder and prepares another barrage of that attack, and in doing so, he just looks at Jung with that murderous look, while he is all huddled up below. But even though the attack is coming from above, it also comes from behind, and Hakajun appears try to cut him, but Jung manages to hit him anyway, kicking the boy and telling him not to mess around. But Hakajun puts his sword in front to avoid being hit, so as he touches the ground, the protagonist throws all those swords in Jung's direction, and he notices that again, the attack failed to penetrate. Then Jung begins to get tired, saying that it seems like he only talks and does nothing, saying his poison can attack and defend, and it's perfect, and the protagonist even says that's true, and his ability is annoying, but he has something else, saying that he can simply set everything on fire, invoking the phoenix's flame, launching fire at Jung, who begins to burn in the middle of it, and besides burning the protagonist, he also throws his spears at him, pinning it to the wall, playing target practice. With him, Jung starts coughing up blood as his venom retracts, and Hakahun is already hoped that the ability has deactivated and all the venom is returning. When it returns to his hand, he notices that he can't maintain the ability because he's too injured, and this is his chance. But then, Jung yells at Hakahun, saying he'll give him an antidote, and even if he kills him, the venom inside Yusum's body won't disappear. He asks if Hakahun expects the venom to disappear as soon as he dies, questioning if the boy is willing to gamble on, asking if he's willing to risk her life, or if he'd rather let her live and save Yusum. He starts putting a lot of pressure on the boy, but the protagonist says he'll just speak to Hakahun, telling him not to let him enter his mind. He's surprised when Suyun walks towards him, stepping on the venom. Both Hakahun and Sung think that's a good thing, and he takes advantage of it to try. The protagonist is controlled by the poison rising up the boy's body, and the poison enters, rising to his head and trying to penetrate his body. Sung asks if he's crazy for stepping in his own poison, saying that even though he's strong, as they say, his poison still has no cure. But then the protagonist's sacred power is demonstrated, and Jung is left with a beautiful, embarrassed look on his face. The protagonist purifies the poison, undoing all of it. Hakahun can't believe it, as the poison has been completely cured. He says he can feel his mana being replenished too, and it's the same as what he felt a moment ago. The protagonist says that the poison doesn't work on, and he talks about the Charles clan's treasure and the reward for the second floor trial. If you manage to reach stage 10, completing 100%, it's an item that heals all wounds and removes debuffs, but the item can only be 5. He used it for the first time when he was on the 10th floor of the Tower of Trial, and again on the 10th, 5th, and another when he healed Hakahun, and just used it to cure himself of the poison. So that's a total of 4 times, and the last use is in Hakahun's hand, throwing it to him, and the boy is surprised by Suryeon, remembering when Yosun said that everything will be alright, and that's why he's surprised, and the protagonist says that he will know better than him who to use that on, and the boy can only thanking him excessively. But then Jung continues calling Hakahun, trying get into his head again, cursing, but the protagonist grabs that snake by the neck, saying that he won't hold back anymore, and then Hakahun asks if he intends to kill him, because he is the master of one of the biggest guilds, and although people don't care if it were a fight between awakened beings, he questions how they would react killed him, saying that he has connections with very important, even though he's a famous rook, he'll still have to face the consequences, and the protagonist then wonders if, as he said, since he's responsible for the assassination of the master of one of the biggest guilds, he won't get away with it easily. But what if that master had a relationship with the infamous criminal organization, the Damp Guild? And so, Jung is once again surprised with a blank expression, and the protagonist says that he already did it, that he researches these two organizations, and he remembers when Juho told him that the timer was perfect. In fact, he already wanted to talk to the protagonist about something, and that's about the Aries Guild. He's sure it has some connections with the Damp Guild, but since the Damp Guild is based in other countries, they haven't yet managed to spread their influence there. To easily enter Korea, they chose the Aries Guild as a means to do so. Furthermore, using the skills and information network of the Aries Guild, they've been eliminating anyone who knows or suspects this relation. Right now, the Damp Guild is keeping an eye on Soren, and the protagonist begins to list his crime, as he was deceiving the guild member, committing horrible crime, working with the Damp Guild, killing innocent. He asks if he doesn't think he has enough reason to kill him right there and now, saying that he knows very well that they're already watching, and this is the perfect chance to eliminate anyone who shows up. Words, he's going to be your bait, but Jung tells him not to make him laugh, trying to hold the boy and use his power, saying he'll kill him right there and then. However, the protagonist loses patience and simply removes the poison with his own base, not wanting to know anymore, and the poison leaves his body without him having to do much. It just comes out, and Jung doesn't even believe it, because the poison doesn't work on it, and the protagonist says that what happened next was just a mere act, if the poison has no effect against his magical resistance. But there was something else he was curious about that famous poison of his, and wondering what would happen if he used it on himself. Jung, wondering what the boy is talking about, uses his characteristic poison transformation, poisoning Jung himself, and he starts coughing, saying that it hurts and hurts too much, trying to get the antidote he has. However, the protagonist just watches it. While he gets the antidote, he pulls his sword from his inventory, cuts Jung's hand in half, and now he only has two. He starts screaming, and the protagonist tells him not to even try to be clever, because he's sure he had fun deceiving people with that antidote, asking if he doesn't think he should feel the same pain they felt. He starts screaming as he sees his hand coming apart, and besides the pain of having his hand almost severed, he starts to feel the pain of the poison killing. He begs the protagonist to kill him quick, running away and simply going to the window, throwing himself off that floor. The protagonist thinks he's disgusting until the end, because it's too painful for him to bear, but still, he did this to the others without caring, saying that now he has truly summoned his phoenix, and throwing it out of the building, saying that everything that man achieved through his rotten meth will disappear from this world, and he uses the phoenix to completely destroy the building, demolishing it all at once. My friend, this protagonist is so bad at it, it's unbelievable. I thought the guy knew what to do, but was still a good person. Take that, he turned into Nightcrawler, just 3 fingers. What's that all about, man? Are you crazy? And after Rakajan goes to his girlfriend, she is able to heal herself because of the neck, so she even starts crying, and the boy gets all excited, jumping on her, saying he wouldn't have made it without help. And not only that, he says, I'm one of them, and he also received help from other people, and says that's why he'll stop regretting the past, and just as other people help, he'll help other people too. But then, she asks Rakajan if he remembers what she always tells him, telling him not to try to do everything alone, saying that she can't fight alongside, but he can rest assured that she'll encourage him the whole time. Meanwhile, Johoho is on a call with the protagonist, saying that everything is fine, that they haven't noticed any considerable change, and he says that Rakajan arrived safe and Yosung seems to be perfectly fine. However, the protagonist asks if he has anything to report, and so he thinks that now their good life begins, and that's what he wanted to tell them both, because they seem very happy. And on January 1st, 2023, the Aries Guild simply crumbled, and following for the next news, it is said that last night around 9 p.m., they received a report that the Aries Guild headquarters building, located in Gangnam, Seoul, collapsed. Although they confirmed that there were no accidents resulting from the incident, the body of the guild master, the awakened Jun Dong, was found at the base of the building, and the police are currently investigating. Meanwhile, Bonda Desong simply asks why he doesn't explain exactly what happened, speaking to So Hyun. So Hyun says he already told the story to Kim Do, and he only did what he considered necessary. Song then asks about this, saying that he not only invaded the guild headquarters, but also murdered its master, and then destroyed the building, saying that he committed a crime that some would consider a terrorist attack. However, he says that Jung used his abilities to blackmail and extort many people, and he is certain that he was aware of the crimes the Aries Guild was committing in the underworld. So he didn't react to anything, just watched from the sideline, saying that he believes he did something very useful for society, asking if they weren't a mess that needed dealing with, and he stayed quiet to the side. And Song says that he noticed something during an incident with Anya, saying that he's very good at making excuses, saying that he's just trying to say that he went too far. But then he gets to the main subject, talking about Damp, asking if he has any concrete evidence to support his claim, because even if Aries committed so many illegal acts, he questions what right the protagonist has to judge, asking if he's deluding himself that he's the true hero of people because they supported him during Anya. But Do-hee, standing there, is surprised by what the director is saying. The protagonist already shows a version of this whole hero thing, since he never asked for any of it, but he thinks things never change, and it seems cool, but also repetitive. Do-hee is surprised by what the protagonist is saying, and he mentions that there's one more thing people don't know about. He's as far removed from what one could consider a hero, risking his life to save the world, help. He wonders if he did all this out of pure philanthropy, and the more he thinks about it, the more he realizes that wasn't wasn't the case. He did it all because nobody else could. So he says that everything he's done so far has been following his instincts, and that's why they both should be very careful. Because he will do whatever he wants. Even the protagonist, who is trying to kill them both, is furious, his sweat dripping down his face. He laughs awkwardly, telling him to stop, that he doesn't need to act like that just because he made a joke about how cool the title of hero. He says it's not like he's being insulted or anything, but it will be difficult to let this case go. He says he can use the association to help, provided he accepts one condition. Everything that happened can be swept under the rug. However, the protagonist reveals that this condition is that he must be awakened by a contract with the association. Song questions how he knows, and the protagonist thinks it's too obvious. He says he was expecting ZBC as an advantage, to use him to do whatever he wants. The boy refuses, but Song asks him to wait a little longer, telling Soo Hyun that it's not as simple as it seems, because it doesn't change the fact that he committed a very serious crime. He asks if he understands this, saying that no matter how strong without the help of the guild or another awakened individual, he won't be able to do anything. But then the protagonist picks up the phone and plays a recording of someone saying that regarding civilian safety, the city of Niang has 600,000 citizens, and they are in danger. Song immediately recognizes the recording as his own, asking if this is the conversation he had with Lee Jo-ho. The protagonist then asks if he still remembers his attitude during the Niang incident, when he said it wouldn't be his responsibility. Song asks what he wants, and he says it's the awakened individual who killed the guild master of a large criminal syndicate versus the guild director, who couldn't care less about public safety. He questions who the public would hate more, saying he doesn't think he needs much more than the guild director, who can't even do his own job. Song gets furious, and the protagonist says he's trying to blackmail, and he has the right to do the same, saying that it's just a joke and he doesn't need to get angry. The old man gets so upset that I think his baldness is getting worse, and when the protagonist leaves, he keeps thinking about the old man, telling him keep it a secret. The protagonist wonders if he went too far, or rather, he says he just wanted to teach him a lesson because he doesn't believe he tried to but anyway, he thinks that ends everything, saying he prefers not to cause any problems, so he goes alone to the tower until everything calms down, and the title of hero comes back to his mind. He says that at one point, this title haunted, and he wanted to run away. Then he remembers his mother telling him to become a hero, but still, he remembers the people he saved, and also of the friends he helped, and the people he saved on the other planet. After all, he was the hero then, and also Hakahun's own hero, and the hero of each of those, and he says that if what he wants is to follow the path of a hero, then a hero is what he will be. And while the protagonist is figuring out what he will be in another piece, some people inside are very suspicious. Cave are talking, wondering if Jung died, and so they think that this is perfection, because they could no longer tolerate what he's doing. One of them asks if the woman is joking, since they just lost one of their tickets to Korea, but one of them says it doesn't matter, and even without him, it doesn't change their plan. They talk about Hyun, saying he's becoming a pain in the neck, but one of them asks if it's true that he went to the tower. Then the servant there says it's true, saying that was his last confirmed location. So they send a surveillance team, telling them to report back when he returned, and after that, he simply throws a dagger at the protagonist's photo, saying they'll deal with it. Sure, definitely. I want to see that in the next chapter. I'm sure some heads will roll. I really enjoyed recording it. That's it. I hope you enjoyed watching it too, because I want to continue, and apparently, this was only the second season, or the first, I'm not really sure, but I want to continue because the story is getting much better. The badass bloodthirst protagonist is absurd. I wasn't expecting that, but I'll definitely see you in the next video, and also rest assured that there's a lot of good stuff coming. I'm going to present 2 new projects that you'll really like. You won't regret waiting, and I'll see you in the next video. I went.